Interlude, Confession. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. As soon as Izuku got out of the auditorium, he immediately went to the terrace of the school building. When he got there, he took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and sat down while leaning on a nearby wall. After a few minutes, he opened his eyes and stared at his hands. His mind was still stuck on the events that transpired during the last episode. The image of his mother hanging by the rope still lingered in front of his eyes. Then a self-deprecating chuckle escaped from his mouth as he remembered how he left his mom to die despite having the power to save her. Some son I am, he thought. Tears started to form in his eyes as he shoved his head into his hands, and the self-deprecating chuckle from earlier turned into sobs. As he was sobbing, he heard a gentle voice calling him, Izuku. He looked up and saw Ochako looking at him with worried eyes. Are you all right? Izuku fanatically rubbed his eyes and stood up. Yeah, don't worry about me. He rubbed his face. Sorry, I must be wasting everyone's time. As Izuku was about to leave, Ochako grabbed his hand. Izuku, please don't, she said with a heavy emotion in her voice. I am not Eri. You don't have to act like you are an unbeatable superhero in front of me. What are you? The words died in his mouth when Ochako suddenly hugged him. It's okay, you can let it out, she said while rubbing his back. You don't have to pretend anything in front of me, you know. You can just be Izuku in front of me. After that, a comfortable silence lingered between both of them for a few minutes. Then slowly Ochako felt Izuku's hands wrapping around her tightly as he buried his face in her neck while sobbing. I left her, to die, Izuku said in between sobbing. I am not a hero, Ochako, I am not a hero. Izuku, you and Verdant are different people, she said, trying to sound as gentle as she could. He and you are living different lives. His decisions do not reflect on you. Besides, it is easy to judge someone from the outside, but only Verdant knows what he is going through at that time. Do you understand? Izuku hummed. And remember this, Ochako broke their hug and cupped his face in her hands. You are a hero. To me, to Eri, and to anyone you have saved in your entire life. Again there was silence for a while as they just stays like that until Izuku broke the silence. Ochako. Ochako asked, I noticed you are not calling me Deku anymore, why is that? Izuku asked while Ochako noticed a hint of fear and uncertainty in his voice. I called you Deku because I didn't know what that meant back then, but now I know the history behind that name, so I don't want to call you that anymore, Ochako explained. But you changed the meaning behind that name, Izuku protested. Ochako shook her head and said, that doesn't erase your history with that name. And do you think I never noticed how every now and then you flinch when someone calls you by that name? Izuku looked down. I didn't even notice. Don't worry, Izuku, from now on we will make sure that you will never feel like that ever again, Ochako said. Zuku. Izuku raised his brow. I thought we will need a new nickname now that we are not calling you Deku anymore, Ochako said. But seriously, Zuku? Izuku rolled his eyes. You are so creative. They stared at each other for a moment until they started laughing. Once they both calmed down, Ochako noticed that Izuku was looking at her with a different look in his eyes. What are you looking at? Ochako asked, hoping to make him flustered, but this time it backfired big time. Nothing actually. I was just thinking how beautiful you are, Izuku said. Huh? Ochako's face turned red as she stared at Izuku to check if he really just said that. I know I am saying this out of nowhere, but I am tired of getting flustered around you. I am tired of beating around the bush, and I am tired of fighting against these feelings I have for you. Then Izuku took her hands in his and said, Ochako, I like you. I like you from the very first time you saved me from falling before the entrance exam. Ochako was stunned and flustered. All she wanted to do right now was to run to the dorms and hide under her blanket. But she knew that if she did that right now, she will never be able to gather enough courage to talk to him ever again. That's why she decided to let go of her embarrassment and convey her feeling toward Izuku as well. Meanwhile, Izuku was still talking, and I understand if you want to reject me. Of course, why would you want to be with someone like Izuku's confession suddenly came to a halt when he felt a soft sensation on his lips. That's when he realized that Ochako was kissing him. His first kiss. His mind was working in overdrive until he realized he was wasting this moment. So he calmed himself down, placed his arm around Ochako's waist, and returned the kiss. After a few minutes, they separated and stared into each other's eyes. So are we like, you and me? Izuku asked. Yeah, Ochako said with a dopey smile, I think we should go back now. As they started going back, Izuku thought of holding her hand when he heard a woman's voice, do it ninth. Huh? Izuku looked around. What happened, Zuzu? Ochako asked. Nothing, Izuku said and held her hand. She looked surprised for a moment but still smiled at him. A few moments later they returned back to the auditorium and also received some teasing smiles from their friends when they saw them holding hands. "Hey Ochako, I need to talk to Aizawa-sensei for a moment, I will be back," Izuku said. "Don't worry, I will go and explain to Eri about your new nickname," Ochako said as she returned to her seat where Eri was playing with Tsu. Izuku approached Aizawa and said, "Sensei, I want to change my hero name." "Why?" Aizawa asked, directly going to the topic's heart. "When I took this nickname as my hero name I thought that I will turn this derogatory term into something inspirational, but Ochako made me realize that even if that name has changed its meaning for me it is still a bad name for me to associate with and it can be bad for my mental health if everyone called me that on daily basis," Izuku explained. Aizawa thought for a moment and nodded his head, "Very well. Since you are still in your first year, changing your hero name won't be a problem. Meet me tomorrow so that we can finish the necessary paperwork." "Thank you," Izuku said with a bow. "So young Izuku, have you decided what your new name would be?" All Might asked. Izuku smiled at him, "Yep. The name I am going to choose is something that I want to become for people who are trapped in this society's darkness. That's why I will be a hero of hope, licked. To be continued. Chapter end notes. Had some free time so wrote this short interlude. By the way, I am still writing reactions. Whenever I have time. Thank you, smiley face. Advancing plans and growing. Narrator Gray. Izuku sat back at the main base as he was waiting for all of the Verdant guards and lieutenants to appear after they were done with all of their work. "Yeah right, work," Mirio grumbled under his breath. "Mirio, I think when Verdant said work he meant it," Izuku said, "besides, Verdant is not one of those people who will sugarcoat the word murder." Izuku was watching the TV and it was talking about how the Verdant had saved the innocent Inko Midoriya and dealt with the vicious Hero Commission president and some of the National Diet that had approved the disturbing public execution. "Must be one of those sellout media houses owned by Verdant," Night-Eye said. "Yeah, you are right," Nijire said with sarcasm laid in her voice, because normal media was going to appreciate Commission for murdering an innocent woman on live television. Now, most of the news that was reporting it like that was owned by Izuku while the others weren't as hard. They didn't exactly fault Izuku or the Verdant for what they did. "See, even others understand how evil that was," Nijire said. Though they were all talking about the ramifications of Verdant taking over the National Diet building. There was now a large amount of police and heroes surrounding the building by the order of the government. There was also an increasing presence of the JSDF or Japanese Self-Defense Force which dealt with any hostile threats that attacked the country or wanted to attack the country. "Can't say I am surprised," Nezu said, "because of the Commission's stupid decision Verdant now has control over such an important building of our nation. To think they already got involved isn't surprising. I didn't want to take such a large step this soon but we got to do it now regardless." Izuku thought. "Right, when we took over the National Diet building we just announced to the world that this is not a drill and we are here to take over the country," Izuku said. He was at least glad that they had twice so they didn't have to waste actual human resources on the guarding of the National Diet building. All the people there were clones and a few clones of Twice and Dabi to control the building. "Guys, I just realized something interesting," Kaminari said. "What if Twice made a bunch of clones of himself and then all of those clones made clones of Ectoplasm Sensei, and then those clones can make more clones using his quirk?" After a bit of silence, Ectoplasm spoke, "That does sound interesting, and terrifying. You know Kaminari, if you used even a little bit of that brain power while studying you can easily glide through the exams," Momo said. The news was also heated about the UA traitor problem. "Of course, it is," Aizawa rolled his eyes. "I will be more surprised if they didn't jump on any opportunity to slender U's name." Based on what the spy network was reporting from the bugs, Mineta had been detained and questioned. The truth came out that he indeed was the mole in UA and indeed lied about Inko Midoriya. So he really was a traitor, huh? Kaminari sighed. He was the only one from their class who was somewhat of a friend to that guy. In a way, he pitied that guy because Kaminari always thought that he would have been treated just like Mineta if he didn't have his somewhat good looks and a strong quirk to support that. It turned out he learned the name from Bakugo when he saw Izuku on the TV at Kamino Ward. Izuku knew that was the likely answer but he was glad to have confirmation now. "I really don't want to be in Mineta's shoes right now," Siro said. Mineta was still being held in UA since they didn't know what to do with him. If they threw him out the gates it was certain that Mineta would die at Izuku's hands and UA and the heroes were having a hard time justifying knowingly sending someone to their death while others stated that he was no longer a student but a villain so he should just be given to the police and if anything happens it would no longer be their fault. "Oh. I love democracy," Dabi said which got him some weird looks from the audience. Well, putting his weird comment aside, Stain said while Dabi made an offending sound in the background, "You heroes will go to any length to protect one of yours. You are wrong, Aizawa said, we heroes will never send someone to their death, doesn't matter if that person is a hero or not. Izuku just shook his head at UA's stance right now. They were trying to protect their neutrality but also trying to figure out how to not send a person to their death. Izuku didn't blame them in the slightest for how they found the situation complex to solve, but Izuku didn't care. Mineta would die one way or another. So now this so-called emperor is ready to murder a child, Night said, this only shows why a 16-year-old unstable child shouldn't hold this much power. That applies to 38-year-old commissioned dogs as well, Bakugo said. Boy, watch your language, Night said while glaring at Bakugo. Be the change you want to see, Bakugo answered with a shit-eating grin. Meanwhile, Mina was looking at the exchange with a curious expression, so, no one is going to question how Bakugo knows about that guy's age. That's simple actually, Izuku said, Kaken is as much a hero nerd as I am. Really? Kirishima said and looked at Bakugo, but before he could say anything Bakugo said, shut it red hair, and looked away. While Kirishima was thinking he didn't call me shitty hair, and smiled knowing that Bakugo is trying to improve himself. As he came out of his thoughts he was greeted by all of his guards and lieutenants coming into the room and sitting down. Inko Midoriya was also in the room and Izuku didn't know how to feel about involving his mother in all of this. Mother. I don't know how I feel about involving you in all of this, you were never meant to get your hands dirty for my goals. Izuku stated with a tense expression. Izuku sighed in defeat as looked at Verdant with sad eyes. He knew what was he going through right now. This was the same thing Izuku felt when All Might told him about the real truth behind One for All the day before he decided to tell his mom the secret behind his quirk. 200-year-old legacy, quirk-stealing demon, and only God knew what more dangers were tied to this quirk. And that changed his mind. He knew that the Inko Midoriya was a strong woman but her heart was equally fragile when it comes to Izuku. What scared him the most was the odd chance that his mother will ask him to return his quirk or will lash out at All Might for giving him the quirk. And for him, both were equally bad outcomes. She shook her head and scolded him. Sweetie shush. I am a part of this now and it's the government's fault when they tried to execute me for a bullshit reason. I could understand if they imprisoned me but to execute me went too far. Inko said. Well, so much for being an innocent woman, Night said, that makes you question. Was she a non-accomplice in the first place? She knew he was a criminal. She knew he was going to do something like that and despite that, she still did not warn the authorities. Night continued ignoring his student who was asking him to quiet down, so can you really fault Commission 4 dash? Night, a cold voice echoed in the auditorium. When Night looked at the source of the voice he saw Izuku glaring at him. I don't give a shit about what you say or think about me or if you find me worthy of All Might's legacy or not, but if you talk anything bad about my mother you will cross that safe line. Or what? Night gulped and asked. I thought you can see the future, Izuku said with a cruel smile, or maybe one cannot see past their demise. That's enough, All Might said as he stood between them. Young Midoriya, I know you are angry but please don't do anything stupid, not until I teach you how to hide a body. There was a pin-drop silence in the auditorium until Yagi started laughing awkwardly. I was just kidding, yeah it was a little harmless joke. Meanwhile, Izuku shook his fondly on his mentor's antics and went back to his seat. That was really hot you know, Uraraka said with a teasing smile, I never knew you had the confidence to threaten a pro-hero on his face. Maybe it was the magic of your kiss, Izuku whispered to her with his own teasing grin. Ochako's face went red but as competitive as she was, she didn't want to lose this battle. In that case, you might just take over the world when we do other things. As soon as she said that they heard Jiro spit out a handful of water. Oops. Ochako said as she realized what just happened and stared at the screen. Izuku just pouted a bit at being scolded in front of his men but let it go. Yep. Living up to your name, Tiny Emperor, Himiko said with a giggle. Anyway, it's time to start this meeting. First, thank you for saving my mother. Second, this screws our plans but we can adjust to fit the new direction. I was at first planning to slowly come out of the shadows to demoralize the hero's side and the government but we will speed that up. I think the government and commission are helping him quite well on that front, Nezu said. I also want to increase our influence across all of Japan and to bring all crime gangs and criminals that meet our preset rules under our control. I want to bring crime to a near standstill. This will also provide us with more people for the war since I don't want random civilians having to stain their hands for this war. Their public support is enough for me. Izuku stated and everyone nodded their heads. See Mirio, he is actively trying to reduce the civilian casualties, Nijire said. But that won't help people who will die in the crossfire, Mirio countered. I don't know what to say to you anymore, Nijire sighed. I am not saying that Verdant is completely in the right but you and your mentor are refusing to see the good in him as well. Soon they started to talk about where they would start expanding. As it stood, Izuku controlled everything in the light blue area and the purple area on the map. Izuku wanted everything in the light green under his control since that is where the seat of government and UA were also at. Wow! That's almost 1/3 of the nation, Momo said, that too when Verdant hasn't even started actually expanding. This also meant that if they gained control of everything in green then they would have more than half of the criminal world under their control. As it stood, their organization force currently stood at 800,000 members. 390,000 of that 800,000 was combat capable. After taking control of the green area they would be pushing their member count near 1 million members most likely, and this didn't count any normal civilians that publicly supported them either. Even then, they are still not considering twice into that mix, Aizawa said. He can increase their numbers by 50,000 all by himself. Izuku then decided on what to do. Starting in the purple area. Start having the prefectures come under our control completely and public control. Force the surrender of the leaders of each individual prefecture. Don't appear in the light blue area since I want them to suspect that it isn't under our control yet. We will make it seem like we are operating out of that area and slowly advance outwards. Also, we will publicly set up a public display base in Osaka. The Osaka castle will become the first public founding location. Izuku stated, and everyone talked about how to go about taking control of the areas and decided on advanced teams being deployed in every place with twice clones to duplicate a large army for each prefecture. But why Osaka Castle? Kaminari asked. I mean, why are they trying to take over an old castle when they can easily take over something like Might Tower? Because our country firmly believes in honor and tradition, Nezu explained. I agree that taking over Might Tower might be more advantageous for them, but capturing the Osaka Castle, which was built as a display of power and grandeur, is more of a symbolic gesture. By doing that they are showing the world their power as well as making a statement that they are here to rule this nation by taking over the previous ruler's castle. Remember, limit the number of deaths if you can, but anyone that resists is open to be killed if you can't capture them, Izuku stated, and they all nodded their heads. Mirio frowned upon hearing the Verdant's orders. He didn't like the way Midori, Verdant ordered his people to kill someone without even changing his expression. It almost felt like he is listening to villains' debriefs. As such, this is how the advancement of the plans began, because within 5 hours of the meeting the news broke about the actions of the Verdant group. Just under 5 hours, Mike said, they move a little too fast, don't you think, Shota? I don't think so, Aizawa said, they have the right people for the right work, teleports, and a solid plan. I would say they are moving appropriately. The news broke and showed the Verdant symbol being unraveled across the Osaka castle walls. Zuzu, look, it's dragon. Eri cheered. Yeah, it is, Izuku chuckled. Why both? Eri's excitement and the new nickname. The symbol that Izuku had taken to use was straightforward. It was a green dragon. The green represented the Verdant while the dragon represented life, death, and rebirth. It was the symbol of the Verdant rebirth of the Verdant Revolution to take control of Japan. I can't wait to tell Ryuko about this, Nijire said. She really loves when someone praises dragons. But this is an Eastern dragon, and she turns into a Western one, Tamaki pointed out. Yeah, tomato, it's the same thing, Nijire said. The news was reporting that the symbol was being seen across the entire Osaka prefecture, and a public statement was received from the prefecture office announcing their surrender to the Verdant Emperor and the Verdant organization. And thus the official conquering begins, Izuku thought to himself. Camera crews and helicopters were in the city within the hour, and you could see some destruction where the Verdant group had to fight heroes, police, and some military forces. The death count was still being reported, but as it stood 1,000 people from the government side died with only 50 civilian casualties which actually weren't caused by the Verdant side at all. Izuku sighed sadly for the dead people and prayed for their souls in his mind. As the cameras viewed the city, it showed that the Verdant members were helping people get out of any destruction that was caused and was setting up aid stations. Verdant protect, Verdant attack, but most importantly they save people's lives, Himiko cheered. Then, as the news channels reported, that another breaking news happened that came from UA Hero School. They announced the results of their investigation into Mineta and were able to confirm the information provided by the Verdant Emperor Izuku Midoriya. Now that even Nezu confirmed it, there is no doubt about it, Naomasa said. Now let's see how he decides to handle this. The screen changed to Nezu at a podium where he started to speak. As of 8 p.m. today we concluded the investigation into Mr. Mineta, where we discovered that the information provided by the Verdant Emperor was indeed correct and true. Mr. Mineta was indeed the UA traitor who helped the disbanded League of Villains and all for one break into the USJ and block the emergency signals with a device provided by the League which prevented our systems from alerting heroes of the attack. He is also responsible for leaking the location of the 1A and 1B summer camp that allowed the League to assault our students and teachers. Nezu stated. It really saddens me to think that one of our fellow students will do such a thing, Ida said. You are not the only one, Ida, we all feel the same, Izuku added. Then reporters broke out into questions and someone asked about the accusations regarding Mr. Mineta and how he framed Inko Midoriya. Nezu took a drink of water and started to speak again. As it stands, we can confirm that the accusations are true. Mr. Mineta confessed that he only wanted a reward from the government and told false accusations since he heard the name Izuku Midoriya from a former childhood friend of Izuku Midoriya who is in Class 1A. This student spoke the name of the Verdant Emperor when he had a breakdown when he saw Izuku Midoriya on the TV at the Kamino Ward incident. It was there that Mr. Mineta learned the Midoriya name and how he found out about Inko Midoriya, who he falsely accused of working with her son even though it was untrue. Bakugo angrily stomped his foot on the ground. He was really pissed that the bald fucker used his moment of vulnerability to harm someone innocent, to harm someone who was like a mother to him. This means that the government attempted to put an innocent woman to death and UA hereby condemns these actions, though the former president of the commission now lays dead and can't face charges since she invoked the wrath of the Verdant Emperor, Nezu stated, that made everyone break out in chaos that UA had just condemned the government for what they did. Great, just great, Night-Eye gritted his teeth. Nezu, you don't understand, do you? You do not understand how big of a threat that boy is to your school and to the hero society itself. Oh Night-Eye, you and your sense of humor, Nezu chuckled. Very well, you will see my point when you will see your students dying to him, Night-Eye said. Someone asked what would happen to Mr. Mineta and Nezu said he was transferred to the police. It was right at that time that the news broke that the police convoy had been hit and a Mr. Mineta was taken away by the Verdant group. The screen then cut back to Nezu, who had just been told. Nezu excused himself from the stage and left. So you decided to abandon him? Mirio asked, shock written on his face, but you said heroes protect people. Yes, but sometimes you have to choose between the two options, Aizawa said, and at this time we couldn't risk keeping Mineta on the school campus. Izuku had the spy network keep track of Nezu's movements to ensure he didn't get suspicious of being spied on since the group had attacked the convoy. It is really strange that Nezu still hasn't figured out about our spies, Izuku said. I don't think even I am capable of suspecting bugs would be spying on us, Nezu chuckled. Izuku then ran over to the teleportation room waiting for them to bring Mr. Mineta to him. Within about 10 minutes they had brought him in and Izuku had a wide grin on his face. Well, hello there. Izuku yelled out as he moved forward and just put a bullet in the kid's head. Everyone shut their eyes tightly. Even though he was a traitor, they would never want to see a kid getting shot in the head. Now that makes me feel better. I would have likely wanted to cause him a lot of pain, but I got more important things to deal with, Izuku said as he turned around and left. Dabi and Mr. Compress were shocked but shrugged since Izuku was right. They indeed had more important things to get to work on. Huh? Just like that? Kaminari asked. I thought it would be a little more dramatic. I mean, as he said, don't have time to play this revenge game, Izuku shrugged. A week passed and the news kept reporting non-stop on the Verdant issue. Izuku's group had solidified their control over Osaka and had expanded their public display into Wakayama by that Friday. Great! Now they are picking up cities like grocery, Mina said. The news was allowed into the Verdant-controlled areas with no issues since they had nothing to hide. The news reported that the everyday life of the citizens had gone uninterrupted for the most part, as there were Verdant members walking out in broad daylight but weren't causing anyone issues, nor was anyone stopped like the media. The news was showing everyone that life didn't drastically change from these prefectures being taken over. So he using the carrot and stick approach, Hound Dog said. He showed the stick to the government who was showing resistance to him, and now he is showing the carrot to people to bring them to his side. Suddenly Kaminari snickered and said, just imagine what would happen if his underlings misunderstood the plan and destroyed an entire nation just to make an example out of it. Dude, Zero looked at him with a serious expression. That's messed up. Yeah, sorry, Kaminari said, rubbing the back of his head. They even started to ask people questions about what was going on in their cities. Overall, I think things have gotten better. I haven't been hearing about any crimes going on, and I've even asked police officers how it's changed for them, and they still work as they did before. As long as they don't try to stop the Verdant members, they allow the police to still conduct business like normal. They have even gotten more resources from the Verdant since the Verdant group had publicly stated they plan to abolish the heroes and return criminal and law enforcement to the police fully. Stated one person. That doesn't sound bad at all, Nijire said. What are you talking about? He is going to abolish the hero system, Mirio said. If that happens, who will help people in need? Nijire gave him a "are you serious?" look and said, cops, duh. But they don't have permission to use their quirks, Mirio countered. Then they will get permission to use it, Nijire shrugged. Besides, I don't see a problem in this. Who cares what are we called as long as we get to help people? No, it's not the same, Mirio mumbled under his breath. The news reporter just kept asking multiple people questions. I've heard about some law changes that will be enacted soon from some police. The Verdant Group is going to have quirk licenses sold via the police department. If you want to use your quirk in your daily life, you would apply for the permit and just show it if you were ever stopped by an officer or Verdant member. Of course, I've heard some talk that there are rules like always. You can't use your quirk on others for ill intent and the typical common sense things, but I intend to get a quirk permit. My quirk allows me to speed myself up slightly and it would be nice to get to places quicker every day, stated one lady that was asked how she felt under the Verdant control. This is really a great idea, Ochako said. With this, I could have helped my family much earlier. Overall, there was nothing negative said about living under the Verdant control. Maybe they are afraid to speak the truth, Night Eye said. Now you are just pushing your luck, All Might said. Some did mention that they wish it didn't have to come via violence, but they could see where the Verdant Group was coming from, and some expressed their support to overthrow the government, which earned laughs from Izuku. Green, you are enjoying this little too much, Jiro said with a teasing grin, while Izuku just shrugged with a smile. Izuku just now needed to wait to get more control of all the crime underworld in the other prefectures, and they would also slowly reveal their control of the other prefectures as they would take control publicly. Though Izuku knew he would get more resistance the further he went, since the government was caught by surprise when they took Osaka over. Yeah, this is just the beginning, Stain said. The real fight will be for cities like Tokoyo, which has more influence. The death reports out of Wakayama had come in and there were about 5,000 dead on the government side, with around 200 civilians dead this time. They also suffered a few deaths as well, since Izuku had the actual members present in each prefecture, so the clones could be directly made off them. One group got hit by a hero who took out 10 of their members, which displeased Izuku, but he knew he would start losing members. The smile on Izuku's face disappeared as heard about the news. He knew it was inevitable to not lose anyone, but it still stuck to his consciousness since he was the leader. So far, the death count was at 6,000 movement side, 250 civilians, and 10 Verdant. Izuku hated how the number has already hit the thousands, with only 2 prefectures being under his control, and knew that number would likely grow into the hundreds of thousands by the end of the war. Then stop, Mirio grumbled. You know, Mirio, even if we surrendered right now, there is a high chance that all of my people and anyone who supported us will get killed, Izuku explained. Mirio wanted to say something, but he didn't have an answer. Though he also noticed that Izuku was not using senpai in front of his name anymore. God, forgive me for the deaths, but I must do this. The corruption must end. Izuku said as he prayed for the least amounts of deaths possible. Some people in the audience did the same. Soon it was time for sleep, as Izuku had been swamped with a lot of work. Then the screen turned black and the words appeared on the screen. EP.3 Advancing Plans and Growing. To be continued. Reactions. Narrator, Gray. The heroes of UA were all sitting in the auditorium of UA with all of the students. For those that had provisional licenses and those that didn't have them, each and every single student was in the room with the staff. I guess you are going to address the fact that some students might get dragged into the war, Aizawa said as he glanced toward Nezu. Nezu said while rubbing his chin, that seems to be the case. The reason was due to the recent events over the past week and a half. There was the Kamino incident where All Might came to an end and Yagi Torisanri was revealed. A man behind a symbol, Izuku absent-mindedly muttered those words. There was the rise of the Verdant Emperor and his men. There was their declaration of war. There was a declaration from the government suspending due process for almost anyone that supported the group. The declaration of execution for Inko Midoriya. The failed execution of Inko Midoriya. The fall of the National Diet Building. The conquering of Osaka. The reveal of the UA traitor and his death. The conquering of Wakayama. All of these were shocking events that happened back to back within a span of a week and a half. Wow. That looks like the most happening week of our entire lives, Mina said. If this is what happening looks like, then I would rather live a silent and peaceful life, Jiro grimaced while pitying her other self. As such, the staff felt it was needed for a school body meeting to happen and for the students to ask any questions that they wanted to ask. A good call on our part, How Dog said. We definitely should clear some things with students before things get even more complicated than they already are. The questions ranged from if they were safe or if they should leave UA to ensure that they weren't targeted for being associated with the school. That's stupid, Himiko said. We clearly said that we are not going to target any schools during our Kamino speech. The same speech where we announced the war on the government, Izuku grimaced. Yeah, I don't think I can blame them for feeling unsafe. Nezu spoke up and calmed everyone down. Now please calm down so we can talk and hear everything. An ectoplasm clone will come around and hand Amic out if you're picked to ask the question, but I will start with what we know so far so it might cover some information you might want to know. Nezu stated and started to speak. I must say, you are really good at calming down the children, Hawk said. I find dealing with children quite difficult when I am on patrol. Agreed, Endeavor added, they are quite a nuisance in emergency situations. Can you really blame them though? Look at your face, sometimes I wonder how you don't scare yourself when you look in the mirror, Dabi said while Shoto nodded in the background. You can skip the next 2 paragraphs as they are recaps. As it stands we know the following about the Verdant Emperor and his Verdant group. His name is Izuku Midoriya, born near here in the Shizuoka prefecture. He was born to Inko Midoriya and Hisashi Midoriya. Nothing is really known of Hisashi Midoriya at this time since the man left the picture when Izuku Midoriya was declared quirkless at the age of 4. From there and from what we can gather, Izuku Midoriya suffered relentless discrimination and physical violence at the hands of his classmates and severe neglect at the hands of teachers. The only person that showed love and care for Izuku Midoriya was his mother Inko Midoriya. He suffered through this life for a decade before the final last day when he met All Might after a villain attack. Izuku Midoriya asked All Might if he could be a hero while being quirkless and was told no. It's our belief that this set the stage for what he did next. Nezu said and paused to take a drink of water and then started talking again. He was left on a roof after being told no and soon left it and found himself at the villain attack of the sludge incident where some of you might remember one Akatsuki Bakugo was involved in and held hostage. Izuku Midoriya got involved and bought some time to save him before All Might arrived and saved the day again. Izuku was then scolded by all of the heroes on site for rushing in when none of them did anything, to begin with. Izuku then left and was found again by All Might who attempted to correct his statement but, it was too late. Izuku Midoriya's heroic drive to be a hero had been destroyed due to All Might and the previous hero's actions. This boy kept himself going for 10 years in the hope of All Might's word that anyone could be a hero and then was crushed one final time before he set off and started planning. He faked his death which caused everyone to stop looking for him after 1 month. Since Quirkist views. The police dropped it since Quirkist officers didn't want to look for a quirkless child who was likely dead. This allowed him to operate undetected this entire time until the Verdant group started to show themselves with all of the attacks on UA where they prevented them from succeeding. They were building up to the final showdown between All Might and All for One where they had the world's attention due to the fight and announced their presence to the entire world. We don't have much information on their group at all nor their current membership numbers but we expect in the several thousand. We also have the issue of one of the Verdant guards, who are what we assume the most loyal and strongest members of the organization, has a cloning quirk that allows them to clone their own members which increases their numbers and stops us from getting accurate membership counts. Any questions based on all of this information? Nezu asked. Again, sorry for the wall of text but the 2 paragraphs are the recap of the story so far and there isn't anything new in that. Once again everyone was reminded that how and why Verdant was born. Everyone was silent but one person raised their hand. It was Uraraka. Ectoplasm moved over and gave her the mic. Of course, you are the first one to raise your hand, Izuku giggled. Well, they are talking about my boyfriend, Ochako smirked as well, so I do have some questions to ask. We are not together in that universe, Izuku argued but Ochako shook her head. For now, she said, I know I will find a way to make you mine, she smirked while Izuku just showed her a fond smile. Meanwhile, Himiko who was sitting next to them averted her eyes. She didn't know why but she just felt a weird emotion in her heart just now. Sir, sorry if this seems rude or not but how the fuck does our current society operate like that? The more I hear about them the more I feel my insides twist because I want to support them even though I'm on the hero's side. Uraraka stated. You know, sometimes we really forget that Ochako has an active volcano inside that cheery and cute exterior of her, Mina said. Nezu nodded his head at that question. That is a fair question. Humans are cruel. Humans are cruel to their own kind and those that they deemed weak. Some societies are far better than us in these matters but as the Verdant Emperor has pointed out we have been stuck for 200 years since our laws haven't changed. This allowed so much to happen and people to go unpunished that it became normal until people like Verdant Emperor were born and rebelled against the system. Nezu stated. Everyone was muttering things but soon quieted down. You know what, now I understand why Commission doesn't want you to lead this school anymore, Knight I said, you are blatantly telling the future generation of heroes that the laws they are told to withhold are wrong. And that is what we call anti-nationalism. I don't know what are you talking about, Nezu said. I think I am doing a service to my nation by pointing out the things that are troubling that nation's people. Nezu fielded more and more questions until one came up from Bakugo Katsuki. This question is for All Might if I may? He asked, and Nezu turned to the former hero who stood up and walked to the mic near Nezu. What do you think Bakugo wants to ask? Kirishima asked. Honestly, it can be anything, Mina said. I mean, all of this must be very taxing and hectic for someone in his shoes. Yes, young Bakugo. All Might asked. Do you think the government should surrender? Do you think society has gone so far that it needs to change leadership? I know Izuku from my childhood. I am one of the people that harmed him as well and tried to break his spirits and never succeeded. I won't deny that, and I can tell you right now he won't stop. He won't stop until society changes and the old government is out, or he and his men are all dead. Bakugo said. And that kind of resolve is what changes the society, Stain said. Everyone's eyes widened at his confession. Even his own class has been trying to get answers out of him the entire week or so, and he's never said a word. He's kept silent the entire week until now, and now they just found out what he did. Bakugo's throat dried up as he realized that the only reason his other classmates didn't outright demand to throw him out of the school when his and Izuku's past was revealed was because of the life-and-death situations they have been through together. And he knew how righteous his classmates can get during this kind of situation. You might be wondering what kind of monster I am. I can tell you. I am the monster society made me because in our school they never told me no. They encouraged what was done to Izuku Midoriya, and honestly, I can't blame him for doing all of this. I didn't start learning what I did was wrong until coming to UA, where Aizawa-sensei would reprimand me for my actions. This is society's actions that have led to this, so I ask you again. Do you think the government should surrender? Do you think society has gone so far that it needs to change leadership? Bakugo asked, and he waited for his answer. Izuku's eyes went wide as he saw Bakugo, the Bakugo admitting his own mistakes without anyone forcing him to do so. All Might was still in shock at what he learned and didn't know what to say. That was until Nezu snapped him out of his thoughts and he realized everyone was looking at him. All Might looked at his counterpart with pitying eyes. He knew that the other version of him wasn't even close to young Midoriya, but he still managed to become part of his origin somehow. I don't know. I honestly don't. Up to the day of the battle, I had a firm belief in this society that I was protecting. That I was a symbol of peace and people were happy. I knew there would always be someone unhappy or being wronged, but I didn't realize how big the issue I was blind to was. However, I can tell you this. My belief in this society was indeed shaken by Izuku Midoriya. He now has me questioning everything. So I don't know. I don't know what will happen when he has complete control of the nation, but I do know that no matter who wins the war, we can't go back to what we were before. We need to change for the better, or more Izuku Midoriyas will keep appearing and throw our society into chaos until we get to the point that they are no longer born due to our own actions. All Might stated, and Bakugo nodded his head as the man returned to his seat. No, Toshi, you got it wrong, Knight, I said. You are the only reason why we have this functional society. Even so, that doesn't solve the problems that we have seen until now, Toshinori said. Those are not problems but mere sacrifices some people make so that the bright ones can shine, Knight, I said, just like I sacrificed the prime of my career just to keep your name clean along with the symbol you carried with you. All Might was silent for a moment until he spoke. I am truly grateful for all the things you have done for me, but I think you shouldn't have. What? Knight, I asked with wide eyes, but All Might didn't elaborate any further and just sat down. As the questions kept going on, Nezu's phone vibrated. He pulled it out and his eyes widened. What now? Aizawa grumbled. He projected the news on the projector in the auditorium for everyone to see. The news was breaking as the military attempted to launch an assault on Osaka and Wakayama, and they had failed. 2,000 military members were slaughtered and 8,000 were captured. Though they would have to wait for the death count to come from the Verdant Group and independent or international reporters that have been following the death counts. Mirio once again clenched his fist upon hearing the number of casualties on the field. It also broke out that the prefecture of Hyogo had fallen to the Verdant as well. This meant that the group had more or less split the country in half and blocked the transportation of heroes, police, and military via land transportation. So the first step of the plan is complete, Izuku said. Huh? Momo asked curiously. Well, when I first time saw the map and the way Verdant was conquering the cities, I had guessed that he was trying to split the country in half, Izuku explained. If the government wanted to move forces from one side of the country to the other, they would need to do it via air or ship now due to the Verdant Group taking Hyogo. This would put a lot of pressure on the government, and it was only roughly 2 weeks since the Verdant Group had declared war and they had already taken 3 prefectures. What is the government even doing? Mina asked, like just in 3 weeks they have lost Diet Building, Osaka Castle and many more cities and all they did was to send a handful of soldiers just for the sake of formality. Maybe they are trying to find the scapegoats to pin the blame if they lost many more cities, Shinso said. However, some reports were talking about how the government had put more resources into the military attack that they had left Hyogo undermined which allowed the Verdant Group to launch the successful counterattack. Great! What a plan, Midnight said, makes me wonder how is our country still standing. Everyone in the room was in shock at the news they were seeing live. Nezu though was cursing the government for underestimating the Verdant Group so much and only sending that small of a military force. They should have sent at least 25,000 or more. We don't know their actual numbers so it's better to play on the safer side. Nezu thought as he gripped his phone. Maybe they are trying to show the world that they do not consider us a threat, Izuku said, like showing the indifference towards captured prefectures or sending just a few numbers of soldiers to retake the said cities. Seeing how Commission believes in fake it till you make it, what you said doesn't sound that far-fetched, Nezu said. Nezu was not liking the looks of things as they kept moving forward. The Verdant Group had taken 3 prefectures in 2 weeks and if they kept that rate up depending on resistance from the prefectures themselves then the Verdant Group could conquer all of Japan in less than 20 weeks or roughly half of a year. Yes. Let's conquer Japan as fast as we can so that we can celebrate at Ichiraku with victory ramen, Himiko said. Ichiraku? Izuku asked. Yeah, actually at my rehab there is this boy with a demon fox quirk who told me about this super famous and super old ramen shop, which is located in a small village just outside the city, Himiko explained. Sounds great, Izuku said, what do you say Ochako wanna go there? Do they have mochi? She asked. They might, Himiko shrugged. Okay then I am game, Ochako said. Then Nezu heard someone shout a question. Nezu turned around and then the mic for the student was turned on after ectoplasm gave it to the student. Sir, do you think the Verdant Emperor will honor his words when he said he won't touch the hero schools, or is there a risk that he will revoke that? Asked the second-year hero course student. Humph. Stain scowled, unlike you fake heroes, the boy knows how to honor his words. Nezu thought it over for a minute before speaking. At this time, I have no evidence to show or suspect that he would revoke his word on not touching the hero schools. As such, if you have a provisional license and don't want to be targeted I suggest you stay on campus moving forward. We can see how the Verdant Group waited until we removed Mr. Mineta from campus before attacking the police escort to retrieve him. It shows sadly that even if you anger them that they won't directly touch the school and wait until you leave. Though that is outside of the fact that we can't launch any operations from this campus. If we do then we lose that protection. Pathetic, Knight I said, the school filled with future heroes is dependent on some scum's mercy. However, let me make this clear. If the government loses the war then there will be no hero schools. Mario's heart clenched as he heard those words. If Verdant really won he will never become a hero. Verdant was going to take away his dream and he despised that from the bottom of his heart. I am unsure what will happen at that point since they have made it clear they will transfer policing power back to the police instead of the heroes. A theory I have is that they might create some sort of new hero system that is inside of the police that will have more restrictions and transparency to ensure more heroes like Endeavor don't happen. Nezu, I will really appreciate it if didn't use my name like that, Endeavor said. You should have thought about that before you did all of those things to your family, Nezu said, do you understand that Enji? Or should I punish you just like I did in your second year, remember that? A chill went down Endeavor's spine as he shook his head, no, I understand my mistake, Nezu-senpai. It's possible hero schools would be converted to include police academies to train people but it's unknown at this time, Nezu stated and that calmed the worried students down a bit of fearing an attack on the school. Honestly, I really like that idea, Naomasa said, makes my work easier by not having to wait for a hero to even lift a rock. Soon the meeting came to an end and Bakugo was told to report to the staff room. The staff wanted more answers about what he did and who Izuku Midoriya was before he became the Verdant Emperor. A hero nerd with a determination to save everyone with a smile no matter if he had a quirk or not, Bakugo thought. Then the screen turned black and the words appeared on the screen, EP.21 reactions. To be continued. Growth and Overhaul. Narrator, Gray. Several weeks have passed and the Verdant Group has been expanding their influence in the underworld and taking control of more prefectures without the public or government noticing. At this rate, Verdant will take over the country in no time, and the entire war will be just them publicly acquiring the prefectures, Aizawa said. The Verdant publicly controlled everything in purple while they controlled all of the light blue prefectures, the pink prefectures, and the following of the green prefectures, Kanagawa, Saitama, and Gunma in the underworld without publicly controlling them, since Izuku wanted to demoralize the heroes and government with a constant taking of prefectures to show that no matter what they did they didn't stand a chance at winning. Honestly, it feels like Verdant is playing chess while everyone is still trying to play tic-tac-toe. Momo giggled. Jokes aside, right now Verdant has captured enough land to forcefully bring the government to the negotiation table. But that would make things too easy, Midnight sighed, and wars never end this easily. The death count currently stood at 35,000 on the government side, and 200 people on the Verdant side, with 1,000 civilian deaths so far. The civilian count wasn't pleasing to Izuku, but he knew it would only rise. "I am sorry," were the only words that came to Izuku's mind as he placed a hand on his heart and prayed for their souls. The membership of the organization after taking control of all the villain and criminal organizations in these areas has risen from 800,000 members to 1,150,000 members. Their combat forces stood at 580,000 members, which now equaled the combined forces of the Japanese military forces, the heroes, and the police force all combined. They are really lucky that Verdant is taking it slow and capturing one prefecture at a time, otherwise an all-out war with this kind of forces on both sides would have definitely ruined our country no matter who won at the end of the war, Nezu said. Izuku was happy at that and knew that he still had a slight disadvantage against the military due to their advanced weapons. Nothing beats old-fashioned military weapons and guns. Izuku thought as he sat in his office deciding on the next move. Finally someone said it. Snipe said exasperatedly, "I am telling this to you guys for so long." Yeah, we get it," Vlad King rolled his eyes. Izuku in honesty wanted to gain control of the entire south side of Japan before pushing north, but he knew things don't always work in his favor, and right as he thought of that, Dabi knocked on his office door and came in with some disgusting news. Yep. Just as things were going smoothly something happened, Izuku said with a tired sigh, "Just my Izuku luck. We found a Yakuza that I want to wipe out. They can't be combined with us due to their sick crimes. They are experimenting on children, well rather, one child. A girl named Eri. From what we found out via the spy network is that the boss Overhaul is making quirk erasing bullets like we are," Dabi stated. "Now I understand why you said disgusting." Izuku narrowed his eyes at the screen, "and I agree, truly disgusting." Suddenly Izuku noticed that Eri, who was sitting on his lap, was curling into herself. So he gently patted her back and whispered in her ear, "We can go far walk outside if you want." Eri shook her head and said, "No, I am a brave girl and—" "It's all right," Izuku said as he ruffled her hair. "Do you want me to close your eyes when that man appears on the screen?" Eri nodded and hugged Izuku, who just patted her back. That made Izuku curse, since he didn't want anyone else getting their hands on that, since it would screw them up. The bullets provided them a good last measure of stopping a powerful individual on the government side's quirk, so they didn't lose many people. He is more concerned about losing an advantage and not because the little girl is getting tortured, Mirio thought and glared at the screen. "What do we know about their progress and current affairs?" Izuku asked Dabi. He started reading off anything they currently knew as it stood. "They haven't fully made the bullets yet. We've caught it in time. Their current ones only last for seconds and they plan for permanent versions. The biggest problem is they are using the girl as an ingredient in the bullets, unlike ours which is 100% artificial. They are using her blood since her quirk rewinds things out of existence. They are using her blood, which has some attributes of the quirk, to make the bullets," Dabi stated, and that made Izuku pissed off. "Honestly, no matter how many times I hear about this, it always makes me sick in my stomach," Ochako said. "You are not alone," Su added, "we all feel the same," Ribbit. Izuku told Dabi to continue talking and he did. "As it stands we could wipe them out quickly, but the problem is her quirk and its control. We need a way to help her control it, and the only real person that could help keep her under control is Eraserhead. We could use quirk erasing bullets, but, considering what she went through, is an issue on our side. She is heavily traumatized due to Overhaul, and the villain is being investigated by Sir Night Eye, who has no idea about Eri. Their investigation has been going on for about 5 months now," Dabi stated. "Come to think of it, it was the same in our world as well," Nijire said. "I remember Ryukyu telling me how Night Eye's agency had no idea that there was a girl involved until Mirio and Midoriya encountered her during their patrol. For someone who has a sight-based quirk, he misses quite a lot of things," Compress said, while many snickered in the background. Izuku groaned at Sir Night Eye being involved. "Fuck. I don't want him seeing the future, since he could try to screw us up or see our bases," Izuku said, and Dabi nodded his head at that. "Afraid of me now?" Night Eye smirked. "No, you are just annoying to deal with," Dabi said. "Agreed," Izuku and Bakugo added at the same time, while the scowl returned to Night Eye's face. This was a huge risk of getting involved, but Izuku wasn't about to leave the girl to get experimented on any more than she needed to be. Izuku sat there for a bit before telling Dabi to call a council meeting. Yeah, can't leave her with that man even if things get difficult for us in the future, Izuku said. About an hour later all of the council and Inko were present in the council meeting room. It seems you are taking a more active role in the organization, huh? Mitsuki said to her friend. I am already dragged into all of this, so helping him a little won't hurt me, Inko replied. Izuku was sitting at the head of the table and looked at everyone. Dabi has brought some disturbing news to me about a villain group we approached to absorb. They are called the Shai Hasaikai and are led by a villain known as Overhaul. Izuku gently placed a hand on Eri's back, who shuddered as she heard that name. He sees quirks as a disease that needs to be wiped out, and he is doing this by creating quirk erasing bullets, and he plans to make a permanent version. He currently has a version that lasts only a few seconds, but the problem outside of that is that he is using a little girl as the key ingredient due to her quirk. Izuku stated as he showed them all the information. Inko was horrified and she wanted the girl out of there as soon as possible. A motherly rage erupted in Inko's heart as she heard that information. She hadn't spent much time with little Eri, but she can definitely say that Eri saw Izuku as her big brother, and by that extension, she started seeing that little girl as her daughter. And she will be damned if she repeated the same mistakes that she did with her son. I am considering going to UA to seek their help on this issue. All operations will keep moving forward, but the Shai Hasaikai needs to be dealt with. Good call, since they will need Aizawa's help to get little Eri's quirk in control, Nezu said. The problem with us just doing it is the fact that it's in Kanagawa, which is far away from our publicly controlled land. We do have the national diet, but it would mean showing our hands if we did a large operation in that area so far away from our publicly controlled land, since it would show we have far more abilities than we have let on. Yeah, we can't just throw away everything we have built until now for this one mission, Dabi said. Also, the girl's quirk is unstable and could wipe us out of existence, so I want Eraserhead on the case to help us, and she would go into his and UA's care. He could help control her quirk since she has trauma to needles, and she was also being used to make the bullets. Unlike ours, she wasn't, but she wouldn't really know the difference. Izuku stated, and everyone thought about what Izuku said and soon agreed. Eri's heart fell as he heard Izuku talking about her. His voice felt so distant, unlike Izuku who was so close to her, and even though he was coming to save her, no, saving her is just one of the goals. Verdant is going there for Overhaul and those things that he made, and they will never see each again once Verdant gives her to Mr. Aizawa, and that just made her even sadder. Stain spoke up. Sir, if you are going to UA since you don't use clones due to the issues it could cause, then I suggest taking a heavy presence to ensure they don't try to kill you or arrest you during your negotiations. Stain stated, and the others all agreed. I knew the day would come when Verdant and his army will march towards us, but he came way sooner, Nezu said with a chuckle. This is not a laughing matter, Aizawa grumbled, but of course, he was ignored by Nezu. Izuku didn't really want to look like he was attacking UA, so he decided to give Nezu an advanced warning of his trip to UA. Fine, but I will give Nezu an advanced warning so he can come out and greet us instead of being caught off guard. I think he will be smart and not alert the government, but he still will be on guard. Izuku stated, and they all agreed. Again, good call, Nezu hummed in approval. I would rather not mobilize weaponized zero-pointer for just minor discussions. Nope, I didn't hear anything, Hawk said and looked at Night Eye, and hopefully you didn't too. Night Eye just shook his head in disappointment, and to think that this clown was Nagin's replacement. That is how they ended up in front of UA. Well, that was quick, Jiro said, and a devilish smile appeared on Kaminari's face. That's what she dash, but before he could complete, Zero wrapped a tape around his mouth and pointed his finger at Jiro, who was waiting for him to complete the sentence with her jacks pointing at him. Izuku had sent Toga to go warn Nezu, and watching via the bug user was so fun since they all got shocked. You know what, forget about twice, the bug user is the true MVP of this series, Mina said. Flashback. Toga, go send a clone to UA and request a meeting for me tomorrow at noon, Izuku said, and Toga sent a clone to go do it and used a different face for her clone. Toga would have become one of our best assets if her parents had a little sense and humanity, Neo Mesa thought. Soon the clone arrived outside of the UA gates and pressed the button. Nezu's voice came over and he spoke. Why, hello Verdant member. I'm assuming you're the same individual from before, may I ask why you are here? Nezu asked in a cheerful tone, but Toga could hear the slight tension in his voice from her experience of spy work. Nezu was surprised considering the fact that very few people are able to gauge his emotions. I really hope she accepts my offer, Nezu thought. I would hate to let such a talented person slip from my hand. Indeed, I am the same, and I would like to meet you and your staff. I have a message from the Verdant Emperor for UA. Toga stated, and soon two teachers came outside and escorted her inside. After some walking, she found herself in the meeting room and she took a seat across from Nezu. Was it really wise to allow someone from Verdant's camp to directly enter our school and not mention your office during the time of war? Mirio asked. I think we still need to work on your logical thinking, Nezu said with a chuckle, just think about it. Verdant is fighting this war on a moral high ground that he is going to revolutionize our country, so why would he attack a principal of a school who has maintained a neutral stance since the start of this war? Quite counterproductive, isn't it? Yes, sorry for asking a stupid question, Mirio said. Mirio, there is no such thing as a stupid question, keep that in mind, Nezu said. Now may I ask what message the Verdant Emperor wished to be delivered? Nezu asked and Toga nodded her head. My Emperor would request a meeting with you and your staff at noon tomorrow. We have a proposal that we would like to work with you on in regard to an important matter we discovered. Toga stated and everyone's eyes widened. Even Nezu, who is known for keeping his emotions in check, couldn't since the enemy leader wanted a meeting so far out of their land. Even Nezu is surprised that someone like Verdant is asking for his help, Momo said, but it's understandable as he doesn't know the full context of the things. He did want to come with a light guard, but some of the other high members didn't want to risk the government getting any bright ideas of trying for his head when he came so far away from our controlled land. As such, he will be accompanied by several advanced teams to ensure his safety. We trust UA won't try anything since it would violate your neutral grounds deal, but off the campus is another story when we come and leave. Are you willing to have this meeting? Toga asked. Of course, we are going to accept, Aizawa said, she is asking as if we have any other choice. Huh? Why can't you decline the team up? Toru asked. If we decline their offer, it will send a message that we don't trust Verdant despite them allowing us to keep the school a neutral ground. Which will eventually sour our relationship with them, Aizawa explained. Nezu was in thought as his entire staff looked at him and wondered what he would do. Yes, I will have the meeting. I am interested in talking to the Verdant Emperor. Who all may I invite to this meeting? Nezu asked and Toga said any UA staff was welcomed or those connected with Sir Nitai's agency since it involved his agency. Verdant coming face to face with Miria, it won't end well, All Might grimaced. Nezu raised an eyebrow at this and nodded his head. Nezu started to make the calls as Toga's clone left to deliver the news back, or rather appear to do so since they didn't want them to know that they already knew the answer. Flashback end. Izuku with Dabi, Stain, Mr. Compress, and Twice were all with him in their real bodies while they had 4 advanced teams in their real bodies as well. If anything happened, Twice would clone everyone and the Verdant guards would defend Izuku while the advanced teams took any threat out. I know I shouldn't say this, but seeing all these security measures I really want someone to take a shot at our little emperor, Dabi said, but immediately regretted it as he noticed several enraged eyes glaring at him. He gulped and immediately corrected himself, I wish for a long and healthy life for our emperor. They came out of a teleportation gate in front of UA and found the entire UA staff waiting for them, including All Might. A royal welcome for our emperor, Himiko said. Soon they were led into the school with the heroes on their sides to ensure no student or anyone got any bright idea and risked the school's safety. The students saw the Verdant Emperor on campus and news broke fast around campus. However, they were all stopped from getting close as the Verdant group was led into a large meeting room that could fit everyone. You know what, I think that any student who will try to attack Midori will be really stupid, Mina said. Or they could be brave. Mirio suggested. Mina thought for a moment and replied, nope, still stupid. The meeting room was actually UA's gym, which was next to the track behind the school. They converted the entire building for this meeting. They suspect possible future meetings to happen most likely, so they are dedicating an entire building to these meetings. Izuku thought as he sat down. I think Nezu was already suspecting that Verdant will contact him for a meeting, Aizawa said, although I suspect he had different reasons in his mind. Hello, Verdant Emperor. As you may know, I am Principal Nezu of UA. Nezu introduced himself and Izuku bowed slightly. Izuku looked around the room and noticed Sir Nitai and Mirio, the 9th user of One for All. A grin appeared on Nitai's face as heard Mirio being the 9th wielder of One for All. Hello, Nezu. I'm sure you are wondering why I asked for this meeting. Izuku stated and Nezu nodded his head. As Sir Nitai is aware, there is a villain organization that goes by the name of the Shai Hasaikai and is led by a villain known as Overhaul, Izuku stated, and Sir sat up and asked how he knew about them. Now kids, pay attention as our own Sir Nitai will teach us how a seasoned pro maintains a level head and calm while they are dealing with a stress situation. Hawks grinned while Nitai glared at him. My spy network came into possession of a lot of information about them, and there was quite troubling information about them that shows that they need to be dealt with. I'm not liking the speed at which Sir Nitai's investigation is going, so I decided to involve myself and bring it to UA's attention. Izuku stated and Nezu nodded his head. Investigation is not an easy thing, Mirio said, trying to defend his mentor. You have to take so much precaution so that person you are investigating doesn't find out about it. Well said, Mirio, Izuku said with a cheerful smile. I am glad you are slowly learning. Sir stood up and looked offended. How dare you? We've known plenty of the organization and what they are doing, so I don't see why you are getting involved unless you just want to have us remove opposing organizations. Sir Night-Eye stated. Remember kids, level head and calm mind, Hawk said, desperately trying himself from laughing. Shut up, Night-Eye yelled, and what is going on? You were supposed to be on our side. I don't care anymore, Hawk shrugged, I am just enjoying myself. Izuku sighed and shook his head. Another example of why the hero system is foolish. Mirio gritted his teeth. Now Miridia is straight up insulting his mentor. He didn't understand what was so wrong in questioning the enemy's motives for helping them. You heroes have gotten so high and mightily that anyone with opposing beliefs or those that offer a hand is considered rude and an annoyance. Sir Night-Eye, I suggest you shut up and sit down, since you've clearly demonstrated that you know nothing of the Shai Hasaikai and have only hardened my resolve to get involved in this matter, because you either are playing a fool and hiding information or are really clueless about the Shai Hasaikai. I don't know which would be worst. Izuku stated, and Sir looked pissed. Go, nerd. Put that bastard in his place, Bakugo cheered for his friend. Bakugo Katsuki, Night-Eye stood up and glared at Bakugo. I am a pro-hero who has served this nation for more than 20 years, and that's why I demand and deserve respect when you talk to or about me. Yeah, good luck with that, Izuku absent-mindedly said out loud. This again enraged Night-Eye, but before he could answer, Mirio stood up and said, Midoriya, stop this. You and your friends are constantly insulting my mentor. I will not stand for this. Izuku sighed as he ruffled Eri's hair. This mentor-student combo is such a headache, he thought, and said, listen Mirio, respect is a two-way stream. I will not respect someone who is constantly trying to discourage me or is constantly saying mean things to my friends and people important to me, Izuku continued, not to mention he wasted my entire month on his internship with his stupid scheme to make me give up my quirk. So next time you come to me demanding respect for your mentor, first check if he is acting like a decent human being. In the end, Mirio couldn't bring out any point to counter Midoriya, so he sat down, and so did his mentor. Nezu told him to shut up and sit down and asked Izuku to explain what he knew. Night-Eye gritted his teeth as once again he was insulted in front of everyone in favor of a criminal. Overhaul sees quirks as a disease that needs to be wiped out, and he is doing this via creating quirk erasing bullets, and he plans to make a permanent version. He currently has a version that lasts only a few seconds, but the problem outside of that is that he is using a little girl as the key part due to her quirk. Izuku stated as he showed them all the information. The heroes were all horrified. Izuku then looked at Sir Night-Eye and spoke. So did you know about that hero, or are you done being a pathic fool? Izuku asked, and Sir Night-Eye sat down without speaking since he didn't know about the girl. That's going to burn for a very long time, Kaminari said as he glanced at Night-Eye, who was trying to tear a hole into the screen just by glaring at it. I'm reaching out to UA to help take them out, and then I would like Eraserhead and UA to care for the girl. I would do it, but, waging a revolution after all. Izuku stated, and Nezu nodded his head. Zuku, the other Eri is not going to be with you, will she be happy? Eri asked innocently. Of course, she will be happy, Izuku said as he flashed her his hero smile. Aizawa and Yamada-sensei are really good people. They will make sure she lives a happy life. Really? Eri asked. Aizawa-sensei might be a little grumpy but does give you apple candy every time he visits you, right? Izuku asked, and Eri nodded her head. He will do the same for other Eri as well, so don't worry. Problem child, who are you calling grumpy, huh? Do you want extra homework or something? Aizawa grumbled. Sure, I don't mind, Izuku just shrugged. Aizawa groaned again while thinking, right, he is good at studies so can't give him academic punishments. The reason for Eraserhead to be in charge of her is because her quirk is unstable and he can stop it if it turns on. He is the best to help the girl live her life. Izuku stated, and Eraserhead groaned about becoming taking care of a child, but he said he would do it. Aizawa is that grumpy uncle who says he will not babysit the children but does it anyways, Namiri said. Shut up or I will give Midoriya's homework to you, Aizawa glared at her. But I am a teacher, she said. Did I stutter? As asked with a terrifying grin. Nezu asked how the Verdant wanted to help. We can provide men for the raid on them alongside the heroes and police. If both sides are willing to have a ceasefire regarding whoever is on the raid teams, then we can provide a few advanced teams to help in the raid, but I expect no one to try and arrest them after the raid is done and allow them to return to the national diet. Izuku stated. You want us to let you go scot-free after all the things you have done, Night-Eye said. Either that or eat shit, Dabi said. Nezu thought it over and Sir grumbled about working with villains and Izuku just rolled his eyes. Sir Night-Eye, I don't see how you can call us villains. Were the Americans villains when they rebelled against the king when they founded their nation? Were the French when they overthrew their kind in the French Revolution? History has shown that humans have the right to overthrow the government when it no longer functions and is corrupt. The hero system needs to be replaced and the leadership of the nation replaced so that it can move forward. The current system is only a cycle of creating villains for the heroes to beat instead of fixing the actual issues which you heroes ignore, so don't sit there and act all high and mighty because your government is getting its asses kicked and are losing the war. Izuku stated with a scowl, since Sir Night-Eye only contained to piss him off as he kept talking more and more. Man, we should really stock up on all the burn cream we can get, Kirishima said. Ask Toya, he will have a stock for weeks, Izuku said while Dabi shot him a glare. Nezu brought the meeting back onto the point of the meeting and sent a glare at Sir Night-Eye to keep himself shut. Some people can't act like adults no matter how serious the situation is, Nezu said as he glanced at the Night-Eye who was glaring at him. Soon they came to an agreement and they would launch an assault in the next few days after gathering some heroes and police. Nezu promised to ensure that the Verdant men would not be touched, and soon the media got word of UA and the Verdant working together to take out a villain group conducting illegal experiments in a prefecture that the Verdant doesn't currently have control of. It was a clever move to get the media involved, Momo said, this way heroes won't be able to break their promise due to their image and all. The media was abuzz with questions and the government tried to stop it, but Nezu shot back that the government should focus on the war instead of the smaller matters and that UA would do as it pleased to stop groups conducting human experiments. You know they will come for you, right? Hawk said. Oh, I am counting on it, Nezu said with a terrifying smile. The government wasn't pleased, but Nezu had contacted heroes who agreed not to touch the Verdant group before, during, or after the mission. This would also mean the police wouldn't have the power to stop the Verdant group even if they wanted to try it. Then the screen turned black and the words appeared on the screen. EP.3 Growth End. Overhaul. To be continued. Save Eri. Narrator Gray. The day of the raid had arrived and Izuku already had clones of Toga sneak into the compound to locate Eri beforehand. Good, maybe this time we won't have to run around that underground maze, Izuku said. They had abducted several members of Overhaul's men, as such they would be able to blend in without raising suspicions. I don't want to drink one of those Yakuza's blood, Himiko grimaced, I can't even imagine how bad it will taste, as those assholes were okay with Overhaul torturing a little girl. But only a few people were aware of how the bullets were made, Nijire said. Doesn't matter, Himiko scowled, they still hurt Eri, and that's the end of it. The idea was that Toga's clones would attempt to locate Eri before the raid even started, but they weren't having much luck in finding her in the areas that they were allowed to be in as lower-ranked members. Maybe you should have snagged some from Overhaul's inner circle, Mina said. That won't work, Aizawa said. Overhaul would have noticed if one of his important men had gone missing or had acted even a little different than usual. As such, it did limit the area where Eri could be hidden into a certain section of the base. I guess something is better than nothing, Ochako said. Now you might be thinking that the Verdant group had a map and everything, well they did. However, it turns out the base can change shapes due to one of the members' quirks, which made the raid a bit more complex. Mimic, Aizawa grumbled, that one was troublesome to deal with. Yeah, he single-handedly prolonged the raid, by making a maze out of their base, Izuku added. As such, they had to send the bugs back into the new pathways and map the base out the day of the raid, which compacted matters since Izuku didn't want the heroes to know of their spying method. Yeah, we are not giving up our MVP, Compress said. As such, he informed them that their spies inside informed them the interior had changed due to one of the higher-ups' quirks, but that they had limited the area that Eri could be into a certain portion of the base. As such, the detective found zero lies in Izuku's words, and he still hid the truth of how they spy on people in reality, since everyone is thinking that they were using clones of their morpher quirk user to spy on people, which was true in some way but not their main source of information. Leave it on Izuku to try and trick the person with a lie dictator quirk, Momo giggled, on a serious note. Detective, were you aware of this weakness of your quirk? Yes, Naomasa nodded, my quirk will detect any statement true as long as it is closer to the truth. That's why during interrogation we try to ask questions which straight to the point. Izuku and his teams arrived on site for the raid, and the heroes were kind of shocked that he himself was present for the raid. Isn't it a bit risky for you to be present there in person? Mina asked. It sure is, but I also don't want people to think that I am just a desk guy who can just pass orders and can't do anything in person, Izuku explained, besides I am sure I will have an exit strategy ready if something goes wrong. It took some talking to his guards to allow it, but they agreed if he kept them at his sides at all times. If he broke away from them even for a minute, then he wasn't going to be allowed to go out on future missions easily, which made Izuku pout a bit, but he had to accept their demands. I didn't know that as Verdant guards we will also have to babysit you from time to time, Dabi said with a shit-eating grin. Shut up, Izuku groaned. Besides, who in their right mind will allow you to babysit someone? Hell, I won't even leave my dog with you, and I don't even have a dog. It was quite funny to most of their men how Izuku was teased by all of his Verdant guards when he pouted, and it just reminded everyone what they were fighting for, and more importantly who they were fighting for, as they all wanted to push Izuku to the highest point so he could lead their nation to a better future, even though they all came from horrible backgrounds and committed many crimes. They all wanted a better future, and they were going to get it by making the Verdant Emperor the leader of all of Japan. Izuku became quiet as he once again was reminded of how huge this mission was. Now it was not just his mission anymore. It was now a dream that will be fulfilled when Verdant will become an emperor and will improve their lives regardless of their social status or quirks. And he was committed to fulfilling that dream. Izuku looked around at the heroes and caught Sir Night-Eye's glare. Careful there, buddy, your eyes might pop out, Hawks chuckled. That man really doesn't like me at all. Izuku thought, and it was understandable since Izuku more or less destroyed the peace that All Might had created. Night-Eye smirked and said, at least he is self-aware about what he has done, he said while others rolled their eyes. Izuku had destroyed the illusion of hope and peace that All Might had fabricated in front of everyone when in truth the society of Japan was falling. You were saying, Bakugo asked with a similar challenging smirk. Delusional scum, Night-Eye grumbled under his breath. Izuku then moved to the detective who was on site and asked him if the hero side was ready, which Izuku gained confirmation. After talking a bit more about any last-minute changes, they all gathered up and moved forward towards the raid. In 5 minutes they arrived on site of the compound, and the raid started when a follower of Overhaul burst out of the gates throwing some police in the air, but some Adam's team members grabbed them before they could get hurt. Verdant, move in. Izuku shouted, and all of his forces charged in with the heroes. What a pathetic sight we are showing to the entire world, Night-Eye said, heroes needing help from villains, and for what? Just to apprehend some Yakuza. I wonder if heroes can go any lower. Sir is right, Mirio added, a real hero will never depend on anyone for any kind of help. Yeah sure, Izuku rolled his eyes, that kind of thinking will take many heroes to their early graves. But All Might did it, Mirio challenged, he single-handedly solved almost all the crimes of any city he was in. At what price? Izuku asked, the man lost his entire lung and a stomach. And I know it was because of All for One, but maybe, just maybe it could have been prevented if he had built a strong support system before the inevitable battle. In the background, All Might nodded sadly. I miss eating burgers and fries, he thought as a single tear escaped his eye. Izuku though didn't tell the heroes that he kept several advanced teams of Verdant members hidden nearby because let's be honest, Izuku isn't stupid. He knows very likely that the heroes wouldn't pass up a chance of trying to capture him once this was all over. Of course, why would fakes like them would ever follow their word, Stain said. As the people started to make their way into the base, they encountered some resistance to their fighting, but Izuku trusted his men. They had several orders given to them which included not being captured by the heroes and not holding back on killing any member of the Shai Hasaikai group. I wish I had punched that man in his windpipe, Izuku thou thought inside, I don't know why I am getting these violent thoughts all of a sudden. I need to do something about them. It was about 10 minutes into the raid when Izuku was informed over the comms link with his men that they had found the location of Eri and that she was being currently held by Overhaul and a few of his men. They need to be careful while dealing with Coronastasis. He is the second most dangerous man in that Yakuza group, Aizawa said as he remembered his encounter with the said villain. He had come so close to losing either his eyes or life. If not for Tamaki, you saved him in the nick of time. They were currently fighting Lomillion, who had separated from his group and went ahead of everyone else, which Izuku found annoying. Of course you are annoyed, you just want credit for saving that girl, Night-Eye said. Think whatever you like, I am not wasting my time correcting you, Izuku said. Izuku ordered all of his men to start heading off in that direction of the base. About 5 minutes later, Izuku arrived to see a shocking sight. Sir Night-Eye was dead and Lomillion was in shock from seeing his mentor killed in front of him. Mirio's world stooped for a second as he saw his mentor's unmoving body in front of his eyes. No, this was not how the raid was supposed to go, he thought while taking slow breaths. He then remembered what happened in their timeline. I ran ahead, secured Eri, took out 2 weird guys, then dodged the Quirker racing bullet, but while doing that lost Eri to Overhaul. Then Night Eye showed up and tried to fight the guy, but he sent multiple spikes at him, and, oh, Midoriya showed up to blow up the spikes with the Air Force, and after that Midoriya ran the show. He did everything from defeating Overhaul to rescuing Eri, and we just watched from the sidelines. He was so shocked that he didn't notice Eri had been taken from him. At that moment Mirio felt like a complete failure, and the thought that even with the power of One for All I will never be as good as All Might started plaguing his mind. Damn, Hero had let the girl get taken away from him. I know it's tough to see someone die that is close to you, but not saving the girl means he dies in vain. Izuku thought as he leads his men towards Overhaul, who was pissed to see the Verdant group. Night Eye wanted to ask Midoriya how would he feel if All Might died in front of his eyes, but he couldn't bring himself to jinx Toshi's death if by any chance such a thing existed. Why are you opposing us? We could have joined forces with Verdant Emperor and wiped out the quirks. Overhaul yelled because he knew Izuku was quirkless and should understand his desire to remove quirks from the world. Eri trembled as she heard Overhaul's voice and held on to Izuku as if her life depended on it. Izuku just hugged her tightly and glared at the screen with fury in his eyes, as if I will ever work with a scum like you. Honestly, I will admit I've thought of removing quirks as well, but realized they aren't the issue. Humans had the same issues before quirks came, but we just focused them more on quirks as an easier outlet. That is true, Midnight said. Even before quirks we had several issues with people discriminating against others based on their caste, religion, color, or social standing. Not to mention our history is filled with the records of slavery, colonization, and many such crimes that you children will never even think of. Also, human experiment crosses the line for me. Izuku shouted as he dodged some spikes that got sent his way. Yep. That is a one line we never cross, Mei said while Power Loader nodded in the background. Dabi lit the minions of Overhaul on fire, killing several of them, but a few escaped and Overhaul grabbed some of them and combined with them to create some weird creature as he held Eri in one of his hands. What is with Overhaul and his obsession with transforming himself into weird creatures? Nijire said, I remembered he did the same in our world as well. I am not sure, but it might be a reflection that subconsciously he knows that he is a monster for torturing a little girl, Hound Dog suggested. The girl was so scared of what was all going on. Izuku gently placed a hand on Eri's head and whispered to her, don't look okay. I will tell you when that man is no longer on the screen, to which Eri slowly nodded her head. Izuku fell back behind his men since it was an agreement he made with his verdant guards that he wouldn't be too risky with his attacks and allow them to do most of the fighting while he ordered them around. Coward, Night Eye grumbled. I call it everyone playing their roles so no one dies, but suit yourself, Compress said. Izuku had ordered Mr. Compressor to get Eri somehow with his quirk and get her out of there. Mr. Compressor nodded his head and worked with a few members of the advanced team and had a few clones of himself made by a clone of twice. It's such a shame that Mr. Compress turned into a villain, Ochako said. His quirk is legit on the level of 13 when it comes to rescuing missions. That can be said for all of the villains, Izuku said, and as much as it pains me to say this, but even Overhaul could have become the best healing hero who could have surpassed even Recovery Girl. Once the clones were ready they were sent ahead and one advanced member with a telekinesis quirk used their quirk to pull Eri from Overhaul. Yes. Nijire cheered seeing Eri out of Overhaul's grasp. The moment there was enough room between Eri and Overhaul, Dabi with a few clones of himself set the space between Overhaul and Dabi on fire so hot that Overhaul couldn't go through the flames even using Overhaul since it destroyed his body faster than he could recreate it due to being so large. If he was in his normal form then he could likely get through, but with such a large body it wouldn't be possible, which worked to their advantage. As always I have to come and do the clutch play to win the round, Dabi said smug smile. Wait. You play C.S? Kamioneer asked. I do everything that lets me vent my anger, Dabi said. On a side note, I have dragon lore. What? Kaminari said with wide eyes. Wait. It was in the box during the 130th anniversary, right? Suddenly a look of horror appeared in Kamioneer's eyes. How many did you open? Far too many, Dabi answered too quietly while his eyes looked like he had seen war. What are they talking about? Nezmuri asked. Just leave them be, was the only answer Aizawa could muster. Soon, Mr. Compress had Eri and started to fall back behind their lines but didn't leave since there wasn't a good route to get out without being attacked. Though, that problem solved itself as a hole in the roof was made when the dragon hero Ryuko came blowing through as she slammed a villain through the street and down into the open room below it. Oh. I didn't know this looked so cool when we were fighting the real thing, Nijire said. Izuku and his men saw the chance and their priority was Eri over Overhaul. Aizawa nodded his head in approval as securing someone should always be a priority. As such, they used the new route and escaped outside but were followed by Overhaul who came out of the hole as well. Did Lemillion really get taken out just because of Sir Nightie's death? Is his will so easily broken? Izuku thought since he has seen no appearance of Lemillion the ninth user of One for All. Mirio clenched his fist. How dare he question my will when I had just lost my mentor? As Overhaul came out of the hole, a large number of heroes came over and tried to fight him but they were not having much luck. Izuku decides to have about 10 clones of Dabi go up from and the heroes moved back at the sight of them as Dabi let his fire loose and started to burn Overhaul alive just like they did to Endeavor, but this time they weren't going to stop. Nope, the goal was Overhaul's death and they were going to get it as the man screamed in pain, and about a minute later the fire died down and Overhaul was in ashes. Although his eyes never left the screen, Izuku made sure to shield Eri well enough so that she could neither hear nor see any of what was going on the screen. Did she deserve to see what happened to her tormentor? Yes, absolutely, but it wasn't healthy for her mind. Izuku was so proud of her that even after all that torment she had endured, Eri never grew resentful of the world. She was willing to give new people in her life a chance to make her life better, and Izuku didn't want to take away that from her by introducing any toxic thoughts to her at this young age. The detective came over and asked about the girl and Izuku looked at one of his men who had the marble which they realized, and Mr. Compress undid. Out came Eri who looked scared and her quirk appeared to start turning on. Everyone back away. Her quirk is turning on and we need Eraserhead now please. Izuku called out as heroes searched for the man. The girl has a really dangerous but powerful quirk, Nike thought, maybe I should nominate her for the Heroes of Tomorrow program, and looking at her shy nature she can turn out better than Hawks. Eri, it's going to be fine. I need you to calm down. Overhaul is dead and he can't hurt you anymore, okay? Izuku stated and her eyes widened at hearing that. Izuku then pointed towards the piles of ash and restated that Overhaul was dead for good. As Eri took the information in she fell over as her quirk turned off and Izuku caught her. Thank you for saving me, Eri said with tears in her eyes. Always, Izuku said with a smile. She's burning up. Likely due to her quirk side effects on her body since it hasn't been trained properly. Izuku stated and the detective made notes of it for Eraserhead and UA. Izuku then handed her off to Eraserhead as he arrived. Eraserhead, remember my condition for this entire thing. Everyone felt chills down their spines seeing how cold Verdant's eyes were. Eri stays in UA custody and she's not to be given to anyone. If for some reason UA can't defend her from the commission or government, then figure a way to reach out to us and we can take her in somehow since we can hide her from them. I just don't want her to be surrounded by people training and working in a war all of the time, but we could make do if need be. Izuku stated and Aizawa nodded his head in understanding and took a few steps back. Sho, I never knew you will allow someone to talk to you like that, Mike said. Because he is right that if Udare cannot even protect one little girl, then we should just close this school and find new jobs for ourselves, Aizawa said. Also, even if I was offended, what can I even do to him who has nearly 30 people behind him? Izuku looked around and saw all of the heroes looking at him and his men. Ha ha ha, suddenly Himiko started laughing and said, we are going to humiliate them, aren't we? You bet we are, Dabi smirked as well. Ah, they might try something like I thought. Izuku thought as he looked at his men and confirmed with them quickly that he had all of their actual members with them, which they confirmed that they did, and then they also had some spare clones left over. It seems that Izuku can easily escape even if they have to fight head-on, Momo said. Izuku then saw Lemillion walk out of the crowd and his face was pale. Aizawa had a disgusted look on his face and Izuku could guess the man didn't like where this was going. Oh no. Nijire was worried because Mirio wasn't smiling and he always smiled no matter how bad the situation was. So. I take it the pro-heroes are going back on their words and will try to capture us. Izuku stated and everyone tensed at his words. Wow, they are more predictable than MCU movies' third acts, Mina said. Lemillion spoke up though, we have our orders from the commission and are to arrest you the moment the operation ends. If you refuse to surrender then we are told to kill you. Lemillion stated as he gripped his fists and looked at Izuku. Mirio, since when you started working with commission, Nijire said, you know that are not good people, right? I think you are over-exaggerating things, Mirio said, Sir works with them so they can't be that bad. Their methods might be a little on the grey side but all of us working towards the same goal, which is peace for everyone. I don't know Mirio, from what I am seeing I don't buy that at all, Nijire said and Mirio had no answer to that. Ah, understandable. I kind of predicted this as a result. Do you honestly think I didn't come prepared for that result? Izuku asked and everyone's eyes widened and tensed up. Oh. This is the moment I was saving my popcorn for, Himiko said. Izuku then looked up and saw a news camera and started to yell. Hello people of Japan. These are your heroes. Not even seconds after stopping a villain group doing human experiments are your heroes breaking their word. They turn their back on human decency and unlike US who keep our agreement and our words of not targeting the hero schools, these heroes break their words that they agreed to. Remember Japan, these are your cowards of heroes, the dishonorable heroes. We are Japanese people, our cultural history was built on honor, yet the heroes who are meant to protect you have none. Take to the streets and protest, more citizens of Japan, and demand for the government to surrender to the Verdant so we can move Japan forward for a brighter future. Izuku yelled out to the news helicopter. Nice try to brainwash people, but your voice won't reach that chopper. Night Eye smirked, but it immediately faltered as he saw what happened next. The heroes on site thought he was crazy since there was no way the news helicopter could hear him from that distance when Izuku smirked. Remember, I said I planned for this possible situation. I hacked into the news network feed moments before the raid started since I knew the local news station would get a helicopter in the air the moment they heard of this raid. Everything I said went through a microphone I had on me this entire time. Including how you admitted to being just dogs of the corrupt hero commission Lumillion. Don't you dare call him that villain, Night Eye said. You should know that Verdant's words are the least hurtful things he will hear moving forward, Nezu said. It's wonderful to know that you don't serve to protect the citizens of Japan and instead of your masters in the hero commission. You are a false hero Lumillion, and I truly expected more from you. Izuku stated as a portal opened right under them and they dropped through it before the heroes could react. Like you are there to tell me what is a true hero and what is a false one, Mirio gritted his teeth, and I am not their follower, I must have agreed to the terms because I found them acceptable. Izuku's little speech had bought the teleporter user enough time to create a gate at their position. Did the other teams get pulled out? Izuku asked about the teams that were hidden in the area near where he was and they confirmed that they were pulled out already right when they were. Izuku sighed in relief as he heard that all of his people were safe and sound. Izuku just smiled as he moved into the base section and saw the news reporting about the incident and how the heroes broke their agreement and had no honor. I am imagining that Verdant must be the media's favorite person by now, Midnight said. They were also taking shots at Lumillion and were using Izuku's words of him being a false hero, which made Izuku smirk since even the news media companies that he didn't control were talking about it in the same tone as Izuku had used since Izuku was right. Japan was founded on a country of honor through their ancestors who fought as samurais and warriors in the old times. The honor aspect was still important to the Japanese people even after quirks came around and Izuku used that to his advantage. It was the same when he captured Osaka Castle, Mina said, using our culture for his advantage. Indeed Ashido, and now heroes have shown that they do not respect that breaking the promise they made with Verdant, Momo added. Social media was on fire hitting at Lumillion and the heroes that tried to arrest the Verdant members. I don't envy them, too said, internet can be really mean sometimes. Then the screen turned black and the words appeared on the screen. EP.3 Save Eri. To be continued. Aftermath of the raid. Narrator, Gray. As Izuku was enjoying his time at his base and dealing with his organization's affairs, Lumillion had returned to UA under the insult of people that he went by as many had seen the actions of the heroes on site of the raid and were disgusted with what the heroes had done. Of course, people are blindly believing in whatever narrative media is feeding them, Night Eye scoffed, this herd mentality will ruin our nation one day. Lumillion gripped his hands and was pissed. He was pissed that he didn't really save the girl they went to save, he was pissed that his mentor had died, and he was pissed that the Verdant Emperor had gained even more public support against heroes and the government by using what they did for his organization's benefit. Not really, Izuku said, Verdant could have easily dealt with Overhaul if he wasn't worried about Eri's situation. So you are saying that Overhaul was not a threat for Verdant? Mirio asked. Overhaul on his own is really scary with his quirk, but other than that no, Izuku shrugged, I mean he has 8 people who are worth considering a threat while others are just fodders. And let's just assume that even if we are not as strong as him we can easily turn that situation around with our huge numbers. Though, he couldn't blame Verdant Emperor too much since he hated what he had to do as well. No, instead he blamed the Hero Commission. Mirio, you didn't do anything wrong at all, Night Eye said, sometimes there is no other way. Sorry, sir, but I can't agree with you on this one. Mirio hung his head, killing someone is a choice, a decision that I made. As Lumillion entered the UA campus he was asked to go to the staff room since All Might wanted to meet him. All Might must be disappointed in me, Mirio thought, not only I failed to protect his friend but I also used his quirk to kill someone. As Lumillion knocked on the door, he was called in and told to sit down. All Might looked at him and asked what he was feeling at the moment and Lumillion could only say rage and anger. All Might nodded his head in understanding since Sir Night Eye just did die to Overhaul earlier in the day. You look very calm for someone who has just lost their friend, Aizawa said to All Might. All Might hung his head while people around felt a hint of sadness emitting from his body. Mirio is not the first friend I have lost, All Might said with a hint of despair in his voice, over the years. I have seen many people die. Some were fellow heroes while others were just people who lost their lives in my war against All for One. Sir, what are we going to do about Verdant Emperor? At the rate he is going to win and overthrow Japan. Lemillion asked because he was honestly clueless about what to do about the villain known as Izuku Midoriya. You can always hang the cape and see how it all plays out, Mina said. I mean, at this point you should understand how low commission can go if they are asking a student to assassinate someone. He won't do that, Nijire said. Sometimes Mirio can be too stubborn for his own good. All Might was silent because he honestly didn't know. I don't know. I don't know if I can honestly support our own government either with the things I've come to learn about our society. It might be time for a change, to be honest. All Might stated. And you think that Verdant can turn this country into paradise? Night Eye asked. We don't need paradise, All Might said. We need a palace where civilians don't have to resort to villainy for their basic needs. Mirio was shocked at what he was hearing. He looked up at the man before him, the former symbol of peace, and realized the man was not hiding his honest views, and that was honestly disturbing that the symbol of peace had given up on the government itself. I think it's more disturbing that many of us were blissfully unaware of the things that were happening around us, All Might said. It might be time for heroics to come to an end. We don't even have a clear grasp on how much fighting power he has, but it's been clear that he can control prefectures and he's doing quite well at it as well. Indeed, from what we have seen so far, Midoriya actually is born with a talent to lead people, Nezu said. His organization has hidden quite well in the shadows and he is doing something All for One even failed at. All Might stated, and Mirio wondered what he was talking about and asked the man. Rule with heart, not fear. A faint smile appeared on All Might's face. Izuku Midoriya has captured the hearts of the people not through fear or threats but through simple acknowledgement and respect for him. Verdant Emperor is ruling through loyalty and kindness, while our government or All for One wanted to rule via fear and intimidation. All Might said. I mean, it must be nice knowing that people will not try to stab you in your sleep, Himiko said. A few months ago you would have stabbed him anyway, Ochako pointed out. Yep, guilty of that, Himiko replied with a sheepish smile. Mirio couldn't help but agree, but it didn't mean he liked it. Humph. I don't like this grumpy Mirio, Nijire said. He always dreamed of becoming a hero and saving people. What was he going to do when that was gone? What was he going to do when the country he knew was gone completely? Okay, wait right there, Izuku said, you are taking this way out of proportion. This country is not going anywhere, neither are heroes. They will be integrated with the police and will be held responsible for property damage or loss of life. But heroes should not be restricted. Mirio shook his head. System might not be perfect, but the safest hands are still our own. Izuku didn't respond any further as he thought that there was something to think about in that line. What about One for All's purpose of maintaining peace? Mirio asked, and All Might shook his head as he spoke. One for All was meant to stop All for One. Becoming the symbol of peace, and everything else was the individual user's personal goal. That's right, young Midoriya, All Might said. It was a mistake on my part to force you to take my mantle. From now on you can become the hero you want to be and not just my replacement. As such, One for All isn't meant to stop people like Verdant Emperor. The purpose of the quirk came to an end when Verdant Emperor defeated All for One instead of us. All Might said, and Lemillion sat there in shock as he didn't know what to do now with everything. So what now? Night Eye asked furiously. All my training and efforts are wasted because you don't want your successor to replace you. I don't see how are those wasted. All Might asked. Mirio is turning out to be a fine hero. But, you. I thought you will pass your title to Mirio in front of the whole world, officially making him the next symbol of peace, Night Eye said. That sounds extremely risky and stupid, All Might laughed. I wouldn't have done that even if Mirio was my successor. After all for One is not the only enemy I have made in my whole career. All Might told Lemillion to just rest and recover as more fights would be going on soon. Lemillion nodded his head and returned to his dorm. While that was going on, Izuku Midoriya was looking over the overall organizational outlook of his group. Izuku was shocked when he returned to the base and received updates from his men. Of course, I am not getting any rest, am I? Izuku sighed. Just your Izuku luck, Himiko giggled. Due to the actions at the raid, there were a lot of organizations that decided to submit to the Verdant Group for fear of being wiped out by the Verdant Group. As such, they received notification of surrender from most of the villain organizations in Okayama and Tottori, which now gave them a foothold in the orange area of the map. Well, that turned out better than we expected, Dabi said. We should have expected this, I guess. After all, we did flaunt our power during that raid, Compress added. They gained a total of 30,000 new members from these two prefectures, which Izuku was pleased with. Of the new members that joined, only 10,000 were capable of being used for combat in the views of the organization, so they now have 590,000 that belonged to the military side of their organization. You know, I never realized that we have this many criminals in our country alone, Kaminari said. Yeah, it is one thing to read about them in the news, but seeing them gathered in a single place like this is something else, Mina added. The biggest thing about gaining control of the underworld for Tottori and Okayama was the fact that these prefectures are where the weakest military line was currently being held. Due to the fact that the government not wanting the Verdant to spread towards Tokyo where the center of government was located, they had a large military line with heroes included in the prefectures of Aichi, Gifu, and Fukui. Though they don't realize that the Verdant group already controls all of those prefectures' underworld locations. At this point, the government should start implementing some aggressive strategies instead of defending their asses, Aizawa said. They are only making things worse for themselves by giving Verdant time to plan out things. As such, the military defense line in Tottori and Okayama is far more lacking in support than the northern military line. Izuku was happy with this since it would allow him to quickly push further south and take control of all of South Japan quickly if he planned his cards right. He didn't want to be fighting a war on two fronts even though he could with twice clones. Right, since Izuku doesn't use clones like everyone else, he will also have to divide his attention between two battlefields, Momo said. Soon though it was time for a meeting of the higher-ups to happen, so Izuku moved over to the meeting room. Hello, let's start. Izuku said, and soon the meeting started. They were talking about the information they gained from the raid and what was going on currently with the after effects of the heroes trying to take him out right after the raid. Nothing much, just media badmouthing heroes and commission, Dabi said. Overall, Lumillion has taken a massive hit. There are people calling for him to quit being a hero, but it's unclear if he will, and most likely not, though it wouldn't matter if he did or not since we need to always be watching him due to how big of a threat he poses to our organization due to his power of being the ninth user. Toga said as she read the reports from the spy division. Question, Mina raised her hand, will Mirio also receive other quirks just like Midori will? What kind of stupid question is that? Night Eyes scowled, of course, he will. Not necessarily, Izuku said. Well, you have to fulfill two conditions before you can access previous users' quirks. First is that you need a certain amount of control over the base one for all, and the previous users will have to approve Mirio to let him use their quirks. Then what's the problem in that? Night Eyes raised his brow. Of course, they will accept him. Okay then, Izuku shrugged, knowing full well that third and second don't even look at him. Everyone nodded their heads and they talked about the new prefectures they gained. The conversation then moved into if they would be making any more prefectures publicly controlled, and Izuku thought it over before answering. I want us to gain control of the underworld for all of the Orange Land. Once that happens, we will start publicly controlling that after we stabilize our control in the underworld there. We will launch an assault on the military line that is quite unmanned in my view. Once we push through the lines, we will make a sweep of the entire region, which would be a massive blow to the government. After that, I want to conquer everything else in the south of Japan before we focus on moving north. Izuku said, and everyone nodded their heads. Taking port cities will be more beneficial now, but it also brings a huge risk with it, Momo said as she chewed her finger. Indeed, we are well aware that government has battleships all around the nation, and I am certain that once Verdant takes over those cities they will start bombing them without caring about civilian presence at all, Ida added. They talked about also the start of implementing the new changes to the system for the police. Naomesa's ears perked up upon listing that. Hero schools would be converted into police academies and higher standards would be implemented with the help of the police, who have been somewhat cooperative with them since the Verdant hasn't pushed the police to fight back. Police forces getting a bigger role in today's society, Naomesa smirked, one can only hope for that. The police have been acting like normal, and they were honestly surprised by the sheer drop in crime under the Verdant leadership, as the Verdant group was implementing many programs that sought to provide jobs and other things for people facing homelessness or other issues. Makes sense, many people just want a proper job and payment, Mike said. If they have that, why would they ever resort to crime? After a while, Izuku called the meeting to an end since they talked about most of what they needed to talk about. Izuku moved to his main office where his mother walked in. Hello, mother. What can I do for you? Izuku asked as she came into his office. Look at that Inko, the brat is calling you mother instead of mom, Mitsuki snickered. She looked at him and asked if he has taken a break lately, and Izuku just laughed. I am leading a war. I don't have time to take a break. Why? Izuku asked. That's not good, Izuku, you need to rest, Inko said with worried eyes. You do take rest between your hero training, right? Why, yeah totally, Izuku said averting his eyes. She suggested that he goes out and just relax for a while but he groaned at that. Where exactly would I go since I am a wanted man where many people want my head currently? Izuku asked. She said in one of the places he had under their control. He looked at her and knew she wasn't going to drop it until he took a break, so he walked out and went to his guards and told them what his mother wanted him to do. So this is where your stubbornness comes from, Ochako said with an amused smile. Enjoy while you can, Chako, because I am going to listen to all your embracing stories from your parents when I meet them, Izuku said. Wait. You want to meet my parents? Ochako asked with a red tint on her cheeks. Of course. Is there a problem? Izuku asked with a smirk, or you don't want me to meet them? No, I would love to, Ochako said as she hugged his arm. Uncaugus to them Inko had already captured several pictures of them. That is how Izuku found himself sitting in a park in the Osaka prefecture resting under a tree. Oh. This is going to be interesting, Toru said. Some people were tense at seeing the leader of the rebellion out in the open, but some children who had balls of steel in Dabi's words ran over to Izuku and asked if they could put paint on him. Izuku shrugged and told them to do what they wished. Great. Why I am agreeing to this again? Izuku groaned. Because you are a big softy at heart, Himiko giggled. Izuku rolled his eyes until he felt a tug on his shirt. He looked down and saw Eri with sparkling eyes. Can we do that, please? Sure, Izuku replied with a smile. Softy, Himiko whispered and giggled once again when he groaned again. As such, Izuku was sitting under the tree as children gathered around him and were using face paint to paint on him, while some girls were making flower crowns as they would put it on Izuku or the other Verdant members that were standing guard around him. I don't think anybody will believe me that this man is leading a rebellion with over 1 million people under his command, Minari snickered. People started to take pictures of him which ended up hitting the media. I have become a joke. How is the government meant to fear me after this? Izuku said as he put his head in his hands and groaned while the kids just laughed at him. In the audience, Eri giggled as well. This caused everyone in the area to start laughing as well, which Dabi spoke up at. When? Have you ever been scary? We literally call you our little emperor, so I don't know when you ever thought you were scary to us. Dabi said in a questioning manner which just earned a glare from Izuku, but no one really paid any attention as most of the civilians started to relax around Izuku. Humph. Izuku pouted, says the man who looks like someone just picked him up from Five Nights at Freddy's. Then an alarm went off on Izuku's phone and he stood up. Ah, the amount of time I agreed to get out of my office has passed, so my mother can't say anything to me anymore. Izuku said with a fist pump which just earned eye rolls from his guards. Dude even treats rest like some sort of task that he has to complete, Kamianri rolled his eyes. Yeah, until you spend more time working non-stop again. Then she will make you come out again. Dabi said as they all stood up and started to head off. Izuku waved goodbye to the children who asked him to come again. Well, he certainly went from the guy who will destroy the government and bring the new rule, to the nice big brother who lives next door, Mina snickered. Soon they returned to the base to find everyone looking at them. Izuku asked what was wrong and they told him to look at the media, and Izuku almost fell over. What now? Izuku groaned as he rubbed his face. He was the talk of the nation on how he was sitting and allowing children to paint his face. Some were questioning if he really was the leader of the feared group that had been screwing with the government the entire time, while others talked about how it showed his group wasn't going to rule in fear after they took over. In hindsight, it will only help them, as Verdant's actions today will give a new perspective to people who were afraid of him, Momo said. It had become a heated debate across social media as well. Of course, the internet is going crazy over this, Namuri said with an exasperated sigh. Last week they were debating if eating soap is healthy or not. Well, this helps us, I guess, a bit on our image. It helps establish that we don't plan to be cruel, since they could see me interacting with little children. Izuku said that right after he said that his mother walked by and said she knew her plan would work, which got everyone's attention as she explained how she made him go out on purpose to establish a better image instead of being a feared ruler for the civilians. And you were saying you don't want to get involved, Mitsuki glanced at her friend who was blushing. Izuku broke into laughter at that and then looked at her. Well. I always wondered where I got my craftiness from. Seems I am not the only mastermind here. Izuku said, which made everyone break out into laughter. She seems like a nice lady, only if I had met her earlier, All Might thought to himself. Izuku enjoyed moments like this where he and his group could relax just fine. Then the screen turned black and the words appeared on the screen. EP.3, Aftermath of the Raid. To be continued. Military Line Assault. Narrator Gray. It's been about 4 weeks since Izuku's little trip out to the park, and everyone from all sides is wondering why the Verdant group hasn't done anything in the entire 2 weeks, as there have been no movements on their side at all. Maybe they are taking a break, Mina suggested. No, it can't be that simple, Aizawa narrowed his eyes, there is something fishy going on here. People were wondering if they hit the limit on how much land they could gain and control, which had started to give the government a boost as they reinforced the defense lines on both sides, but what no one knew was that Izuku Midoriya aka the Verdant Emperor was about to initiate his plans for one of his larger scale battles that were about to happen. I knew it, Aizawa sighed, Verdant is not the type of person to take a break in the middle of something so big. Now you might wonder where this battle will take place, but he's made it clear to his side what they were doing. Izuku planned to wipe out the military defense line that was set up in Tottori and Okayama, as they had now gained and stabilized their control of the underworld in all of the orange areas on their map of Japan. 2 prefectures at once, Nezu rubbed his chin, it will be difficult, but with the resources, Verdant has it is quite possible. As such, it was time to make their move, and the moment they did would be large, as Izuku was planning to reveal more of his member count, which would draw more attention to them but also be a display of their power, since some criminal organizations in other areas of Japan like in Tokyo were thinking they were at their limit in how far they could go. Naive fools, Dabi smirked, still trying to resist the inevitable. Not surprising though, Izuku said, think from their perspective. We are not villains, well technically we are, but we are not spreading terror either, so they are not sure where we stand. As such, this would be a demonstration of power over them as well, which would force them to submit or be wiped out. From my experience as a hero, I surely say that there are people who will happily accept the latter but won't yield to anyone, All Might said. As such, early in the morning before the sun had even risen, the Verdant organization was completely awake and on the move. Waking up so early in the morning, Dabi groaned, I didn't sign up for that. Wow, I didn't think you know how to sign, Himiko said with an amused smile, you know that whole homeless thing and all. I told you, I was not homeless since I was born, Dabi said with annoyed snark. It was the start of week 5 when Izuku had been last seen in public, and now he was about to make a large statement as he looked over all of his men in the hangar. Oh boy, I am always excited for little listener speeches, Mike said, they are quite motivating for me as well. Good morning my men. Today we will be launching an assault on the military line that is currently being held on the borders of the Tottori and Okayama prefectures. The government has supplied their military with all of their equipment, which is highly destructive and will result in high death counts on our side if we fail to break their line. This isn't like fighting the heroes where we get up close and personal and then break their line. No, this is going to require strategy, as we are fighting men of war who have trained to deal with hostile forces and kill no matter what. If we are able to break their line, we will push our control completely down towards Yamaguchi before stopping unless our lines can't hold. Izuku said as everyone started to cheer since they have been itching to get out and fight. You know Midoriya, if this entire revolution thing didn't work out you can easily start your own mercenary band, Compress said. Good idea, I think I will name it Phoenix Corp, Izuku said, and my quirk analysis can be used while disposing of dangerous quirks. Izuku waited for them to calm down and then explained that they would be sending cloned versions of them as the first few waves before the third wave would include real individuals. Good tactic, Nezu said, make enemy waste resources without giving them any real win. The first 2 waves would be used to gain ground in the deadman zone that had been created between both sides and attempt to reduce the military's numbers as best as they could. Izuku knew the military was gearing up for an assault on the Verdant-controlled land as well, since they had been spying on the Japanese military. This is going to get ugly, Aizawa said, this won't be like past incidents where the government was caught off guard. This time they are ready for Verdant to attack. It's also why they are attacking now, since they can't allow the military to bring the fight into Verdant-controlled land. Yeah, can't let civilians in our lands get harmed, Izuku said, not only it is our job to protect them, but it will be really bad if people find our rule to be more dangerous than the current government. As such, they needed to take the fight to them before they expect one. The Verdant would also be showing off their military-grade weapons as well, with their aircraft and tanks that they had acquired through contacts that Izuku had made in other countries that weren't as stable as more modern countries in this day and age. And they were able to import all of that stuff into our country because of the teleporter, Mina said, you know what, teleportation is a broken ability and you can't change my mind. Soon they all split into the divisions that they were assigned to, and Izuku was ready with his guards. For someone who wanted to become a hero without a quirk, doesn't he rely on his guards too much, Nightai remarked. I rely on them because they are reliable people, Izuku defended, besides if I had really achieved my dream of becoming a quirkless hero, I won't be jumping into something like the Kamino incident without any plan of action or good backup. They also had sent a large number of men to the northern front as well in the event that the government attempted to push them on that side while they attacked the south defense line. This way they wouldn't need to worry about their backs, as there was a sheer number of clones on that side with many quirked individuals from who they were copied off. Even though Verdant doesn't want to split his forces, it is inevitable at this point, Momo said. Izuku looked at the clock and nodded his head as it was time to start the battle. As such, he ordered all of the men to their designated portal spots as the portal quirk user started up each portal, which would drop the divisions off in certain locations. Police raids will be much easier if we had this kind of technology, Naomasa said, but I also cannot be sure that no one will use this technology for their own benefit, so it's better that we don't have that. Once the portals opened, the battle was a green light and they were ordered to kill if needed if they couldn't secure the enemy side. Izuku wanted to limit the deaths, but he wasn't going to let his men die just to capture people when it was impossible in some cases, as these were military-trained individuals. Isn't it kind of hypocritical that he doesn't want his people to die but he is okay with killing these soldiers who have families at home? Mina asked. Is it hypocritical? Yes, it is, but at the end of the day, it is all about choice and responsibility, Aizawa explained. The soldiers on the government side have chosen to fight this war despite knowing the risks. The same applies to Verdant's men as well, but in his case, he is taking responsibility for all the deaths and trying to minimize casualties on both sides. As this was starting, the sirens in the border towers of the Hyogo prefecture went off to give their citizens a chance to flee, as cloned members of the Verdant Guard and other members were all telling people to flee as far as they could into the prefecture since the battle was breaking out on the border. Good work, young Izuku, evacuating them early will not make them casualties of war, All Might said while Night Eye grumbled, the war he caused, in the background. This alerted the news media that was stationed almost full-time in the prefectures under the Verdant control as they began a live broadcast cutting into whatever was on TV. Of course, Aizawa rolled his eyes. Verdant is their biggest breadwinner right now. As such, we switch over to UA, where Principal Nezu sent out an emergency alert telling everyone to get to their common rooms in their individual buildings and turn the TV on to the news as something was happening with the Verdant group. Is it really alright for students to watch something so gruesome live on the TV? Namuri asked. Namuri, what Verdant is doing right now is going to change the world that these kids will live in, and it is their right to watch the change that is happening in their world, Nezu explained. Nezu himself ran over to 1A dorms from his office since he knew Aizawa was there since the homeroom teachers lived in their class dorms. Hey, why are you coming over to us? Aizawa asked with an annoyed scowl, watch it in your office or something. Aizawa, stop acting so grumpy, Nezu said, besides students enjoy spending time with me and so do you. The only thing I enjoy is my sleep and strong coffee, Aizawa grumbled under his breath. Once he arrived, he found everyone in their PJs looking at the TV as it showed a reporter talking about sirens going off and Verdant members warning citizens to flee deep into the prefecture as a battle was breaking out. The problem is that we hear no signs of battle though, so we don't know if this is a test or, the reporter said, but got cut off by sounds of explosions which they turned their camera towards and saw it came from the dead man zone that was between the prefectures. Wait. It already started? Ochako said, I thought they will let civilians walk out first. They could hear the reporter talking about how the conflict had broken out, but they didn't know which side started it, and as they were talking, a military convoy of trucks carrying Verdant members passed by the TV crew, which stunned everyone as they didn't know they had trucks like that on the Verdant side. Oh. Trucks are the last things you should be worried about, Dabi smirked. The TV crew got as close as they could and zoomed in since they didn't want to get caught in the conflict, but you could see out in the distance as military tanks were on both sides as each side was shooting at the other. Suddenly Kaminari felt a sting in his arm. He looked to his side and saw Mina and Siro glaring at him. You jinxed it. What did I do? Kaminari asked with teary eyes. There were bodies everywhere as a lot of soldiers on the government side had been caught off guard by the sudden attack. Many in the audience grimaced, including pro-heroes, as seeing dead people is never easy even for heroes. Nezu spoke up at that point. It seems the Verdant was smarter as they likely learned of the government's impending attack and decided to catch them off guard. Regardless, the Verdant military has the clones to cut down their death count and increase the government's. I wonder how many of the 50,000 troops on the government side will walk away from this alive. Nezu said, and everyone tensed even harder at his statement and question as they wondered about it as well. All this could be avoided if Verdant had found a peaceful solution instead of all of this, Mirio said. And that would be? Dabi asked. Mirio stopped and then quickly, Verdant is supposed to be a genius, right? Ask him to find one. They contained to just watch the news report as it went, but back on the battlefront we could find Izuku Midoriya with his guards in a command post near the front lines. They had used the construction team to quickly build a deep underground command post that was reinforced quickly by other quirks so they could be near the front lines if they were needed, but not directly in the line of fire for the government military to land explosive rounds on their location. It really amazes me how many intricate tasks can be easily managed when people use their quirks to their full potential, Momo said. Izuku asked how the battle was going as it had now been an hour into the battle and the start of the third wave had begun. Izuku knew most of the first and second wave clones were already destroyed based on reports, but they had made it up to the direct military lines with those clones, so it was up to the third wave to keep it close combat and to break the defense line that the government had established. Wait. The third wave already? Dabi said, I thought we could stall them for much longer. To be fair, my clones do break with a decent amount of damage / they are strongest, Twice said. Overall, we are close to breaking the line. As it stands, Tottori will break first, which will allow us to come into the side and rear of the forces at Okayama. We have hundreds of Twice clones on the battle line that is making clones left and right of our soldiers. We are also using clones to retrieve our wounded. Within the next half an hour we should break it, and the moment we do we can use the military transport helicopters. We have to get a lot of forces deep into the prefectures and push down to Yamaguchi, as we can prevent a new defense line from being made in the orange-marked land. Said Dabi as he was the head of the military troops overall with Stain as the second in command. Well, look at that, Dabi said with a smug smile, I am commanding the same man I once looked up to. Don't test your luck, Stain growled, I can beat the shit out of you even with these cuffs. Now talking about Stain, that man has been doing amazing work as he was sent in ahead of time deep into the lands and was assigned with some clones of his to take our corrupt government officials across the orange-marked land. This way they didn't need to deal with corrupted officials later that were still around and get accused of ruling with an iron fist if they wanted to get rid of them. Well, that's one way to do it, Nezu said, adding one more bullet point to his diary. Soon another half of an hour passed and reports came in from multiple places. 1. The defense line was broken in Tottori but also in some places of Okayama, which would speed up the battle quickly. Good, Izuku sighed, sooner this ends, the fewer people die. They also received reports from the northern line as the government attempted to have heroes push south, but it ended up failing due to the forces they had placed up there. To think that Verdant has better foresight than the person with that quirk, Himiko said, which earned her a glare from Night Eye. One special quirk user from an advanced team was called Explosive Vision. This allowed the user to focus on one point with eye contact, and if they turned their quirk on, then they could cause explosives to go off at that point. Do you think that this is Bakugo's cousin? Mina asked. Possibly. I mean, both have explosion-based quirks, Kirishima said. Stop running your brains, Bakugo said, annoyed, and I don't have any cousins with this quirk. Now the explosives weren't big in any regard as it would be compared to half of a grenade going off, but combined multiple clones of the said user using the quirk at the same time and they become a problem for others. As such, a large number of these quirked individuals were made and spread across all of the prefectures in the north as they used their quirk to stop the advancement of the northern government forces, which were mostly heroes with a lacking of military members. You know, it is also a talent to find someone with a particularly useful quirk in an organization with over 100,000 people, Mimuri said. As such, the attack by the northern government defense line failed as they couldn't get past the explosives that kept going off. Heh, Bakugo smirked, explosions are best. This made Izuku smile as his plans were going well and only small problems had risen across the entire battlefronts, as some people with flight quirks did cause problems on the north battlefront but were killed when they got too close. When this is all over, I want as good as a death count as we can get, Izuku said, and they all nodded their heads. What are you going to do with that? Parade it around with pride and add them to your achievements, Night Eye said, but Izuku decided to ignore him. They had the military transport helicopters lift off from their position, which was a bit deeper in the Hyogo prefecture, and advanced. They had to be careful to fly low enough to not get on the radar of the navy ships from the government that was in the waters between Kagawa and Okayama as well. Come to think about it, why didn't Verdant buy battleships as well? Toru asked. Well, I think hiding it would have been a bigger problem, Momo replied. Overall, the navy was the largest issue for Izuku since they kept sending damn missiles toward the battlefield, which without a doubt cost them a lot of lost men. We need to figure out how to deal with the damn navy, Izuku said as he slammed his fist on the table. Finally something good happened, Night Eye said. You think the death of my men is a good thing, Izuku said as he glared at Night Eye. It's better than heroes dying, Night Eye replied. Everyone agreed, but no one really had a good idea since they didn't have any ground to ship missiles nor any viable plans to get a quirked user close enough to the ships to take them out. Though Stain came up with a long-term plan and suggested sending a large number of Toga clones in to take over the ships. Once we are done with taking the Orange Land over, we can spend time having Toga clones take the positions of sailors that are in the docks of Kagawa or other places. This way we could slowly replace them. We would do this by getting a few clones of Toga on a ship that carries a few marbles of Twice clones and Mr. Compress. This way, Twice could make more clones of Toga on board and Mr. Compress could hide the bodies in marbles as well so they don't get found. Once that happens, Toga can lure victims in to get captured and transform into them until an entire ship is taken over. Once that happens, we replace it with our members and have them use the ship on the other naval ships, as we should only use clones on the ship so we don't lose any members since it would get destroyed by the other ships. Stain suggested. Great idea. Himiko exclaimed, Stainy, I didn't know you can use anything other than your blade as well. You think I survived in the world just with my sword alone? Stain growled under his breath. Everyone looked at him in shock and he asked them what was wrong. Nothing. That was an amazing plan, Stain. Toga, go get some clones, as he said, in the prefectures that have any naval forces and start the plan since we really don't need to wait. Izuku said, and Toga nodded her head and had clones of her, Twice, and Mr. Compressor made as they headed back to the main base and would get the clones teleported to a small base they had hidden in Kechi. Great. Thanks to Himiko we can now decrease our losses. Izuku looked at Himiko and beamed, thank you, you are really a lifesaver. Go on, keep praising me, Himiko giggled, jokes aside. I am always there for you. Meanwhile, Ochako looked at the interaction with an awkward smile. Another hour went by and the defense lines in Tottori and Okayama were completely shattered and Verdant forces had moved completely into the prefectures and were pushing further south. Finally, we are in, Dabi said. Can you please add context to that? It sounded pretty weird to me, Hawk said. Is that so? Dabi raised his brow, and here I thought you liked hearing that. Dabi smirked while Hawk's face started resembling his feathers. The transport helicopters went south further before the lines were completely broken and had dropped forces off in Hiroshima to cut off the retreat of the military forces and in Yamaguchi. As such, battles were raging in those prefectures as Verdant forces from Tottori pushed into Shirmaine and met some resistance, but not enough to stop them since more forces were focused in Okayama and the military had attempted to retreat via Hiroshima since their navy was providing cover, but it didn't help them in the grand scheme of things since they had already been cut off by the Verdant before they fully started their retreat. As such, the naval forces of Japan could only watch from afar as their ground forces were taken prisoner over the next few hours. Man, I don't think there is any hope for government at all, Kamianri said. All they can do now is pray for good luck or bring someone like All Might to their side. Someone like All Might, Mina placed a hand under her chin, maybe his cousin but not from here. How about America? He lived there before. Yeah, that works. He would be All Might's twin Anne. Kaminari's eyes landed on Snipe, and he could wear a hat like Snipe Sensei and will talk in a weird accent. Young Ishido, young Kamianri, please calm down, All Might said with a sweat drop, and why would I have an American cousin? That sounds hysterical. Hey guys, Izuku called them out, we can name him All Might, what do you say? Mina. Kaminari and Izuku stared at each other for a moment and burst out laughing. Young Izuku, not you too, All Might sighed. This brought an end to the South defense line and allowed Verdant to take control of all orange-marked land on their maps, which meant they now publicly controlled all of the purple and orange lands. One more step closer to success, Izuku thought to himself. They held control of the underworld in the pink land, light blue land, and portions of the green land. Then the screen turned black and the words appeared on the screen. EP.25 Military Line Assault. To be continued. Battle Aftermath. Narrator Gray. Izuku sat in his temporary office inside a building in the Okayama prefecture as they had completed gaining control and stabilizing as best as they could over the past few days that had passed. Their citizens of the Hyogo prefecture border towns all had returned to their homes with only a few destroyed since most of the fight was pushed into Okayama and Tottori prefectures, which then spread to the other orange prefectures as well. Poor souls, hope their insurance covers the cost of their house repairs, Ochako said. I don't think insurance covers wars or bombing, Izuku said with an awkward smile. Izuku was reviewing the reports of all of the dead and the damages that had been caused to the large-scale battle. Overall, in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't horrible compared to other wars since Izuku was focused on keeping death counts down as best as he could, but it still hurt to see the numbers in front of him. Grieving for the victims you created, Night Eye narrowed his eyes, how poetic. Does he even know what poetry is? Momo whispered in Jiro's ear, who looked at Night for a moment before replying. I don't think so. The death counts including all sides in this war had now surpassed 100,000 as the entire death count, which is still being counted at this point, was sitting at 171,500 an estimate. This was the death count for the entire war, but for this individual battle for the orange prefectures, it was a total of 135,300 deaths for this segment of the war. These numbers are most likely due to the fact that this time neither side was holding back, Nezu said, only time will tell how many more will die this war. Overall, those numbers are amazing since this was a war for an entire nation, but it still was haunting to see the numbers themselves right in front of him. There is nothing amazing in all of this, Mirio clenched his fist, there is nothing positive about people dying. The government military side and little heroes had suffered a massive death count since they had around 50,000 troops or so. Of the 50,000 troops deployed by the government, only around 13,500 troops remained alive, but that wasn't really what bothered Izuku the most of the numbers, or was the uptick in deaths on his side, which overall death count rose from 200 overall in the war to 15,000 by the end of the battles. Oh, we lost many people too, Himiko said with a sad frown. It was inevitable, Dabi said, we can't expect to stay unharmed after poking a hornet's nest. No, the fact that around 84,000 civilians had died due to the fact that the government didn't order their civilians to retreat. That fact annoyed Izuku greatly and made him pissed with the government, since it only took starting the siren spread across the prefecture and going over the intercom system connected to it to start ordering people to flee, which would have caught on, but no. Due to the fact that the government didn't order their civilians to flee until about an hour or so into the conflict, a lot of people died when they didn't need to. Why didn't the government just evacuate people earlier if they knew that there is going to be battle in those areas? Toru asked. Because they wanted to look strong, Aizawa replied, the public's trust in the government and heroes is already wearing down, so in their head telling the public to evacuate their houses means showing weakness, which they don't want. Izuku sighed and sat the reports assigned and started reading the reports on the new member counts, as they didn't have them done until recently, even though they had taken over the underworld before the fight had started. Heh. Himiko smirked at Dabi, looks like someone slaking off. Shut up. And who said it was my job? Dabi growled. I don't know, but amongst all of us you are the one who slacks off the most, Himiko said with a shrug. Their new member count was 1,695,000 members, with combat-able forces standing at 820,000 members, which were amazing in Izuku's mind, as they were close to having a million-strong fighting force. These numbers of course never included the public supporters across Japan, which had only increased with time. That's great, Izuku said, having the public support on our side is much more important. Izuku had also received word that foreign governments had reached out to Verdant and asked if there was any way for the war to come to an end, since the international community was freaked out after the military defense line battle. Okay, so now they interfere when they get confirmation on how dangerous this organization really is, Night Eye said with venom in his voice, and even then they are reaching out to the criminals instead of the national government to help them. I guess it was my fault for expecting so much from spineless cowards. Izuku had a message sent back to all of them that was simple. We are here to stay, as the only way for this to end is for the government of Japan to surrender or for Verdant to be killed off or imprisoned, said the message Izuku had delivered to all foreign governments that contacted them. Was it really a good idea to tell them that your death is one of the options? Momo asked. I don't think that's such a big deal, Izuku shrugged. At this point, Verdant is not a person, instead it has become an ideal that will carry on even if I am not the one leading them, Izuku explained, besides killing me won't be that easy. I have my merry band of Teletubbies with me all the time, Izuku said with a smirk, while Verdant guards groaned in the offense. The media had been reporting non-stop on the aftermath of the battle and showed the devastation. Izuku had made sure to leak information to the media that was under his control and even to media that wasn't under his control of the fact that the government of Japan didn't order the civilians to retreat until an hour in of the battle. Shit. I don't see the public taking it too kindly, Midnight grimaced. Izuku laughed at the government's reactions as they tried to put all of the blame on the Verdant group, but it didn't really work well, as Verdant was quick to get information out there about what happened in the battle, as well as the fact that TV crews were on site the entire time, which didn't help the government in trying to control the narrative. You know, at this point accepting their flaws will bring them more positive support instead of denying it, Ochako said. Though we can switch to others' viewpoints, such as the viewpoint of those at UA, as all of the students were sitting in the auditorium. Hey look, most of us are sitting in the same place as our counterparts, Mina pointed out. Wow. So trippy. Toru exclaimed as well. Principal Nezu had an announcement to make in regard to the war. I hope whatever he is going to say is not headache-inducing, Aizawa said. Me too, Aizawa, me too, Nezu silently added. I wish we were here for better reasons, but the government has announced that they will start pulling people with provisional licenses into the war. This means that you have a high risk of going on the front lines and being involved in the conflicts that are going on right now. Nezu announced, and everyone was stunned. Shit. Those bastards are already pulling students into this conflict, Aizawa growled under his breath. But the decision to join or not still lies with students, Nezu pointed out. I hope most of them understand that this is not their battle and sit this one out, Namuri said. Battlefield is not a place for children, heroes or not. They knew that there was the risk of this going on, but to think the government was actually doing it was shocking and scary. All Might, who was sitting on the stage, gripped his hands because he didn't like the fact that the students would be involved in the war. I don't see why it is such a big deal to let hero students get involved in a war, Knight, I said. You allow them to fight giant robots in the entrance exam, make them fight like gladiators in the sports festival, and allow them to do hero work on their internships, but then you draw a line at going to fight a war. Knight, I scowled, hypocrisy at its finest. At this time I can offer you a way out, as every year we have to renew your provisional license paperwork, but I've delayed doing so and the timeline for it to be submitted happens to be next week. As such, if you don't wish to be sent to war, then I will let your provisional license expire, but if you wish to keep them and risk your life in the combat zones, then please let the staff know and we will renew your paperwork. I honestly advise against renewing your licenses. Principal Nezu said, shocking them all. Sir, you are the principal of a hero school. Shouldn't you boost students' morale and encourage them to be heroes? Mirio asked. While your argument is valid, I do not want to send children to a battlefield that might be the death of them, Nezu replied. Nezu was being honest, as he didn't see the government winning at the rate it was going. No matter what they did, it appeared that they were going to lose, since the Verdant now had more than 25% of the country under their control, and it would likely only expand. And the funny part is that Nezu is making this assumption without even knowing the real control the Verdant has, Momo said. A discussion broke out among the students, and most third years decided to renew while only half of the second years decided to renew. It must be Mirio's influence, Izuku thought to himself. Nezu sighed and wished they would all refuse to renew, but he knew that wouldn't happen. I am glad that true heroism still exists amongst the new heroes, Knight, I said. And real stupidity too, Aizawa remarked. Nezu informed them that he would renew for those that had decided to and let the others expire to prevent them from being shipped off to the front lines. Soon he dismissed the students back to their dorms and called a staff meeting. I was kind of hoping that Nezu will let us relax as well, Namiri sighed. There is no rest for teachers, I guess. Nezu found himself in front of his staff as he looked at all of them. It's only a matter of time before the government loses. Nezu said. Glad to see how little faith you have in the governing institutions of this nation, Knight, I said. Can you really blame me, Miria? Nezu said with a chuckle, because from where I am sitting, all I can see is a bunch of idiots doing everything in their power to save their face while Verdant is taking over the country without them realizing it. They all asked how sure the odds were, and Nezu said it was a 70% chance they would lose. They asked what allowed for the 30% chance to win, and Nezu said if the government got even more brutal in their methods and attempted to bomb the Verdant leaders with a missile if they were ever out in the open like at the park. Still think it was a good idea to take me to the park? Izuku asked his mom. Yes, Inko replied without batting an eye, people need to know what kind of person you are. Trust me, that will help you in the long run. If he shows his face in public for long enough, or they know he's in a building for long enough, then you can bet that the Navy will likely be ordered to shoot a missile at his location to try and take out the leadership, Nezu said, and they all nodded their heads and asked what if he was in a highly populated area. As if that has stopped them before, Hawks muttered under his breath. Nezu chuckled and spoke up. The government won't care, as you can see from the battle at the military defense line. They didn't even evacuate the civilians, and they still dropped missiles near civilians to take out the Verdant members that they could. Nezu said, and they all paled in the realization that it was true. The government wasn't caring about the death count on their side as long as they could wipe out the Verdant group, which is proving near impossible due to the clones. But how will they justify bombing a civilian-filled area just to take out one man? Kirishima asked, aren't they presenting themselves as good guys? Spiky hair, do you really think they care? Bakugo asked, besides, they know that once they win this conflict they can easily push all their crimes under the rug. Bro, they can't possibly hide something so big, Kirishima argued, and even if they tried, people will forget and move on with their lives, Bakugo said, and if you don't believe me, just look at the two biggest and most historical cities of our nation. Nezu also suggested that the government might try to put an assassination team together to kill Verdant Emperor. All Might, Lumillion might be pulled on a mission to do an assassination of Izuku Midoriya due to Mirio's quirk. He would be one of the best candidates for the mission, and he had chosen to renew his provisional license. Nezu said, and All Might paled at that statement and said he would warn Mirio of the chance of it happening. And what are you going to tell him? Not to put down a criminal? Night, I asked. No, I will tell him to make the right choice, All Might replied. I don't mind if the one for all user operates in a gray area, but acting on someone else's orders is not acceptable. Izuku fanatically looked around as he heard a deep male voice in his ears. Zuku, what happened? Eri asked while looking at him with curious eyes. Did you hear someone? Izuku asked. No, Eri shook her head. Oh, Okay, Izuku said, still trying to figure out where that voice came from. All Might soon found Mirio and sat him down for a talk. Nezu wanted me to warn you that when you are pulled by the government for the front lines that there is a chance you will be used as an assassin to kill high-level officials on the Verdant side. One person, in particular, would be Izuku Midoriya since the government wants him dead. Well, someone is famous, Himiko said. What can I say, I often leave a strong impression on people, Izuku said with a grin as well. Sadly Mirio, this isn't your hero duties like you think it is. You will be a soldier of war and not a hero, as this isn't a hero versus villain fight. There are big differences between them, and you are going to be using your quirk to kill and not to save people. This stopped being a villain and hero thing the moment Verdant Emperor solidified his ideas and vision in the minds of the people. Right now it's projected that half of the country supports him, and that is only growing by the day. He isn't a villain because he is a political leader of an opposing faction. This is not a villain uprising but a civil war. Do you understand? All Might said, since he didn't want Mirio to confuse being a soldier and killing with being a hero and saving. Heroes have to kill every so often, but it should be a last resort, and that isn't the case here, as this was a war of kill or be killed. Wow, Toshi, I am surprised. You said you won't tell him what to do, and now you are sitting there influencing his mind just to save that boy, Knight, I said, but at the end of the day it will be fruitless. Because realistically, what can a powerless person do against someone like Mirio who has ultimate attack and defense? Oh, I won't sell powerless people short if I were you, Miria, All Might said while giving a side eye to Night Eye. They often archive unbelievable feats. I will believe in them when I see them doing something worthwhile, Night Eye replied. Lemillion looked stunned as he looked at his mentor and nodded his head as he gritted his teeth. So, we're not heroes anymore, he asked, and All Might nodded his head. How? Mirio asked, how are you all okay with this? Didn't you all dream of becoming a hero too? Yes, we did, and I won't lie, it is disheartening to see the hero system getting demolished, but at the core of it, we all wanted to help people with our gifts, Momo replied. Well said, Yaoyorozu, Aizawa said with a proud smile. Indeed, the hero system will likely end even if the government somehow won. The public doesn't really support it that much anymore due to all the information that came out. It will likely end up in a system similar to what Verdant is implementing in his controlled prefectures, with the police having people similar to heroes but under stricter rules and transparency, which I actually like, as it is forcing people that truly only want to save people into the field. Toshi, you are really naive if you think the public can handle the truth, the things that happen behind the scenes, Night Eye chuckled, and before you answer remember that these are the same people who freak out over some stupid conspiracy theories. I will be honest with you. I don't support our government anymore. I wish the government would surrender in all honesty to spare the people that will die the longer this keeps going. All Might said, shocking Lemillion at the fact that All Might had given up on their government. Is it really though? Nijire asked, I mean, why would anyone ride a sinking ship? He asked if it was because Izuku Midoriya was leading the other side, and All Might shrugged and said he didn't know, but he would admit that Izuku Midoriya had broken his faith in the government and system so much that he can't support it with everything he's been learning. He is not the only one, Momo thought to herself. Growing up in the privileged environment had made me oblivious to many of the problems around us. The government allowed a lot of people to die in the recent battle since they didn't order the civilians to retreat until an hour into the battle. After everything and the more I learn about what they are doing, the less I can see myself supporting them. As such, I want to see what type of country Izuku Midoriya will lead. All Might said. Don't worry, I will make you proud, Izuku said. I don't have any doubt about that, All Might replied. He stood up and prepared to leave, but before he left, Mirio asked if he would be willing to see what government Izuku Midoriya lead even if he was an emperor of Japan, as his name applies. Huh? Mirio was startled by the sudden question that was thrown at him. Meanwhile, Night Eye narrowed his eyes at Mirio, who was struggling to answer the questions. All Might paused at that and shrugged. I don't know what true form of government he would have, but I think it would be similar to what we have right now. We do have an emperor right now, but he has zero political power, but I don't know how involved Izuku Midoriya would be in the government. If you get a chance, then you could ask for both of us. All Might said as he walked away, leaving Mirio there to sit in his thoughts. Let me tell how good All Might is at telling people things that give them existential crisis, Izuku snickered as he remembered when All Might first told him that quirks can be passed on. Indeed, Lemillion aka Mirio had a lot to think about since he didn't know what to do as the 9th user of One for All, because he didn't know if the quirk was meant to stop someone like Verdant Emperor when he was more or less fighting for a lot of people of Japan against a government that seems to be more corrupt. Mirio, it is not that hard, Night Eye said, as the future symbol of peace you have to preserve peace by any means necessary. Then the screen turned black and the words appeared on the screen. EP.26, Battle Aftermath. To be continued. Desperation. Narrator, Gray. It had been some time since the large-scale battle that the military defense line incident was conducted, and it also has been long enough to stabilize most of the area that the Verdant group had taken over during that mission. Great, Izuku sighed, one less thing to worry about. However, all things were not easygoing as word had reached Izuku about the desperation that the heroes and government have reached in attempting to end the war. From what has been gathered through the bug quirk user is that the government is planning to aim for Izuku's head in an assassination attempt that they were planning to conduct. Wow! An assassination attempt. Who would have predicted that? Nemuri made a sarcastic remark. The problem the government was facing was finding Izuku's location, which Izuku and the Verdant group had made it near impossible to find due to all of the bases spread across Japan and internationally. Then there is the issue of even finding one of the bases to start with since they were all hidden. Well, if that's the case, why don't I invite them myself, Izuku thought to himself. Zuzu, what happened? Ochako asked, you looked like you were lost for a moment. Nothing serious, Izuku said, I was just wondering if leaking information about one of my bases would be beneficial or not in this situation. Huh? Why would you do that? Ochako asked. Well, there are some pros as well as cons as well, Izuku explained, wonder what Verdant will do next. As such, Izuku had called a meeting, and what this meeting was about was considering leaking a location of a fake base. Izuku's eyes went wide as soon as he heard that. Then he looked to his side and saw Ochako giggling at him. Everyone was concerned about sacrificing one of the actual bases since they were so well hidden and took time to set up. As such, they needed to decide on how they would allow the government to find Izuku's location without setting anything off, but also make it accurate enough to pull the government in without risking really anything. I don't think it will be that difficult though, Mina said. I mean, I'm pretty sure that they are desperate enough to act on any entail you throw at them. Still, it doesn't hurt to be a little cautious while making plans that affect everyone, Momo added. As they sat there and talked about it, Stain proposed an idea that caught their attention. What if we leak a fake advance base? Stain suggested, and he was asked to explain what he meant. Stain walked over to the current war map on the wall that showed the places they controlled and the publicly controlled place where the government forces were located at. He then pointed at Aichi on the map, which they controlled the underworld but not publicly. What I am suggesting is to leak somehow a fake plan of us aiming to take the prefecture of Aichi over. There are a lot of ports/docks in this prefecture with a lot of warehouses which include a lot of abandoned ones. As such, we could start converting it into a fake base and allow a hero or someone to spot a few of our men in the area which they could track down to the warehouse. Stain said it would be reasonable to find a hidden base in Aichi since the group would end up pushing toward that sooner or later. Great idea. This way we can easily lure them in without giving away any of our assets, Dabi said. Still, it is really surprising that Stain is the one who is coming up with these ideas. What was that brat? Stain glared at Dabi. I already told you I am not stupid, didn't I? They would also have Izuku make a few appearances instead of a clone of himself so that the government would know he was real. So Verdant is going to give them enough bait that they will go through with their assassination attempt without thinking about it, Nezu murmured to himself. Later on, they could send a clone in his place so they didn't truly risk his life if a random hero decided to get a stupid idea in trying to take Izuku out before the government attacks. I would honestly like to believe that no one is stupid enough to try that, but... Momo let out a tired sigh. If given a chance, someone will surely try that, Jiro said, and Momo nodded her head. They were all liking the idea and they could use a lot of clones without risking their actual men for the assault. Sometimes it really feels unfair how Verdant is playing this entire thing on easy mode while his opponents are barely holding themselves together, Kaminari said. Listen, twerp, life is not fair. Deal with it, Stain replied without even looking at him. After some more decision-making, the plan came to a conclusion and it was time to set it into motion. Clones of the construction teams were made and would be taken via the teleportation gate. They would also be using a secondary location to do the transportation instead of leaving via the main base in the event a hero goes into one of the teleportations somehow. This would stop any tracking devices from giving away the main bases. Good, defending the main base should always be a priority, Izuku said. Another few weeks passed and it was time to put the plans into motion, but on a separate note, the Verdant group had taken over all of South Japan's underworld since they had recently gotten all organizations in the Grey-Colored Land to give in to the group. A few groups were put down due to what they were doing, for example, as one organization took part in human trafficking which Izuku had wiped out. As such, the Verdant group now controlled everything. In light blue down to the very end of Japan, in gray in regards to the underworld, and had the orange and purple publicly controlled. So now, Verdant legit has half of the country under his control, Aizawa said. That means his influence will still haunt the nation even if they manage to kill him. Not necessarily, Night Eye said while pushing up his glasses. A few good policies and well-crafted propaganda said by a few likable faces will easily eradicate his presence from people's minds. And if push comes to shove, we can start spreading rumors about how he tortured his men, used women in his group without their consent, and his vows of changing the country were nothing but empty promises. And you think people will believe you after all the things you have done? Himiko asked as she glared at him. Oh, they definitely will, Night Eye smirked. All we have to do is hire some trustable faces as our speakers and spread those rumors around for long enough that they are indistinguishable from the truth. Sir, that sounds like something a villain will do, Mirio said, feeling a little uncomfortable by his mentor's words. In return, Night Eye flashed him an annoyed look. Mirio, remember this. Sometimes you have to get mud on you while you fight pigs like Verdant, Night Eye explained, and when that happens make sure that no one other than you can see that mud. They were still gathering new numbers on how many forces they gathered from the new organizations as they were stabilizing the groups into the main group, but it was slowly working out. Oh right, I kind of forgot how they have to rearrange so many things every time they get a new group of members to join their group, Mina said with a slight grimace. Now back to the main topic at hand. They had the fake base in the middle of being set up and supplied with weapons and stuff to look like an advanced base getting ready for battle with the defense line from the backside. Izuku had been making appearances and the bug user had been paying close attention to anything moving around the warehouses. On the 6th day of setting the fake base up, they discovered a hero locating the base. And thus Rat found the bait, Shinso said. Now we have to see if the rat is smart enough to spot the trap along with it or not. This hero was none other than Death Arms, which Izuku found ironic. That was one of the heroes that scolded Izuku all that time ago before he had set off on this path. Karma is a bad bitch, Himiko said in a Shinji-sanji way. After allowing Death Arms to confirm Izuku's presence and Izuku even letting himself get injured by a knife he was playing around with that showed him bleeding, which meant he wasn't a clone, Death Arms left and the bugs followed him to hear what he reported. So Hungry Rat didn't notice the trap, Shinoso said with a smirk, and now he will bring his mischief along. It was about 10 minutes later that Death Arms stopped moving and pulled out a phone as he started to make a call. The bugs listened in and he was calling the task force that was created for dealing with the war. They listened and heard Death Arms report Izuku's current location and how he told them that it appeared to be a forward base of the Verdant group that was likely preparing for a push into the Aichi prefecture. They could hear the voice from the other side of the phone that told him to retreat for now since they didn't need to spook the Verdant group. They were serious when they said Death Arms might spook us, didn't they? Compress asked with an amused smile. It seems like it, Dabi replied with an equally amused smile. The call ended, but the spying didn't stop as Izuku's group already knew where the task force was based at, which was in a bunker underground in Tokyo. It was an interesting place to have their task force since it didn't allow for direct attacks, but still, it was easy to find it using the bug user. They listened into the conversations and found that they were planning to send the assassin team in to try and take Verdant Emperor aka Izuku Midoriya out. They assembled a legit task force to take out a single quirkless boy, Izuku said. I am really honored by that. Izuku though wanted to know who was on the team aiming for his life since they haven't heard any words of that. However, they soon learned who it was going to be. The people on the team aiming for Izuku's head and to destroy the organization were the big three of UA working with other pro heroes with a range of different abilities. Wait. Why I am getting dragged into this? Nijire said, I never wanted to be a part of this. We don't have a choice, Tamaki explained, we technically agreed to this when we renewed our licenses. Izuku was also shocked that the government was sending the current #1 pro hero Best Jeanist on the mission as well. Even though that bastard is a good hero, he is a big sucker for rules and has a big stick up his ass in regards to how a hero should look, Bakugo said. Overall it was a risk to send the newer #1 pro hero since if he failed it would be a large dent in Japan's hero system. Especially after what Hawks did at the National Diet Building on live television, Night Eye said as he glared at the said hero. Glad you loved the show, Hawks replied with a smirk. However, the government wasn't playing around as they had a large number of police forces and military forces joining the raid. It looked more like a traditional raid than an attempt on his head, which confused them until Izuku realized that all of the other forces of the raid didn't know of the main mission for Lumillion who had directly received the order. Now it makes sense, Nijire said, if we knew that Mirio was ordered to do something like that, we wouldn't have participated in the first place. Interesting, I wonder if Lumillion will have the courage to try and kill me, or will he still play his role as a hero? Izuku thought as he sat in his office. They knew the raid by the government would be going on in a few days and they were preparing everything they could as they were setting up traps across the docks and other things as well. Mirio clenched his fist as he worded that as well. Was he really going to go for the kill even before trying to apprehend him? Was he really going to abandon his morals just because someone ordered him to? And hell, the people who are ordering heroes around, do they even know what a hero's duty is? He knew the answer to all those questions but right now he didn't want to acknowledge it. Soon time passed and Izuku had his clone sitting in the warehouse working at a desk with a lot of guards around him. However, what the government didn't know was that there were no real members of Verdant in the warehouse as they had all been replaced once they got spotted by the hero the first time. Of course, because they won't have the backbone to face heroes head-on with their real bodies, Night Eye remarked. That's called having a brain and using practical strategies, Aizawa said. That's the same reason why heroes don't go around challenging villains for one-on-one fights like the heroes in the manga do. Everything was in place and they just needed the government to trigger the trap, which they indeed ended up doing, as about halfway into the day the docks became surrounded by police, military soldiers, and heroes. Within seconds the doors were busted down and everything went silent as Izuku stepped forward with a smile on his face. You know shit is going to hit the fan when the person you think you caught off guard is smiling at you, Kaminari said. Izuku's clone looked around as Izuku and all of the real members were back in the main base watching via the bugs. Of course, they are enjoying the new episode of Miserable Heroes and Their Miserable Plans, in the comfort of their house, Jiro said as she rolled her eyes. Well, if it isn't the new #1 hero. We've gone through quite a few of your #1s recently. All Might, Endeavor, Hawks, and now we are on you. Now I must ask what you are all doing here, since I don't think I was foolish enough to allow a leak so easily. Clone Izuku asked and Best Jeanist stepped forward to speak. It doesn't matter how we found out in the end, does it? We will be arresting you here. Best Jeanist and Izuku looked at him and then the others on the government side before laughing out like crazy. Oh god. His clone is more eccentric than him, Dabi said, exasperated sigh. Lumillion spoke up and asked him what he found so funny. You think the military behind you will allow me to be arrested? No, the moment they get the chance they are going to kill me since they have their orders. I wouldn't be surprised if some of you heroes received orders to kill me either, since quite a few of you have quirks that are perfect for killing me off if given the chance. Clone Izuku said as he smirked and waved his hand as the crates around him broke open to reveal massive amounts of clones. Do remember, I always plan for different encounters, so the possibility of this forward base being found was a high one since the government is getting desperate with how much land I've taken under my control. Deal with them. Clone Izuku said as he backed away and the clones moved forward, which set the heroes side off as both sides attacked each other. I find it amusing that how none of them didn't even consider that they might be walking into a trap laid by their enemy, or were they so confident in their abilities that they didn't care as long as they can get to Verdant, Nezu said to himself. Either way, they should have prepaid an exit strategy if things went wrong. Bodies began to drop left and right when Best Jeanist noticed that all of the people on the Verdant side were clones as they got destroyed. They are all clones, so don't hold back. We need the Verdant Emperor. Best Jeanist yelled as he saw Izuku's clone run away out the door as the clones of his men were fighting everyone, making a path for him. Yeah, I think you noticed that little too late there, buddy, Kirishima said, and Verdant himself is a clone as well, so it will be better for them to retreat immediately. But they don't know that, Bakugo pointed out, they are still acting on Death Arm's intel. Lumillion decided to charge after Izuku as he sunk into the ground and propelled himself. However, what Lumillion didn't know was that is what he wanted Lumillion to do, as Izuku was leading him into a trap set in a warehouse further down. Please don't die, Nijire thought to herself. She was pretty sure that Verdant wouldn't kill him, but part of her brain was arguing that he didn't have any real reason to keep him alive either. After about a 5-minute run, Izuku's clone arrived in the warehouse and was taking in breaths as he stopped for a second and was about to walk into others as an act when he noticed something in his eye. It was Lumillion who came flying out of the floor. Hey guys, look, Discount Kitty Pride is here to save the day, Dabi sarcastically said. Huh? You read old superhero comics as well? Izuku raised his brow. I used to read them before that flaming asshole over there started putting me through the ringer, Dabi explained. Still, I never thought you would be interested in this superhero shit, Izuku said. What do you mean? Dabi asked. Don't get me wrong, but I always imagined that you would be more interested in trash revenge fantasies like Redo of Healer or something, Izuku said, and a visible tick mark appeared on Dabi's head. So in retaliation, he threw an empty can of bleach at Izuku, who instinctively raised his hand and caught it. Lucky bastard, Dabi muttered under his breath, but then redirected his attention to the screen. Well, I expected some heroes to follow me, but only you. I think I should feel insulted. Izuku's clone yelled out as he dodged Lumillion's attacks. To be able to avoid Lumillion's punches, man, Verdant's tech is really amazing, Kirishima said. That reminds me, where is Mei? I haven't heard her voice in a while, Izuku said as he looked around and noticed her sitting at the very back working on some blueprints. Izuku let out a chuckle and shook his head fondly, as long as she is enjoying herself. Both of them were now staring at each other when Izuku's clone decided to speak up. Lumillion, I have a question for you. Are you here as a hero or a soldier? Izuku's clone asked and Lemillion froze at that moment and looked shocked he was asked that. Mirio, snap out of that. Don't let him trick you, Night Eye said as he glared at the screen. I ask again, are you here as a hero or a soldier? Izuku's clone asked and Lemillion said he was there as a hero stopping a villain, which made Izuku's clone chuckle. Interesting that I am a villain when I am waging a war for freedom and you are on the oppressing side. Izuku's clone said, and Lemillion frowned and shook his head as he told Izuku's clone that he wasn't fighting for freedom but to take over Japan under his rule as a dictator. Dude, even kids know how to differentiate between right and wrong, Kaminari said. But I am not wrong, Mirio objected, he is technically trying to become the emperor. If you want to argue on the basis of facts and logic, then Verdant has presented plenty of that during the Kamino incident already, Momo replied. Izuku's clone just looked at Lemillion in pity. I was hoping you were better than that, Lemillion, since you most likely received some abuse and discrimination due to your birth quirk, but I guess you have become blind as you rose up in fame. What I am doing is no different than the American War for Freedom and the French overthrowing their king. There have been many wars in history that showed that the people have the right to overthrow the government when it no longer functions. I have made this speech before Lemillion. Izuku's clone yelled out as he dodged an attack from the hero student who kept attacking Izuku. Lemillion gritted his teeth as he just kept attacking while Izuku's clone dodged and talked. Good decision, Mirio, Night Eye said, there is no need to converse with him. That will only distract you from your objective of dealing with him. What are you going to do after you defeat me? Take me to prison where I will be executed since I dared to rise up against the injustices of the government and hero system. Izuku's clone asked, and Lemillion gritted his teeth and said it wasn't right of Izuku to want to rule the country when he could have made changes by joining the system and doing changes from the inside, which made Izuku laugh out loud. Brace yourself, people, here comes one of his speeches, Himiko said as she refilled her bowl of popcorn. From the inside. This system considers quirkless people wastes of space that deserve to die. So how exactly was I ever going to join it when it would kill me the first chance it could get, since it failed to do so while I grew up? You are a fool, Lemillion, and a disgrace as the 9th user of One for All when you should be fighting for justice, not injustice. You are wanting to keep a system that abuses everyone for those with powerful quirks. People like you now. Izuku's clone yelled out, and Lemillion's eyes widened for a brief second as he heard that which made him is the low sound of a muffled gunshot as a bullet hit him in the side. Mirio. Nijire and Tamaki yelled as soon as they heard a gunshot but calmed down when they saw that there was no blood at all. This caused Lemillion to jump away and grab the bullet. His eyes widened when he saw it. Like it? It's the same thing I used on All for One, as it's perfect for multiple quirk users. Such as yourself. It's a nasty cocktail of drugs my group made. Izuku's clone said with a smirk on his face as another shot went off and it hit Lemillion in the neck, who grabbed it. Lemillion realized he couldn't use his quirk. These are from Overhaul. Lemillion asked as he was fighting himself from going to sleep. And thus the strongest piece of the government has been captured, Nezu said, now they are truly on their last leg. And I am worried that they will do something more stupid, Aizawa said, which will doom the entire country. Izuku just smirked as he watched Lemillion go down as he waved for the men hidden to come out and help take Lemillion away. Lock him in quirk cuffs and make sure he is mentioned at all times in the cells. Take him to the new prison site we created on the small islands off of Japan's coast. Izuku's clone said, and they nodded their head as a portal opened up and they walked through it. Izuku's clone then headed back to the main warehouse since the main goal was done as Lemillion was removed from the game. Mirio, I am really ashamed that you allowed yourself to get captured by someone like him, Night Eye said as he gave his student a disapproving look. Do you even understand the severity of this situation? You lost to a powerless person despite having the power to change the weather with a single punch, and to top that off you got shot with a bullet. For God's sake, you have a quirk that lets you phase through things. After his little outburst, Night Eye calmed down and let out a disappointed sigh. I guess all that training about environmental awareness and the ways of quickly disposing of enemies was a waste after all. I am sorry, Mirio said as looked down, trying not to cry. Stop it. Nijire glared at Night Eye. Stop bullying him. And what are you even angry at? This Mirio and that Miro is different people. Nijire, stop. Mirio yelled at her. But no, he is right, Mirio countered, if I can't even take out a single powerless person. What right do I have to even dream of becoming the next symbol? Izuku's clone arrived back and saw the leftover of the battle, which was all of his men defeated except for a few that were closer to him as they stared down the heroes. Well, Genus did pretty well compared to others, Kirishima said. Of course, he did well, spiky hair, Bakugo said, he isn't the number 3 hero just for the show. Well, isn't this lovely? Izuku's clone muttered out loud as everyone turned their attention to him, which made Best Jeanist speak up. Where is Lemillion? Best Jeanist asked and Izuku chuckled a bit. He's been permanently taken care of. Great. And now everyone will think that you are dead. Night. I shook his head. Great work Mirio, great work. In return all Mirio could do was stare at the ground. I'd focus on your situation though since you all looked dead on your feet from the fight while I am quite fueled up for a fight, Izuku's clone was saying when he got cut off by a rumbling sound. Izuku's clone turned around and saw a lot more forces from the government side. They were smart enough to bring back up I guess, Endeavor said. No, there has to be a catch here, Hawk said, I don't know why but something isn't adding up. Well. I didn't think you would take forces away from the defense line. Izuku's clone said as he looked in shock at the military tanks, heroes, police, and other people from the defense line that was between Aichi and Mie prefectures. Idiots. Aizawa said, they pulled out people from other prefectures' defense lines. Who is even coming up with these plans? Namiri asked, they are so sad and desperate when they need to be accurate and well calculated. No someone smart, I can tell you that, Mike added. What they all didn't know was that the real Izuku saw this as well and had the bug user confirm that a good chunk of the forces from the defense line was pulled back with the aim to take Izuku's clone down. Are they stupid? They don't even know it was me still. Izuku yelled. You have to have the talent to make even your enemy mad with your plans, Mina remarked. But then quickly calmed down as his eyes widened and looked at his guards and the men around him. Get everyone up and moving now. I want the forces in Mie to push into Aichi and take it now. Have reinforcements sent and rebuild our defense line in Mie as they move in. We're making a quick grab for Aichi since they weakened their defense line. Izuku yelled out over the communication system in the base which sent the entire base into a frenzy. As expected, Nezu said, Verdant will look stupid if let go of such a gifted opportunity. Izuku ordered twice and the rest of the generals to get clones of themselves on the front line and reinforce every position since this could trigger a larger battle than he intended for. Let's go, guys, time to earn our keep, Compress said. If they could take Aichi then they were only a skip away from UA itself in the prefecture of Shizuoka which was closer towards the northeast side but still in that prefecture. Already setting your sight on UA huh? Nezu said as he stroked his chin. I will be stupid if I didn't, Izuku replied with a challenging grin. In that case, I will be waiting for you with my robots and tea, Nezu said with an equally frail grin, it's up to you to decide which one will you like to take. It would also thin out the government forces over a larger area since they would have more land to block off from the Verdant group which would make things easier in the future. Izuku was desperate to get Aichi even though he didn't need it right now but it would be a huge blow to the government forces if they screwed up in redirecting their forces and lost a prefecture over trying to kill one single clone of Izuku. It is such an understatement, Aizawa said, they will lose more land to Verdant and in return won't have a single thing to show. Then the screen turned black and the words appeared on the screen. EP.27 Desperation. To be continued. The fall of Aichi. Everyone in the Verdant group was scrambling around upon the orders that Izuku had given out. A total of 15 separate advanced units would be sent out in addition to massive amounts of clones of those advanced units within Aichi. The overall defense line that they had between the prefectures of Aichi and Verdant-controlled Mie had started their assault on the defensive line that the government had while reinforcement was being supplied from multiple different bases across the organization. Each base always kept 3 advanced units on hand prepared for combat at any moment's notice which allowed for the rapid response and support of the attack. As such, they were able to rebuild the defensive line they had in the prefecture of Mie quickly in the event the quick response assault without any real pre-planning being made failed. Government provided them with such a good opportunity that even if they failed they won't lose much either, Nezu said. But losing is not an option, Izuku replied, losing with such an overwhelming advantage will cause a huge blow to the organization. Not to mention that losing here will give our opponents time to recover and reinforce other territories, which will be bad for us in the long run. While all of this was going on, Izuku and his Verdant guards all appeared in a command post stationed in Mie that was about 5 minutes away from the defense line. Oi Green. Is it really okay for you to be so close to the battlefield since someone just tried to take your head? Jiro asked. Logically no, it doesn't make sense for me to be there but, it's better this way, Izuku explained, I don't want people to compare me to the head of government organizations who sit in their chairs while soldiers fight in the field. You could hear the sirens going off that was ordering every civilian to retreat from the combat zone as large explosions ripped across the battlefield. Oi nerd. What happened to your motto of securing civilians first? Bakugo asked. No, something is not right, Izuku said as he stared at the screen, even though this is a surprise attack we won't launch explosions without evacuating civilians, unless, wait. Battleships. Izuku was quickly gaining information on where all of their forces and enemy forces were currently located at. I want the clones on the Navy ships prepared to stop any attacks from them and to sink as many ships as possible if they decided to bomb our main troops in Aichi. Izuku yelled as he was moving back, and he knew he heard someone confirm his order and relay it to the communications device they had with a few of the clones on the ship. That brat. How can he order to sink those ships without any care in the world? Does he even know how much they cost? Night Eye grumbled. Not more than the life of his people, Gran replied to him. Within minutes of the attack starting between the two forces on the defensive line, the news broke of the battle as everyone was wondering why the battle started in only Aichi and not the rest of the defense line which Verdant had done in the south defense line. Because we had to fight for other defense lines while this one was a gift from heroes because we presented our leader in front of them, Himiko said. Izuku ignored the media as he focused on the information flowing in from the bug users. Good, Aizawa hummed in approval, make this a habit and it will greatly help him in the future. They actually never bring the actual bug user out of the main hidden base since she was so valuable for the organization and overall war front. It was similar to the teleportation gate user as the main individual never left the base either. They always had 4 advanced teams with them as well since they were extremely valuable to the organization and war effort, but now we are diverging from the war. I do wonder if they are okay with being trapped in the base. Momo asked. I think they understand how important they are to this mission, Izuku said, they are the backbone of most of our operations. Losing them will harm the organization in more ways than we can imagine. Not to mention the fact that it will prolong the war for unforeseeable future. Now as we switch back to the Izuku's clone position, you could see a smile on the fake Izuku's face as he could hear the explosions go off. I don't know why, but it feels like this clone is an evil version of Midoriya, Kaminari said. Well, if you consider all the things he has done so far, he is technically not a good guy, Namuri said, at least his heart is still in the right place. But a great detective once said, Izuku grimaced, cool motive, still murder. Everyone else was confused about what was going on until Izuku broke out into laughter. Oh God. I really can't believe you sacrificed Aichi to try to kill me, said the fake Izuku, which confused them all until they all realized what was going on. The Verdant group had mobilized their forces as they heard requests for reinforcement to arrive at the border of Aichi and Mie, but no one was going to arrive in time as the attack was so sudden and overwhelming. I am pretty confident that this will be the government's worst defeat throughout the war, Nezu said. They lost their forces, their territory, and most importantly they lost their trump card, Mirio, who was single-handedly capable of changing the war. I really messed up, didn't I? Mirio asked, and Night Eye was about to confirm this, but before that, All Might spoke up. Young Mirio, your mistake was that you allowed other people to dictate your flow of life, All Might said. I don't think I would have minded you joining the war if you thought Verdant was wrong, but you joined because you thought it was your responsibility, which was not. Some heroes said that the Verdant organization would break down without him, so they would win in the end since they have him captured in a few moments, which just made Izuku laugh even more. Idiots. I am a fake. I am a clone, you idiots. Did you honestly think we didn't notice Detharm spying on this location? The moment we noticed him we changed the real me out for a fake to finish out the job here, so all you did was waste resources on fake clones. Yelled out the fake Izuku as he laughed, and soon a gun went off as a bullet went off right into his head as he dropped down, and after a few seconds he dissolved into nothing. Crap. My ears, Jiro said, why does he have to yell all the time? Sorry, Izuku said with an apologetic smile. Everyone cursed as they truly had been tricked and would likely lose an entire prefecture over this. The entire group soon headed towards the battle line, but before they reached it they received orders to retreat to the border between Shizuoka and Aichi to set up a new defense line, as the Verdant group had successfully broken through and would soon take full control of the prefecture. One more battle, one more victory, Izuku sighed, and still, everything looks too good to be true. I only hope this doesn't end in tragedy like many sweet-looking stories do. As they retreated, Best Jeanist wondered what happened to Lumilin and if he was truly dead or not. However, he knew one thing is that All Might was going to be devastated since Best Jeanist had learned that the boy was the protege of the man. I wish that was the case, Night Eye scoffed. On the contrary, I won't be surprised if he expressed his joy because Mirio won't be able to harm that boy anymore. Really, Mirai? All Might asked with a sad smile, and I thought you knew me better than that. I thought I knew you, Toshi, but ever since you gave away your power to some random no-name boy, I am not sure anymore, Night Eye replied. However, that should be the least of their concerns since the Verdant group was only taking more and more control of Japan without the government nor heroes knowing about it, as with the fall of Aichi the Verdant group cemented their control of over 50% of the country underworld, as Japan had 47 prefectures total, with 25 prefectures being under their control. Of the 25, there are 13 of them being now under public control once they finish in Aichi, which was about 27% of Japan being publicly controlled by Verdant. Pathetic. What are people in upper management doing? They are getting outsmarted by a 15-year-old brat who wasn't even a full-fledged criminal yet, Night-Eye thought to himself. This was a massive blow to the government forces and both sides knew it because the moment a few days passed and Aichi was stabilized, Izuku had made an announcement online of Verdant controlling 27% of Japan with Aichi falling due to the government pulling their forces back to kill a simple clone of Izuku. Wow, dude, way to shoot a dead man in the foot, Shinso said. It's not his fault that the government itself is giving him the gun and asking him to shoot them, Bakugo replied. There was public outrage from the people that had been supporting the government the entire time since the government had failed to verify if the person was truly Verdant Emperor the entire time. The blame lies on Death Arms for bringing in the false information, Kaminari said. I don't think I agree with you, Momo replied. Death Arms is not a type of hero who specializes in stealth or information gathering. So planning an entire operation based on his info alone was a stupid move in itself. Those that supported the Verdant group were celebrating in the streets across Japan as they saw it as a step closer to the government being changed and the country being put on a better path. How can they celebrate? Mirio thought, can't they see all the death and destruction around them? The government did try to clamp down on the public displays of support but it only made the reactions fierce from those people as some protests did turn violent but Izuku had always made statements telling them to stop and be peaceful as they didn't need to stain their hands as the Verdant would do it instead. Izuku publicly preached for the public citizens that supported him to always be peaceful as best as they could be, which won a lot of support in people's minds. How ironic, Night-Eye said with a twitching eye, it's like giving a Nobel Prize to the creator of the atomic bomb. Now, moving on from the stabilization of Aichi. Izuku had started looking into the growth of the organization since they had taken the grey-marked land of Japan a while back but he didn't get to look at that information overdue to the events. Their member count had risen to 2,116,000 members of which they had 1 million of those members were fit for combat. I really hope this doesn't turn into an all-out combat, Aizawa said, because if it did, I am not sure if we will be able to recover from that. Izuku was honestly stunned as they now had a large standing army. The numbers of combat-capable forces were honestly starting to rival other countries around the world, which shocked Izuku in all honesty, as the largest combat force of a modern military was the Republic of China, which has a standing army of 2.5 million soldiers, though most nations never used their armies and mostly used them for civilian matters as a conflict between nations became harder due to the range of quirks, which could easily change a battlefield as seen in Japan right now. Indeed, the emergence of quirks has changed many aspects of our lives and one of those aspects is how wars are fought, Nomuri said. Before quirks, scientists with big brains and soldiers with brave hearts were used to winning wars. But now a single person with the right quirk can change a lot of things during the war. But I thought quirks are illegal to use in international wars, Izuku asked. Yes, on paper they are, Nomuri didn't elaborate any further but Izuku understood what she was hinting at. However, the death count was also rising quickly with each battle as far more troops on both sides were involved in each individual battle. The entire death count has risen to 232,300 deaths, with 112,300 being government forces, 20,000 being Verdant members, and 100,000 due to civilian deaths. I dare him to release those numbers in public, Night-Eye said with a smirk, then we will see how many of his fanatics will still call him the peacemaker. Izuku wished the government would just surrender but he knew they wouldn't unless they had zero options left, and in all honesty they would be far from that until Izuku had a blade pushed against the Prime Minister's neck demanding them to surrender, but Izuku could only shrug it off for now and hope they come to their senses. To be honest, it doesn't sound like something that will happen anytime soon, Izuku said. Or you can surrender and things can go back to normal, Night-Eye said. But here is a thing, things won't go back to normal even if I am out of the picture, Izuku said, because I have over 2 million people in the Verdant organization. And statistically at least one of them will be capable of continuing our cause by using even worse methods. Moving on from that, Izuku was informed that Lumilin had woken up finally as the sleeping drugs he was shot with on the second bullet had gotten out of his system. Remember kids, don't do drugs, Mike said. But I was injected with drugs without my consent, Mirio grumbled under his breath. In my defense, I didn't consent to get assassinated as well, Izuku said. As such, he was currently freaking out since Lumilin had found himself in a prison cell. What was he expecting after trying to assassinate the opposing party's leader? Tamaki whispered to himself. Izuku sighed since he really didn't want to talk to Lumilin since the man was completely naive in all things Izuku could consider. And you think I want to talk to you, Mirio grumbled. Glad to see that, dislike is mutual, Izuku said. He honestly wondered how All Might came to choose someone so naive as the 9th user of One for All. Oh yeah, he decided to go with the suggestion by Sir Night-Eye who turned Lumilin into a replica of All Might more or less. Izuku thought as he headed towards the teleporter quirk user. And it should have been that way, Night-Eye said, the world needs a symbol, it needs a new All Might. No, it doesn't, All Might said, it needs heroes to rely on, not a single hero. There were no actual teleportation gates set up to the prison system in the event it was ever found and overran. It held all of the prisoners of war that they held, which was honestly a lot from a few battles which did cut into their resources, but Izuku easily made that money back through other means, and as they gained more land they have more funds due to raiding government buildings and other things. So you are using the country's money to feed your prisoners? Jiro asked. Well, we are feeding this country's citizens, so I don't see a problem there, Izuku shrugged. The prison was also one of the smaller islands off the coast of Japan, which limited how the prisoners could escape and granted the Verdant group a chance to retrieve all of the prisoners before they made it back to mainland Japan. Especially considering the fact that the island they built the prison on had no other humans on it, as it was a very small island that wasn't built upon. As such, no one should ever discover the prison that was built deep underground. Man, Verdant can be real cruel when wants to be, Kirishima said. Just imagine if somehow one of them does manage to escape the prison and come out on the surface only to see the vast ocean and no hope in front of them. Izuku would admit that it was a pain to get energy and water to the base, but it had been completed through some technological advancements that he and his doctors in the labs made, which made it easier to do such things. Maybe I should really pick that boy's brain after we are done with this, Power Loader thought to himself. Anyway, Izuku soon was teleported with a few of his Verdant guards to the prison, since they didn't like him leaving the main base alone even if it was going to another base. You can't leave kids alone even for a moment, Dabi said while Izuku glared at him. They didn't want to risk things since they are so close to winning the damn war, and even after that he would have guards with him almost all the time since he would be running the government after the war was over and would be busy constantly, so he would need others to be watching his back while he worked. Indeed, he will be the most important person in the nation once they win the war, Momo said, and considering the amount of security my parents have with them, he will need much more than that. In that case, why don't you have security as well? Jiro asked, and Momo was about to tell her how she doesn't need them, but before that Izuku spoke up. She does have security, Izuku said. Haven't you noticed an increasing number of street vendors around our school, or the 3 new janitors who actually look like pro wrestlers, or the fact that only our dorms have bulletproof glasses on our windows, which is totally out of budget for school, isn't that right, Nezu? Indeed, Midoriya, Nezu hummed in approval. If we had used school funds to purchase those windows, I am afraid that many staff members would have missed their pay for the next few months. Meanwhile, Momo was just too stunned and was looking like a fish out of water. Izuku just accepted his fate to have his guards with him at all times, and soon they all arrived at the prison, where he was escorted to the cell that contained Lumilin. It was deeper in the prison and he was separated from all the other prisoners since Izuku knew not to trust Lumilin not to try something stupid like trying to break out. I am pretty sure that Mirio will definitely do something stupid even if you give him even a little chance, Nijire said. I have spent my last 3 years with him, so you can take my word on this. Izuku had been debating with Verdant guards on if they should remove one for all from existence, and they had come to the decision not to remove it unless Lumillion attempted to break free. How dare he talk about destroying the quirk that has been passed down throughout the generations, Night Eye yelled. Do you even understand the importance of that quirk? Why should Verdant care? Izuku asked very calmly. Pardon? Night Eye asked. I asked, why should Verdant care? Unlike me, he didn't accept the legacy. It's not his problem that the biggest throne on his path is also the current one for all holder. To him, Mirio is just another soldier and one for all is just another quirk. And so if removing that quirk can solve his problem, so then why should he care? Izuku once again asked, but this time she stared directly into Night Eye's eyes. But Night Eye didn't reply. He just sat down with a frustrated expression on his face. Lumillion and all other prisoners of war would be released once the war was over and allowed to go about a normal life, but if Lumillion tried anything during his containment or after the war ended, then one for all would be wiped from his system via the drugs being flooded in his body. A cold chill ran down Mirio's spine as he heard the process of removing the quirk. After a handful of moments, they arrived at the cell that contained Lumillion and a chair was pulled out for Izuku to sit on it. Got to love Mr. Compress and his dramatics. Izuku thought, as the main always seemed to carry a chair for Izuku to sit in when they left the base. Well, thank you, Compress bowed his head. Praise is a true earring for a performer. Izuku honestly thought it was funny how he sat down during the Kamino event when Mr. Compress said he had a chair for him to sit in. Yeah, that was hilarious, All Might said as he thought back to the moment when his biggest nemesis was on the floor, eating dirt while a 15-year child was sitting in front of him while mocking him, and all the heroes. Hello, Lumillion. Izuku started, and you could see Lumillion just staring at Izuku from inside of the cell. I think it's time we have a conversation, don't you? Izuku asked, and Lumillion clenched his fists together and nodded his head. As such, this began the conversation between Lumillion and Izuku inside the Verdant's main prison, where Lumillion had no real hope of escaping from. Thanks, narrator, that was really inspiring, Mirio said with a bitter face. Then the screen turned black and the words appeared on the screen. EP.28, The Fall of Aichi. To be continued. Conversations. Narrator Gray. Lumillion sat there in his jail cell wondering why the leader of the Verdant group wanted to talk to him. What do you want, Verdant Emperor? Lumillion asked with a stressed tone since he honestly didn't know what has happened after he lost in his fight. Nothing much, buddy, Kaminari said. Verdant just put you to sleep and later chained you in a 6-floor deep underground prison. And I doubt a rubber boy is coming to save you either, Zero said. He wondered if all the people on his team had died during the operation or if they were able to escape because it was clear the mission had failed since Verdant Emperor was sitting in front of him. Good observation, Mr. Obvious, Shinso remarked. Next, he is going to figure out that he is imprisoned. These were all of the thoughts that went through Lumillion's mind as he watched Izuku Midoriya aka Verdant Emperor examine him as he sat in the cell. Lumillion wondered if he was going to die in all honesty. Verdant should actually kill him, Stain said. Not only is this fake risk to his plan but to his life as well. No, I don't think I will do that, Izuku said. There is no benefit in killing him, and besides it will look good if we let him live even after him coming for my life. To talk is why I am here and what I want. Well, let's say I am interested to learn your viewpoints on the world, Izuku said as he sat there watching and reading the body language of Lumillion. Though first I want to ask you the question again. Are you a soldier or a hero? Izuku asked as he waited for Lumillion to answer the question because it made all the difference in how Lumillion should be acting. Why does it even matter? Mirio bitterly mumbled, I am out of the war anyhow, asterisk. If he was a hero then he should be denouncing the government's actions and looking into the crimes that they had leaked and the entire war started since those that caused it are still in power. Do they really have power though? Momo asked. I mean, more than half of the country is lost, most of their men either are dead or imprisoned and a large number of the population is on Verdant's side. All they have is a big office which I am pretty sure is under the bug lady's surveillance. Hell, even Endeavor is only in the hospital and hasn't been arrested formally as he should be. Touch, Dabi said. However, if Lumillion is a soldier then Izuku could understand his need to follow orders as he wasn't his own master of his life but just a puppet that had to obey the government, unlike the heroes who could just resign and say no to the government. I am not a puppet, Mirio said to himself, that's right. I just thought that putting the entire country's future into a villain's hands is not the right thing to do. Taking Hawks as an example, who used to be a pro-hero but now he works in the Verdant-controlled lands as an agent with the police. He goes around saving people under the police authority but with more clear guidelines and transparency of his job. That sounds nice, Hawk said with a faint smile on his lips. In truth, about a quarter of the pro-heroes that were stranded in the Verdant-controlled land had ended up joining the police force and started to undergo training to comply with the new rules and regulations that they were putting in place. What's so amazing about it? Night Eye asked. Even lions can be tamed under the fear of whips. Comparing humans to caged animals really gives an example of your keen intellect, Nezu said. Some things included body cameras that had to be placed on their bodies whenever they were on duty or acting with the authority of their position. There was also a more standardized uniform that was tailored to meet individual quirks as well. Standardized uniforms will also bring down the absurd amount of prices that support companies charge for specialized hero costumes, Momo said. Overall, this new unit of the police's job was to handle large issues, and if they encountered small issues they were meant to try to resolve the issue without quirk usage first. The police responded more to most things and had the authority to use their quirks as well if the individual in the incident couldn't be subdued without quirk usage. We need this rule in our world as well, Aizawa said. I have seen many new heroes going overboard with their quirks when there was absolutely no need for them to use it in the first place. However, everything was far more transparent in regard to police actions. There was also far less crime as well since people were permitted to use their quirks if they obtained permits from the police department. Please bring this law as well, Ochako said. I can't imagine how useful my quirk could have been in day-to-day life. Overall, Izuku saw the society that was under his control improving far better even though the overall structure of the government was the same as the previous government with only some changes. As such, he truly wondered how Lumillion could still see him as a villain when this was a war of freedom. But it cost so many lives, Mirio said. Listen Mirio, you know how many people lose their lives during hero-villain fights? Just because the media doesn't mention casualties doesn't make them go away, Izuku said exasperatedly. Lumillion finally answered as all the previous thoughts had gone through Izuku's head as he waited for the answer. I am a pro-hero and one day you will be stopped, Lumillion said, and Izuku sighed in disappointment. Man, he is more delusional than my crack addict uncle, Zero said. I am disappointed. If you were acting as a soldier then I could understand your actions, but you claim you're a hero when you are trying to discriminate against and oppress people. I truly wondered if the past users would think of you because from what I see you are the villain in this story, not me. Izuku said, and Lumilin's eyes widened as he called what Izuku said bullshit and that he wasn't a villain. If you think you are right then stop throwing tantrums and prove him wrong, Dabi said with an annoyed frown. Izuku raised an eyebrow and asked how he wasn't a villain when he is supporting an oppressive government that wants to keep control against the people's wishes. Half of the country already supports the Verdant group and our side in the civil war. The hero system will come to an end even if I lost, most likely due to how much people have come to hate it, as I've only exposed more of the crimes they committed and the commission has only made matters worse with their actions. Izuku said. That is indeed true, Nezu said, even if Verdant loses this war, people will still demand change in the system. Not only that, but since people have seen how Verdant's model of public safety works, they will want something similar if not exactly that, Naomasa added. Lumilin said that the people are only blind because they are going to be giving up their freedoms once the war was over, since Izuku wanted to be an emperor, which would result in their freedoms being ripped from them. Izuku was stunned silent for a moment as he looked back at his Verdant guards, who just shrugged since they were confused about where that bull crap that came out of Lumilin's mouth came from. Izuku slammed his head into his hand and groaned, where did he get that idea from? I don't know, and at this point, I am too afraid to ask, Shinso replied. I truly wondered where you heard that, since it's complete bullshit. Indeed, I will be an emperor of Japan, but there is already a current emperor of Japan as well. They just play a more symbolic role while I will play a more active role to push the country away from thinking always about quirks and to focus on advancing our technology to one day hopefully aim for what humans should be aiming for. Izuku said. Communism? Sue asked. No, not communism. Izuku frantically shook his head. Geez, at least wait for Verdant's explanation before assuming things. Lumilin asked him what they should be aiming for and Izuku pointed upwards, which confused Lumilin. The stars. Humans would have long escaped to spaces if quirks didn't arrive when they did and abuse them. Instead of using quirks to help ourselves advance, we became trapped with them, but I want that to change. I want to change society to stop focusing on everything being about quirks and focus on turning to the stars so we can expand the human race. Just think about what quirks could do for us to expand into space, since there are quirks that allow plants to grow faster, things to be lifted far easier. Quirks were meant to help us expand and connect far more as humans, but like always the human race turned in on itself and attacked each other. Izuku said, as the Verdant guards were even surprised by Izuku's end goal. Oh, God. Yes. Yes. That's right, space travel. Ochako's face lit up as she beamed with a smile. How awesome it would be if he actually did it. I wouldn't let my hopes up if I were you, Knight, I said. Achieving space travel is not as easy as manipulating people into doing your dirty work. He will do it, Ochako said. No, forget about it. I want him to do it just so I can see your face when he does. In truth, Izuku has shared a bit about his true end goals in the far future once he conquered Japan and stabilized it, but now he had clearly stated it and they could feel the feelings that Izuku felt when they thought about it. You can definitely do it, buddy, we believe in you, Himiko said. Indeed, if they used their quirks to help them advance, then they could be in space within a few years. Just take the Verdant group for example. For twice as his quirk would make creating bases on another planet so easy, since they could just get a few people to the location and then boom, they had an entire army of clones to do the work. That certainly is a fascinating way of using twice quirk, Nezu said. It also negates the risk of casualties in unforeseen situations. Then there were the teleportation gates they had already created, which if they could turn to work in space as well would also easier travel to space. Oh. We are again going to see interesting parts of this story, Mei said as she happily skipped back to her seat. You mean whatever happened till now wasn't interesting? Jiro asked. Not really, Mei shrugged while others looked at her with an exasperated expression. The building blocks of the future were there, but the current society was resisting the direction they should be going in. The society is resisting this stupid idea because it is useless, Night Eye scoffed, and why would anyone waste quirks like cloning and teleportation on something so useless and expensive when they can be making heroes' lives easier? Shut the hell up, Buzzkiller, Bakugo growled in annoyance. The only useless thing I see here is that high and mighty attitude of yours. Lumilin was downright stunned at what he heard from the person in front of him. Verdant Emperor aka Izuku Midoriya wanted to push the human race to explore space. He thought Midoriya was crazy, but yet even he had to admit he had feelings of wanting to explore space and go there as well. But what about all of the people that were being killed in this war? What about all of the people that the Verdant Emperor was going to harm? Lumilin decided to ask these questions to Verdant Emperor and see his response. Finally, Izuku exasperatedly said as he threw his hands in the air, he decided to converse instead of outright blaming me for everything that is wrong in the world. Indeed, many have already died in the war and more will continue to die until I can bring the government to its knees. Civil wars and revolutionary wars are never bloodless. It's impossible for that to happen. In regards to harming people, then I have no idea what you mean, since even in my own group I have only harmed 2 people due to their actions against the organization. Izuku said as he went on to explain how the overall government is more or less the same in the land he controlled, but it had better laws and rules put into place. Overall, the democratic state of Japan in his controlled lands hadn't changed. There was an entire new Diet Assembly that he created with individuals from each prefecture that he took under control, but instead of a prime minister, there was the emperor, which was Izuku. So, he made a system where every civil worker is answerable to one person, Aizawa said. Not 1 but 2, All Might said. He made most of the government work public, which means they are answerable to not only him but to the public as well. Izuku even provided physical paper documents of reports from the different prefectures that showed how the government in his land was being run, as it showed a drop in most crime while an uptick in productivity, as Izuku had already started his far future plans in some areas, as he was having people prepare the materials for his future goals, such as a base on the moon, which would be the starting position, to launch into the rest of space itself, since it would be easier teleporting to the moon, instead of using rockets and escaping Earth gravity. By this point, Ochako was shaking with excitement. And somewhere in her mind she couldn't help but felt jealous that other Ochako might get a chance to fulfill her dream of going to space sooner than her. Izuku decided to end the conversation with Lumilin, who looked to be in a state of shock. I think it's time to end the conversations here for now. I hope you can somewhat enjoy your stay here in prison, since you won't be released until the war is over. I will warn you now not to try to escape, since you won't like the end result of what I will be forced to do to you if you do try to cause problems for me. Once this war is over, all prisoners who haven't been captured will be released to return to their loved ones and start a normal life. Izuku said as he stood up. Mr. Compress took the chair away. At least as normal as they could be, How Dog said. After all, fighting a war and then getting imprisoned for a long amount of time is bound to affect their mental state in some capacity. Lumilin broke out of his shock and asked what would happen if he did try to escape, and Izuku looked at him. It won't be a death sentence if that is what you are worried about, but I will ensure you won't be able to pose any meaningful threats to the future I wish to build for Japan and the world, Izuku said as he walked away with his verdant guards as other guards started their patrol in the area of the prison again. He will eradicate one for all if I tried anything, Mirio grumbled under his breath. Lumilin just sat there in shock and yelled out as he asked how long he has been in the prison, for which he heard a shout back that he had been there for a few days already, which made Lumilin a bit depressed that he had been asleep for so many days. What is he mad about? Mina asked. I will sacrifice anything just to get a chance to sleep like that. I don't think that was the point, Jiro said with a tired sigh. While all this went on, All Might was sitting inside the UA meeting room as he was listening to Nezu and the other staff talk. So is bug user, Momo giggled. By now, even Kaminari would have guessed that as well, Jiro said while Kaminari looked offended. Nezu had called an emergency meeting due to the implications of Verdant taking over Aichi, which was right next to them. Though, All Might's mind was on other things, since he has been told that Lumilin had been reported Kia, since the people on the field had taken Izuku's words in meaning that Lumilin was killed by the Verdant Emperor. That's surprising. I thought for you, Mirio's fate will be an afterthought, Night I said, but what's more surprising is that you still refuse to see the true nature of Mitter, Verdant. You have point there, Night I, All Might said. I am bad at understanding people's true selves. But because of that very nature, we were friends for so long. Though, All Might for some reason felt as if Lumilin was still alive regardless of the reports he was given, which made him feel strange on if Lumilin was truly dead or not. Of course, you would have known if he is dead or alive, Izuku said. All the users of One for All are connected through the vestige after all. Then All Might snapped out of his thoughts when Nezu called his name. All Might, are you paying attention? Nezu asked, and All Might apologized and said he got lost in his thoughts. Look at that, even there you are picking some of Midoriya's habits, Gran smirked at his student while All Might blushed a little. Nezu then started to repeat what he said, and All Might heard it this time. Nezu was considering having UA surrender to the Verdant group, as it was only a matter of time before the Verdant Emperor took over Shizuoka due to how close they were. Great. First, you allow quirkless students to apply for the hero course. Then you add an off switch to robots so that non-combat related quirks can have a chance to pass the exam, and now you want to just give up the school and surrender to that criminal, Night I raged. Giving you full control of the school was a mistake. Glad you finally understand, Nezu said with a calm smile, little too calm for someone who was just insulted. Now shut up and let others watch the show. Shinso on the other hand was looking at the interaction with a stunned expression as he mumbled, there were off switches. Duh, Toru said, do you really think I have the power to smash robots with my bare hands? There was also the issue of the government forces becoming spread thin. All Might didn't know what he really wanted them to do, because he wished the war would just come to an end, as this war had already claimed so many lives of over several 100,000. Thanks to certain someone, Night Eye said as he glared at Izuku, who just shrugged because at this point saying anything to Night Eye was pointless. Nezu, we could consider reaching out to Verdant and trying to work out some peace deal that would meet their needs for a surrender since they have gained 27% of Japan. All Might suggested in hopes of finding a way to end the war easier. However, Nezu shook his head and said it wouldn't work since Verdant Emperor wouldn't surrender a war he was winning. Of course, we won't, Dabi said, and at this point, no one is going to accept our surrender. The moment we show ourselves to them, they will take our head. I don't have concrete proof, but from what I can see based on what I found is that they control more than 27% of Japan. They control more like over 50% of Japan but just haven't publicly claimed it yet. Nezu said, shocking the entire room as they asked him what he meant. That they control more land than they are letting on, Shinso said. Did everyone hit their head or something? Nezu then displayed a map and highlighted everything he assumed was under Verdant control, which included their own prefecture, which didn't make sense to them. From what I can gather, they take control of the underworld of a prefecture first before making public moves. If we look at the crime drops, then it shows they had these prefectures under control far before the war started and we never noticed. They only started to make their public display once the war started after you fell, All Might. In truth, of the 47 prefectures, I believe they have 25 of them being in their control, but it could even be higher now since the fall of Aichi, which allows them to expand even further publicly. Nezu said as he showed the crime drops in the prefectures and then the areas that the Verdant group took over, which had some parallels. So finally Nezu found out about our little trick, Izuku said with little disappointment. But the time I took to decode this tactic is far too much for my liking, Nezu said. As such, Izuku Midoriya already controls over half of Japan, so there is no reason for him to surrender a war that he almost has completed. We also don't know his end goals for what he will want to do after all of this is over. Nezu said, and they all last there in silence. Space travel, Mei said excitedly. I am so excited to see all the babies they have created for this. All Might looked at the map and suddenly he had an idea that would allow UA to help speed the war on a bit, but also try to figure out what the Verdant group will do after they won the war and stabilized the country. I don't think punching him hard will give you the answers you are looking for, Aizawa said with a shit-eating grin. I wasn't going to suggest that, All Might said, sounding a little offended, and it's not like I solve all my problems by punching them. Nezu, how about we reach out to them and surrender in a sense if they publicly claim our prefecture? It would allow us a way to not fight them when they come knocking, and the government couldn't be able to do much against us either. We could also use it as a way to figure out more about their future plans as well. All Might suggested as he caught the entire room's attention with his suggestion. See? I can come up with great ideas, All Might said with a proud smile. Yeah, like the one you gave me when I first received my quirk, Izuku said with a mischievous smile. What was that again? Ah, young Midoriya. We can talk about our fond memories at later time, let's not waste other people's time, All Might said as he was receiving a death glare from Gran. They were downright shocked to hear the former symbol of peace suggest they surrender. They thought he would be one of the people supporting the government, and it was at that moment All Might realized that they didn't know he no longer supported the government in his mind. See Toshi, even your co-workers are surprised that you are willing to surrender to a villain, Night Eye said. Things like these really make you wonder if the symbol of peace I saw was the quirk or the man who was welding that. Sorry to disappoint you, but maybe the image you created about me in your head was just a fantasy and I was just a normal human with opinions and biases all this time, All Might replied. Verdant broke your belief in our current government, didn't he? Nezu asked, and All Might nodded his head. I always thought I was fighting for peace and justice, but what the government had done behind closed doors makes me sick of them. What has happened with discrimination, which I turned a blind eye to, also makes me sick. I find myself wanting to put my belief in Izuku Midoriya that he can make this country go on a better path. There are the risks of him becoming a ruthless ruler, yes, but isn't our own hero commission and government ruthless as well, which we all saw when they tried to put an innocent woman to death on live TV? All Might said, and everyone was silent because they couldn't argue against their words. Izuku took a deep breath as he remembered the events of that episode. He will never agree with the choices Verdant made that day, but he will be damned if he allowed those events to repeat in his world as well. As such, UA started their plans on finding a way to reach out to UA and figuring out a peaceful surrender of the top hero school, which would be a large blow to the Japanese government. It certainly will, Nezu hummed in satisfaction. To them, it's like losing an entire branch of soldiers. Though, they didn't realize, like any other time, that the Verdant heard all of this, as the bug user was in shock at what she heard and quickly went to report it to her emperor, as he would want to hear of this. Told you, Momo said with a smug smile. Good for you, Jiro giggled at her antics. Then the screen turned black and the words appeared on the screen. EP.29, Conversations. To be continued. Intriguing. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Narrator Gray. As we opened the door to the Emperor's office, we could find Verdant Emperor aka Izuku Midoriya overlooking recent information about the organization and the changes that have happened after the stabilization of Aichi, as more villain organizations have submitted to the group in the prefectures that they didn't have under their control. At this point, most of the groups will join us or disband themselves, Compress said. Besides, I don't think there is anyone foolish enough to oppose us anymore. Dabi was able to take a handful of advanced teams and get all of the villain organizations in all of the green zones under Verdant control, which has resulted in a decent pump to the organization. Of course, only I am the one who is getting worked to the bone, Dabi groaned. Well, at least that version of you is working diligently. Totally unlike you, who spent all your time either sassing Shigaraki or mocking your teammates trying to get a reaction out of them, Himiko said. This means that there was only the yellow-marked land and Hokkaido left untouched by the Verdant organization, which wouldn't last much longer since clones of Dabi have already set off getting the villain groups under their control. Brat has no filter on his mouth, but at least he gets work done, Stain muttered to himself. Izuku currently believes that within the month they will have all of the criminal underworlds of Japan within their control and bring any organized crime to a complete standstill, as none of these villain organizations have any reason to keep committing crimes once they join the organization due to the pay and jobs they receive via the organization. Okay, if that happens, the government will have to take notice that something is going on in the criminal world of this country, Jiro said. I mean, you can't just ignore the fact that the criminals are just quiet and are not taking advantage of so much chaos around them. You present an excellent point, Jiro, but unfortunately, no matter how many flags you wave in front of a blind person, they are never going to see it, Nezu said, and in this case, the blindness is self-inflicted in the first place. After taking all of the green-marked lands around Tokyo, the group now has a member count of 3 million members, with the combat cable of the organization's 3 million members being at around 1,500,000. Izuku was downright happy with the progress and knew he wouldn't receive much more members due to the lack of high amount of crimes committed in the rest of the prefectures, since most of the land is farming land with cities spread out, unlike in areas around Tokyo which are heavily populated. So in return, it will be quite easy for them to acquire these lands as well, Aizawa said. Which means that very soon they will have total control over all the criminal world of the nation, Endeavor said, and with that out of the way, Verdant will be able to focus all his attention on officially taking over the country. So, we are in the endgame now, Hawk said. Seems like it, Izuku absent-mindedly replied. To think we are almost done claiming all of the underworlds, which means we have partial control of all of the land. We just need to take them all publicly. Izuku thought as he sat there going over everything, but then his door suddenly burst open as he reached for a gun hidden under his desk. Who? Calm down here, John Wick. No need to immediately grab your gun, is it? Kaminari said as he eyes Izuku worriedly. In response, Izuku just shrugged and said, someone already tried to take my head. So I am not taking any more chances with my life. Now if only you could develop this attitude while fighting villains, how good that would be, Ochako said as she narrowed her eyes at him. Izuku just averted his eyes and said, yeah, it would be amazing. Izuku then relaxed when he saw it was the bug user that belonged to the spy network who looked frantic. Is something the matter? Izuku asked calmly, but inside he was a bit anxious about the government having launched any desperate attempts on getting land back. And here I thought, you were this unhinged leader who feared nothing and has the ability to bulldoze over all your problems, Shinso said. I don't know where you got that from, but as far as I can tell, I am just a human who is afraid to lose all of this now that I have come this far because of one silly mistake, Izuku explained. Izuku knew the government has been reaching out to foreign nations to get reinforcements to support their side in the war, and some nations have agreed to send supplies, but so far no one has agreed to send any physical men to fight in the war, which Izuku was glad at, since it would be a clear indication that a nation was hostile to the Verdant group and would need to be dealt with likely in the future. Of course, as expected from those honorless foreigners, Night Eye said, those bastards are trying to not get Verdant's bad side instead of uniting against this big evil. My Emperor, I looked into UA since my bugs reported that they had a meeting scheduled, and I listened in, which resulted in hearing a conversation that the Verdant guards should hear with you, as it will have a major impact on some plans, said the bug user. Nezuko nodded his head as he called for the main bodies of his Verdant guards to be present for the meeting in 10 minutes. My Emperor, huh? Himiko asked with an amused smile. It seems there are more ladies around Izuku who want to get his favor. Please stop. Izuku said with a red face. Hearing her say, my Emperor, was already embarrassing enough. Izuku then headed over to the meeting rooms and prepared himself for any major changes in his plans based on what UA has done. Izuku truly hoped the school hasn't decided to violate the neutrality conditions that he set out, but if they did he would be forced to make an example of them. Many teachers and students audibly gulped at that. Because they knew that Verdant's brain really worked in creative ways when it comes to punishing people who betrayed his trust, and they really didn't want to find out what will he do to the entire establishment of future heroes if they did that. All of the Verdant guards arrived in the room and Stain asked why they had an unplanned meeting. Izuku just looked at the bug user as she had gotten the other quirk user that projects her memories. I really wish these two were in our class right now, Kaminari said, that way we could have sent these two to watch movies, and they would have projected them for all of us that too free of cost. That's actually genius, Mina said, that way we could have saved a lot of our money. They then sat there in silence as they watched the UA meeting that had taken place a bit ago, as UA decided to surrender if Verdant could take control of Shizuoka since it would be under their controlled land. They also heard the other parts of the conversation of where All Might suggested finding out about what are Izuku's long-term goals after the war was over. Do you think by the end of this Nezu will figure out that he has been spied on? Mike asked, to which Aizawa just shrugged and replied. The only way for him to figure this out is for him to find it on his own. Otherwise, I highly doubt that Verdant is going to inform him about the bugs or the quirk user on his own. The meeting room was in stunned silence, then Izuku broke out into laughter. Well, it seems Nezu finally figured out what land we had under our control, but sadly for him it's far too late as we lack control of about only 15% of Japan's underworld. I think it's about time we start taking more public land as well, though I am interested in their proposal they may give. Izuku said as all of the Verdant guards nodded their heads as well since they were interested as well. Of course, we are interested. U.A and All Might's support will give us a much-needed boost in public eyes, and many from the anti-Verdant crowd will also give us a chance, Izuku said. It would be a large blow to Japan if UA was to surrender to the Verdant group. It would also do well to spread out and thin the defense line of the government in the north as well, since it would be a far bigger defense line that they would need to defend on, and they might be forced to take forces from the south defense lines of the pink and gray marked lands, which had a bit more forces concentrated due to the smaller areas they need to defend, which is mainly ports. Also, the waters are patrolled heavily by the navy, which the Verdant group is still taking control of right now and only has a portion replaced with clones. In this case little is better than nothing, Momo said, because in worst case scenario, Verdant can use the navy's own ships against them. Let's look for a chance to prompt contact between us and them, though I don't want to tip them off on our abilities to spy on them, so it will be tough, Izuku said, and they all nodded their heads, but the bug user suggested an idea. Sir, you have Lumilin in lockup right now, she said, and they all looked at her confused since they knew that. Izuku asked her to explain, which she did. From the reports we have, the government thinks that he was killed in action, which would have been reported to UA. As such, you could use that as a chance to tell All Might that his protege is still alive, said the bug user, and they all widened their eyes since that was correct. You know, any more of this, and I will honestly start thinking that this woman is an avatar of God sent here to aid Verdant in his conquest, Dabi said. Consider yourself lucky that Shiozaki isn't her at the moment, otherwise she would have wrapped you in her vines and turned you into a mosquito net, Izuku said. It wasn't really him being the protege, but one for all as well, since only the Verdant guards, the bug user, and the memory projector quirk user knows about the quirk inside of the organization outside of Izuku, since he wanted to keep it a tight secret since he didn't want the public getting hope of a new All Might. Trying to take away people's hope, how despicable, Mirio thought to himself as he glared at the screen. Good idea. Izuku said as he started to think of a plan to reach out to the school without blowing their main base location or anything really important to them. There was also the risk of them being tracked down as well via the heroes if they were brought to any location. You think they will straight away bomb the place if they found out that it's their main base? Nemuri asked. Honestly, I can see them bombing the place and later claiming that it was an accident on Verdant's part, Mike replied. The Verdant guards and Izuku sat in the meeting room for a while before taking a break, which they would regroup later in the day, since this would be a plan they would need to think out, since there were a lot of risks of the government getting some clues as well, since Izuku was sure the government was watching UA after the last team up they did with Verdant for the raid on Overhaul's group. Oh, they definitely are, Nezu said. After all, those control freaks will never allow someone superiorly intelligent than them to run such an influential establishment on their own. Everyone met up again later that night and some ideas were thrown around in regard to what they should do. Overall, they would send a clone of Toga to deliver the news that Mirio is indeed still alive, which should promote UA to ask for a way to contact the Verdant group. It would seem weird if the Verdant group were to be the ones to provide the number first, so they needed to wait for UA to ask for it. They are going to force U.A to make all the moves and take all the initiatives for this collaboration, Aizawa said, which will also paint the picture that the U.A is the one who is more desperate to get on Verdant's good side. Once a method of contact was established, then they would use the base that was hidden near UA as a meeting place. It was decided to abandon the base as well as they would remove every single thing from the base except basic things for the meeting and future meetings to take place there. I guess we really need a proper place to hold meetings with outside parties, Izuku said. I don't know why they are only getting it now when this should have been on the priority list, Aizawa remarked. Because no one from the outside world wanted to have a civil chat with us before this, Izuku replied. They would also remove the gate that was connected to the base as well and only use manual portals via the teleporter gate user to access it from other bases, as it would be a risk to leave the gate technology in the base. Yeah, I would rather not reveal the existence of teleportation gates to the world as long as possible, Izuku said. The base could be abandoned due to the fact that as the group expanded, the layout they used for the base became really outdated since they needed larger bases, so they expanded the design to fit far more people and other things as well. The base was really only used for the sleeping quarters of troops as well, which could easily be transferred to a different base that had been set up in the prefecture. I honestly want to be this rich where I can just abandon my current home because it's too small for me, Ochako said. But we don't do that, Momo thought with a strained smile. Overall, they now had an initial plan created and it was time for it to kick off as Izuku had Toga send her clone the next day. The phone number they would provide connects with an encrypted phone that they had created thanks to all of the Meta Liberation Army technology that they gained, which helped expanded their communication systems. So MLA has access to high-end technology, Naomesa said while taking notes. In that case we might have to bring in some experienced hackers for this raid. The phone call would feed through one of their satellites and block anyone from tracing it back, but even if they did they wouldn't find an actual base since the phone conversation was going to take place inside of the abandoned base with another phone near it, so they could listen to it and respond. Clones would be stationed inside of the base as well just to keep appearances up as well during phone conversations and even during meetings. I feel, Verdant will be a good choice to direct the sequel of The Truman Show, All Might snickered to himself. Early in the morning as the sun was rising and the students were on their way to their classes, a clone of Toga who had taken the appearance of a random person that they had secured blood of walked up to the gate and pressed the button on the intercom system. Hello, I am here for your car's extended warranty, Toga said. Seriously? Dabi groaned and asked, that meme died in 2020. A few seconds passed and the voice of Nezu came over. Hello, I am assuming you are Toga? Nezu said, and Toga let a smile go across her face as the principal was always able to guess it was her due to how she carried herself each time she came to deliver a message. And here I thought you were a master assassin, Dabi said mockingly. Sorry to disappoint you Toya, but in this case, my animal instincts are just too powerful, Nezu explained. Indeed, we wanted to pass a message along. Toga said, and Nezu said he would have a few staff come down and walk her in. After waiting a few minutes, Toga saw the gates open, and there stood Eraserhead, Vlad King, and Ectoplasm with a few of his clones. Oh. Come on, Himiko said with a pout, so much security for a little old harmless girl like me. Harmless? Is she serious? Ochako and Tsu thought to themselves. They escorted her to the meeting room where she found the staff of UA waiting for her. Oh my, don't you all have classes to teach? Toga asked in a teasing manner. The students can wait for a bit while we hear the message you are here to deliver, Nezu said. Now that she said it, it does look absurd to have so many teachers present here when we already know that this most likely is another one of those clones, Namuri said. Namuri, although you made a pretty good assessment based on our previous encounters, it is always good to have extra help at hand in case something went wrong, Nezu explained. Toga looked around for All Might but didn't find him. I believe we are missing All Might. Toga asked, which caused them all to raise an eyebrow on why Toga wanted All Might in the room. Nezu decided to speak up first, and he explained that All Might was watching over 1A currently as they were doing an early morning physical training, which made Toga nodded her head since it did confirm what they already knew from the bugs that spied on them. How fascinating, Night Eye said mockingly, even though you have decided that you are going to surrender to that villain, you are still maintaining the facade that this is a school for upcoming heroes. I am honestly glad you liked something in these, Izuku said mockingly. You moron, Night Eye grumbled, I wasn't praising them. Oh. Is that so? Izuku asked, because more than often I hear unpleasant sounds whenever you speak, Izuku said, which angered Night Eye even more. Well, the message I was sent to deliver really was meant for him primary, so that complicates it, Toga said as she shrugged and said they could pass it along if they wanted, but Nezu said they could take the meeting to All Might, which surprised Toga since that meant her being close to the other students. Great. Now we are compromising student safety, Night Eye said. Wait. Earlier you said that it was okay for us to go to war and now you are preaching to us about safety, Nijire said. Those two are different things, Night Eye retorted. Oh, you will let a member of the opposing side in a war near your students, doesn't that seem a bit dangerous? Toga asked, and Nezu said that he still believes Verdant Emperor's deal of UA being neutral on campus was in effect and the students she would be near don't have provisional licenses either yet. Sir, with all due respect, aren't you a little too trusting? Mirio asked, like, what is stopping them from breaking their word and using Compress's quirk to bring their top killers into the school? First of all, Mirio, trust is an important currency you build over time, and second, what good it will bring to Verdant's side by attacking us at this stage in their campaign, Nezu explained. Indeed, that deal is still in place, Toga confirmed as they decided to lead her out to the gym area where the 1A students were working out currently under the guidance of All Might. As the staff and Toga entered the gym, students and All Might was shocked to see Toga, who had removed her disguise already and went back to her main face since it didn't matter since they have seen it already. Also, she was only a clone that could break down at any moment she wanted as well, so it didn't matter. Cog Master Spy Cough, Dobby said. Yeah, I get what you are trying to say, but my entire quirk revolves around taking other people's identities, so people knowing how I really look doesn't really matter to me, Himiko explained. Everyone seemed a bit tense, but All Might walked over to her as Nezu spoke up. All Might, the Verdant wanted to give us a message from them. It's mainly directed towards you as well, so you need to be present for it. Nezu said, and Toga nodded her head as she faced All Might. Our spy network shows the government has reported Lumilin as Kia when in fact he is alive still. Toga said, and All Might and everyone else's eyes widened at the information. Not that it matters anyways, Mirio said, I am still in the prison, unable to help people. But it does, Nijire said, to me, to Tamaki, to our classmates, and all the people you have helped. That brought a little smile to Mirio's face. Thank you, for lifting my spirits, Mirio said, and Nijire showed him a thumbs up with a big smile on her face. Of course, we won't be releasing him anytime soon since you know why, All Might. However, my emperor wanted to inform you that as long as Lumilin plays nice in prison and doesn't cause problems, then he will be released once the war is over to return to a normal life, Toga said, and at that Nezu spoke up, since there has been some concern by the country and world on what has happened to all of the prisoners that surrendered to Verdant during battle. Nezu asked Toga what happened to all of them, and Toga nodded her head. I wasn't sent here to talk about that, but I am sure my emperor won't mind since there isn't anything you can do about it. Toga said, and a bit of fear was placed in their minds since they wondered what happened to all of the heroes and soldiers that got captured. Great work, nerd, you choose a great person to be your representative, Bakugo said. At least she doesn't say kill and murder after every sentence, Izuku defended. Really, Bakugo raised his brow, you are going to take that low-hanging fruit. And here I thought you had better comebacks recently. Oh. I have a lot of things I could have said, but that would have ruined your reputation and the mood of the room, isn't that right? Izuku asked. Yeah, on second thought let's leave it at that, Bakugo sighed. They are all fine and will be released once the war is over. Now, if a top-level government official was captured, then they might be held even after the war is over, but everyone else will be freed once the war is over. They are being given 3 meals a day and everything else inside the prison we are holding them in. The living conditions are also decent as well, since we don't want them causing problems after they are released either, so they are well taken care of and are provided any care they need. Toga said, which calmed them all down. Honestly, at this point, all we have to do is open a window in their cells and we could charge them for a decent ocean view hotel room, Compress said. Toga was about to say that she would be leaving, but before she was able to, Nezu spoke up and asked if there was any way for them to get in contact with them if they wished to speak about any matters. Toga looked at Nezu and then the other staff as she put on a display of thinking about it. When she was thrilled, they asked. Wow, Himiko, you act so well. Izuku rolled his eyes. Are you really sure you don't need Oscar for it? Yeah, I don't need that, Himiko said. I would rather not get slapped on the stage. There is a number you can call since we aren't afraid of you trying to track it down. Not like it would matter since we are pretty damn good at covering our tracks, Toga said as she asked for a paper and pencil which a staff person provided. What is she even boasting about? Kaminari asked, didn't she flex enough already? Toga then wrote down a phone number to the phone that they wanted them to call. Now if you will excuse me, I have completed my tasks and will need to leave, Toga said as he broke her clone down and it disappeared as the staff just watched it happen. The students were shocked at everything they just heard, but Nezu told the staff to head to their classes as they would have a meeting in the afternoon during lunch. Great. There goes my peaceful lunch and quiet time, Aizawa grumbled under his breath. Then the screen turned black and the words appeared on the screen. EP.3 Intriguing. To be continued. Chapter End Notes. Merry Christmas. Wanted to post this at 12 tonight, but I am too impatient. Happy Holidays. Smiley face. Prelude to meeting. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. It had been about 2 weeks since Verdant had the message and phone number passed along to UA. You are surely taking your time, huh? Aizawa asked. Yes indeed, Nezu nodded his head. After all, I will have to make sure that every system is working as per their intended purposes before I leave the school grounds for an extended period of time. During this time Izuku had put a heavier focus on getting all other prefectures under his control. Dabi and the other Verdant guards have been hard at work to complete Izuku's desire and finally, they completed it on the second Friday since giving UA the number. Well, that was fast, Izuku said. You can thank me for that, Dabi said with a smug smile. Yeah we get it, you worked hard, Compress said with an annoyed frown. Izuku was a bit surprised when UA decided to wait a bit before making the phone call since they didn't want to do it right away as they needed some time to plan things out on what would happen once they surrendered to be under Verdant control. I hope something better than what we currently have, Mike said. Izuku was honestly interested in the conversations and had watched each meeting. They had to learn everything live instead of watching replays later on since he wanted to be prepared in the event they ever called out of the blue. You know, seeing Verdant spying on UA like that is giving me the feeling of a creepy ex who camps outside their ex-partner's house, Mina said. Mina, Jiro narrowed her eyes at the girl, please tell me you haven't done something like that. Of course not, Mina pouted, who do you think I am? Overall, Izuku's summary of UA's plan was that they wanted to negotiate for right to be one of the premier police academies that would push out highly trained individuals for the police force. So, UA wants to maintain their prestige and status as an Ivy League university, Endeavor said. That won't be a problem, Izuku said, since the UA already has the infrastructure and staff to provide that kind of education. UA wanted the right to be able to maintain some autonomy when it comes to controlling the school but would follow regulations on what the students need to be trained in for the police department if the hero course was converted. What kind of hypocrisy is that, Nezu? Night Eye asked, as far as I know, you don't allow anyone from the commission to even enter the school grounds but now you are agreeing with Verdant to put his regulations on your school. That's because I am pretty sure that Verdant won't just pick out suitable children and then turn them into state soldiers, Nezu replied. They also wanted the heroes associated with the school to be able to gain licenses to act as police agents like other heroes have been once they came under Verdant control. It's not like that many are left anyways, Aizawa said. As far as Izuku could see it was all things that he was willing to agree with as he did want to have an academy for the highly specialized police force agents that he needed. Honestly, I won't be surprised if at the end of this it is revealed that Nezu was conspiring with Verdant from the very beginning, Night Eye said. Sometimes I really wonder if using foresight really damages your eyes, Izuku said as he looked at Night Eye with pity in his eyes. What was that? Night Eye glared at him. I mean if Nezu was conspiring with me why would I be wary of him in my inner monologue? Izuku asked. Wow Aizu, it seems you are smarter than Mr. Glasses huh? Himiko said clearly trying to get a reaction out of Night Eye. Izuku glanced at Night Eye and shrugged, well, the bar was never that high, to begin with. So far he was already converting other hero schools into police academies with high standards that were being implemented. What does he mean by high standards? Kaminari asked, it is already so incredibly hard to get into hero schools. What's more, is he going to ask for our souls now? This means converting UA would be easier since the framework was already there and UA seemed completely open to it as well. Heh, Izuku smirked, that's what I said earlier. Yeah, and if you haven't noticed, his face resembles yours as well, Shinso rolled his eyes. Now, Izuku wasn't converting every single hero school into a police academy since he didn't plan to overrun the field of specialized units from these schools like what happened with the hero field where people got into it for fame and money. Instead, he was picking the schools that had better track records of pushing out highly decent heroes in the past due to their standards which Izuku was looking for. So far of the hundreds of hero schools he took over, only about 10 across all of the prefectures had been converted but they still weren't on the scale of UA in size. Just as I thought, Aizawa said, if you are going to keep your criteria so high then you will barely get 20 schools in an entire nation. Which in my opinion is a good thing, Namiri said, it will definitely help in the quality control. There was also the fact that the number of students in a class was being increased from the standard 20 for a hero class to around 40 per class. This was because the police worked as large teams most of the time and even though the specialized unit type police will sometimes work solo they will still need a heavy focus on teamwork. Great. Support characters were barely getting any screen time with 20 students and now you want 40 in a single class, Izuku rolled his eyes. What? Everyone asked. What? Instead of answering, Izuku looked at them as if they had said something weird right now. However, there was one major issue that was presented by converting the hero schools into police academies. It was the fact that most people that joined the police were typically out of high school already which meant that Izuku had planned to make the hero schools or some into universities instead of just high schools. So far the plan was working out since he had thought about it far in advance, and the current hero schools that were converted were given an education plan that matched the current police academies. What Izuku was planning to do was to convert larger hero schools like UA from high schools to universities where they would have the actual highly specialized training at. This way the smaller police academies would feed their students into the universities to receive specialized training and obtain higher level education on the way. So the people who are already working in the police department also have a chance to get into specialized forces, Naomesa said. That's actually great considering so many of my colleagues have very useful quirks which can be really useful in other fields. So if UA accepted to becoming a police academy, then they would need to convert into a university, and the teachers would need to prepare for that as they would be the ones teaching higher level classes. Great, that means I can officially say goodbye to my afternoon naps, Aizawa grumbled under his breath. The current students would be allowed to finish out their educations and then move into the higher level education section of the school, but once the current first-year students graduated out of high school, then there would be no more high school students going to it. The first-year students would also undergo the normal police education at UA if they accepted it, otherwise they would transfer to a different course, while those in upper years would need to attend other police academies to receive the basic training before returning to the university. Crap. So we have to put the double amount of work then, Kaminari said. Yeah, it's not fair, Mina said. Well, you always have the option to drop out and pursue a different career, Ribbit, Sue suggested. But I don't want to leave you guys, Mina said with a pout. Izuku had presented his overall plan for the highly specialized police force to the Verdant guards as well as a lot of the people high up in the police that is under Verdant control, since Izuku wanted their views on the overall plan since they would be having a say in it. At least someone is taking our opinion into consideration, Naomesa said with tears in his eyes. Hey All Might, Izuku whispered to his mentor, you should really take your friend out for a drink sometime. I think he can use a shoulder to vent on. Yeah, I will do that, All Might nodded. They liked the overall plan and were happy law enforcement was coming back to the police. They did question if schools like UA would accept since they didn't know of UA's possible surrender since they weren't in the loop. Izuku told them that it would happen even if UA didn't accept since hero schools would be removed, so it was become a police university or became a normal school, which even without knowing about Nezu's plans would be unlikely in Izuku's mind since Nezu would want to have a place in power to help shape the future. So at the end of the day, it is all about the power, isn't it? Night Eye said with a mocking smile. Yes, at some level it is about the power, Nezu said, but the big difference is how one uses this power. After all, the power never lasts with a single person forever. Another week had passed and Izuku had stabilized all of the prefecture's underworld under his control. Izuku was now literally the emperor of the underworld. Yeah, I am definitely going to have nightmares about this, All Might thought to himself. But that wasn't the end goal. No, Izuku was going to be the emperor of Japan and would lead the society of Japan into a brighter future which the rest of the world should hopefully follow. Well, only time will tell if you are all bark or if you can bite as well, Night Eye said. I just hope the research and development department can make the breakthrough I want soon for our future space exploration, since we need to be prepared to establish a moon base or the framework of one within a year or so after I stabilize Japan, since I want us to focus on moving forward towards space as humans should have. Izuku thought as he was going through his documents. Walking on the moon, Ochako said with the stars in her eyes, is like a dream come true. Suddenly Izuku had an idea in his mind that he knew will take a lot of time and preparation, but at the end of the day, he knew it will be worth it. As the hours passed, a knock came on his door as his mother walked in. Izuku smiled seeing her and she sat down. It feels like yesterday that you were coming home with bruises and scars, but now look at you, the emperor of the underworld and soon the emperor of Japan. Inko said as she sat across from Izuku. Yeah, not something I thought I will hear from Inko, not at least in this lifetime, Mitsuki said. Now, don't get Izuku wrong because he enjoys spending time with his mother, but the tone of voice is the type she uses when she wants to ask something important, so he knew she had a motive when she came into his office and didn't wait until he went to their home inside of the main base. Izuku sat straighter and asked her what she was needing since she clearly wants to talk about something important, which made her chuckle since Izuku had gotten so much better at reading her. Oh, Izuku. You know me quite well, Inko said while averting her eyes. Don't worry mom, Izuku said with a reassuring smile, I know whatever you have to say won't be that unreasonable. Indeed. Izuku, you know the moment you take over the area where UA is that you will run into the Bakugos, which means Katsuki Bakugo. I am here to see if you ever came up with an answer about what you are going to do in regards to him. Inko asked and Izuku froze because he had to admit he had forgotten everything about one Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku had so much more to focus on than his hatred and revenge for Bakugo that it had left his entire mind and body. And that's when Bakugo felt a weird burning sensation in his chest. He was always proud of his ability to grab attention with his strong quirk and his strong personality, but in that timeline, he was not even a side character. Hell, he was so unimportant that even the nerd forget about him. Yeah. He is going to need flex tape to reassemble his shattered ego. I don't know. I had forgotten all about him and my hatred until you mentioned it. I have had far bigger things to focus on than him. So I honestly don't know what to do about it. Izuku said, which made Inko nod her head and suggest that he get UA to bring the first years to the meeting whenever they call, since it would be better to deal with it sooner instead of later. Izuku thought it over and said he would talk it over with the Verdant guards. Inko, for the love of God. Please don't get my son killed, Mitsuki said. Don't worry, I know my Izuku will never kill Katsuki and I can promise you that, Inko said. It's not Izuku I am worried about, Mitsuki said, it's my brat who might get himself killed if they came across. I am not that bad, Bakugo grumbled under his breath. Another day passed and the topic was talked about with his Verdant guards. They all suggested that he invite 1A and 1B to the meeting as well, since they would be directly impacted by UA's surrender, since they wouldn't be heroes anymore but could go into the police training right away, since the school would only need to cram about a semester or so in, since the school is in the starting portion of the second semester. Finally we will get some relevance in this story, Kaminari said. Nope, I am good being no-name charter in the background, Jiro said. I don't want to go near the main story of this timeline even with a 2-foot-long pole in my hand. They also thought it was better to deal with his issues with Bakugo before they went further with other plans so Izuku didn't get distracted by it. Yeah, good idea, Mina said. Bakugo can be really distracting sometimes. No, I am not, Bakugo retorted while Kirishima, Shiro, Mina, and Kaminari gave him deadpan stares. As they were about to end the meeting, the bug user walked in and told them that UA had called the phone and was waiting for Izuku to answer. Izuku looked at his guards and they all nodded their heads. Well, it's finally time, Nezu said. Let's see who comes out more benefited from our little conference. They turned the phone in the meeting room onto the other phone at the base and the member on that side unmuted the burner phone. That number was given to UA. Hello, this is Verdant Emperor, Izuku said in his calm tone. A few seconds later Nezu speaks up and introduces everyone that is in the meeting with him. Izuku though could see all of them due to the bug user having her memories shown on the wall. Well, we are here on a burner phone while Verdant is on a video call, Namuri said in a tired tone. The unfairness in that world has reached the level where even Shota will sympathize with us. Though I would enjoy a normal phone call every once in a while, I don't anticipate this to be a typical Monday morning phone call, so I must ask. What is the reason you are calling Principal Nezu? Izuku asked as if he had no idea why they truly were calling. And now he is playing hard to get, Mina said. Is he sure he doesn't want to join the Mean Girls Club or something? The line was silent before Nezu spoke up once more. Verdant Emperor, UA would like to set a meeting up with you and your men, as UA would like to discuss the terms of UA's surrender due to the likelihood of you obtaining the prefecture we are located in within the coming months. Principal Nezu said right out the gate without hitting around the bush, which honestly shocked Izuku a bit that Nezu would outright admit it. Well, there is no point in staling this subject when our entire talks are going to be based around this, Nezu said. You are risking your life by admitting that on a phone call, Principal Nezu. Aren't you worried about anyone in the government finding out about this and replacing you before I take over the prefecture you are located in? Izuku asked. How good that will be if someone from the government found out and did just that, Night-Eye thought to himself. In response, he heard a chuckle from other side. I am not concerned since the government doesn't really have the forces to deal with UA right now due to how thin you made them spread out. I will also come clean and say I know you already control this prefecture in the underworld and you just haven't publicly claimed it since you are going for the moral hits on Japan's government and those that still support them since you are slowly taking the land. When you could likely make it much faster. Am I right? Nezu said, which earned a laugh out of Izuku and all of his Verdant guards, which made the other side silent. I was wondering when someone would call me out on it. You are indeed correct, Nezu, since I already do control your prefecture. Izuku said as he calmed down and waited for everyone else to calm down as well. I must be using all my willpower trying not to laugh right now, considering we already knew that Nezu knew that, Himiko said. Did you even understand what you just said right now? Izuku asked. Who cares, Himiko shrugged. I know I was right and that's what matters, to me. I am willing to have this meeting, Nezu, but I can't exactly walk out in the open to come to meet you at UA since the government would without a doubt not care to bomb UA if they knew I would be there for an extended period of time, Izuku said, and Nezu agreed since the Chimera wouldn't put it past the government to do it if they could get rid of Izuku and turn the war. And my head will only serve as a bonus for them, Nezu added. Nezu suggested Verdant pick a place to meet and Izuku went with it. I will send you coordinates to a location where I will have people come to get you in 2 days. They will then lead you to the place I will be located at. Will this be acceptable? Izuku asked and Nezu just agreed. Sir, I have a question, Momo said, and Nezu nodded. Why not pick a neutral place instead of going to Verdant's base? Because right now there is no such thing as a neutral palace in an entire Japan, Nezu explained. The entire country is divided between the Verdant group and government, which means the only option I had was to select between two evils and I choose the lesser one. But before the conversation came to an end, Izuku spoke up one more time. Nezu, I do hope you will bring 1A and 1B since this conversation will greatly impact their futures after all, Izuku said as he ended the phone conversation before Nezu could even say anything else, which made Izuku smile a bit. The Verdant guards just chuckled at what Izuku did and started to get prepared for the meeting in a few days. They would convert the base that they would be meeting at quickly and have everything ready. At first it was fun, but now seeing them having fun at our misery is flat out irritating, Mike complained. Serves you right, Aizawa said, if I can't have my afternoon naps, none of you deserve a quiet afternoon either. While Verdant started to get ready, the staff of UA sat in silence in the meeting room as they didn't know what to make of the Verdant Emperor's request, demand that they bring 1A and 1B. But Nezu and All Might both had an idea that they reminded everyone about. He is going to address the issue of Bakugo, isn't he? All Might said out loud, which Nezu just agreed, and this made everyone stiffen up. TSK, Bakugo clicked his tongue as the current scene reminded him of the time when he was kidnapped and Aizawa had to apologize to the world and convince everyone that he will never join villains. They now had to debate if they would bring the students with them and risk their lives. Vlad King spoke up and suggested making the meeting known to the students and let them choose to go or not. Those that were willing to go would go with them, but those that didn't would stay, since Vlad King mentioned that the deal of not touching non-provisional licensed heroes was still in effect, which Toga confirmed recently. See Hizashi, I always knew that Vlad is a better teacher than Aizawa, Namuri said as she tried to annoy Aizawa, but to her surprise Aizawa replied. That's true. Vlad is a better teacher than me, Aizawa said, I have no complaint about that. Sir, please don't say things that will make us doubt your ability to teach us, Ida said, to which Aizawa just shrugged. He shouldn't touch any of them outside of Bakugo most likely. If that happens we will need to make a choice then to anger the Verdant Emperor as we defend Bakugo or not. It puts us in a horrible position. Vlad King said, and they all nodded as they decided it would be best to make the students in the first year aware of the meeting and the offer for them to go. What do you mean by choosing between defending my son or not? Mitsuki roared, making Vlad King cower under her gaze. Soon, all of the first-year students were in the auditorium and asked why they were there. The staff sighed and explained what was going on. As it stands, UA will be entering negotiations with Verdant Emperor for our surrender, as they will likely take control of the Shizuoka prefecture within the next month or so. We wish to offer our surrender now to help ensure the survival of the school with whatever Verdant Emperor plans for hero schools after the fact, as we already know of some hero schools having been converted into police academies. However, the Verdant Emperor has requested that the first-year hero course students attend the meeting as well. Nezu said, and this caused surprise and shock to spread across the entire first-year course. Nezu raised his paw and they calmed down a bit, but Nezu could see that they were worried. Sometimes we really forgot that they are just kids, Namuri said in a guilty voice. None of them should have to face things that they faced in both that timeline and ours. Nezu then explained that the deal of not touching people without provisional licenses was in effect still, but Nezu had to be honest with his thoughts. In all honesty, we believe the request for the first years is meant to get Katsuki Bakugo within reach, which means if you go there is a chance you don't walk out alive, since you know of his hatred for you, Nezu said as he looked at Bakugo, who paled a bit but gripped his hands as all of his friends looked at him. Like hell I'm going to back down, Bakugo said, I am not a coward. If I live I live, and if I die I die. I will go. It's time I meet with him anyway, since it doesn't matter anyway when it happens because it will happen regardless. Better now under my own power rather than later being dragged to Zulu. Bakugo said as he used the former nickname he had for Izuku before Deku came about. For a solid moment, Izuku's entire life flashed before his eyes and his body shivered from the cringe. Then after recovering from it, he looked at Bakugo, who was going through a similar experience. And then in a sudden moment, they nodded at each other and made a silent contract to not mention that name ever again. Nezu sighed and nodded his head, but Bakugo asked if his parents could come along as well, to which Nezu said he would have to check with Verdant Emperor, but asked if Bakugo was sure since it meant they might see his possible death. Bakugo was sure because he knew they needed to know everything as well, and he hoped Zulu would allow them to see Inko Midoriya. Oya. What do you think I am, huh? Some cruel monster that will stop mom from meeting her friends, Izuku said, sounding a little offended. After some more talking they dismissed everyone and told them all to have a decision made by tomorrow afternoon. Then the screen turned black and the words appeared on the screen. EP.31, Prelude to Meeting. To be continued.